In the zero time zone dimension, there is nothing but void, no space, no time, no matter. A desolate emptiness where existence fades into non-existence. Normally, this endless vacuum is untouched by form or thought, but today, it is brimming with colossal, retrofuturistic structures. The sight is both awe-inspiring and unsettling, a mix of grandeur and decay. This is the Time Variance Authority, the TVA. Within its vast main office, a labyrinthine network of monitoring halls hums with activity. Here, countless timekeepers sit in uniform rows, their white shirts stark against the glowing monitors. These workers, almost mechanical in their routine, observe and regulate the sacred timeline, ensuring events unfold as dictated by the grand design. Day after day, year after year, their task remains unchanging. Until now. One of the timekeepers, a portly man with a perpetually tired expression, freezes mid-action. His screen flickers ominously. His eyes widen in shock, disbelief flashing across his face. He leans closer, rubbing his eyes to ensure he isn't hallucinating. But the truth is undeniable. A time branch has gone red. The red hue on the monitor signals a top-tier crisis, one that threatens the very fabric of the sacred timeline. Left unchecked, it could spiral into chaos and obliterate all order. Panic sets in. The timekeeper grabs the archaic red landline phone from his desk. The device feels oddly out of place in the sleek, futuristic setting, but its purpose is clear. After 3 heart-pounding seconds, he speaks urgently into the receiver. TC 02354 reporting. Supervisor, Time Branch, Red Crisis. A deep, authoritative voice responds from the other end, calm yet grave. Understood? #####3 minutes earlier, November 27, 2012. Night blankets a quiet port in Tennessee, but the calm is shattered by the chaos of battle. The air is thick with smoke, the scent of molten metal, and the echoes of explosions. Steel humanoid machines of various shapes descend relentlessly, their target a man radiating an unnatural, red-hot glow. Bang! 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 Iron Man's suits fall one by one under the brutal assault, reduced to debris. Finally, Tony Stark, battered and desperate, manages to encase his opponent, Killian, in one of his suits. With grim determination, he initiates the self-destruct protocol. The explosion is deafening. Flames engulf the area, casting eerie shadows on the water. But Tony's hope is short-lived. Through the smoke, Killian emerges, his body regenerating with molten precision. The extremist virus has rendered him nearly invincible. His limbs reform like flowing lava, his form more monstrous than human. This is true evolution, Killian taunts, his voice dripping with malice. Your metal toys are obsolete. Tony collapses to his knees, his resolve shattered. The words escape him in a broken murmur. I defeated the Chitauri, only to die at the hands of a man? Before he can process his impending doom, an unnatural sound fills the air, a crackling of golden lightning. Both Tony and Killian look up as the sky tears open. A rift appears, radiating golden energy, and from it, a blinding bolt of lightning strikes Killian. The impact is cataclysmic. Killian's body disintegrates, the molten flesh and bone dissolving into nothingness. When the light fades, Tony stares in shock at the figure lying on the scorched bridge where Killian once stood. A young man, dazed and disoriented, struggles to his feet. His clothes are charred, his expression one of utter confusion. This is Russell, who had been watching the serene sunrise atop Mount Tai moments before being struck by a golden lightning bolt. Now, he finds himself in a battlefield straight out of a nightmare. Russell looks around, his gaze falling on the bloodied steel bridge beneath him. The molten remains of Killian seep into the cracks, their glow dimming. What is this? Russell mutters, his voice trembling. Then, he hears a wet, guttural sound. Killian, barely alive, glares at him with a mixture of hatred and desperation. The villain spits a mouthful of magma-like blood, the searing liquid flying through the air. It lands on Tony Stark's arc reactor, melting through the delicate mechanism and into his chest. Tony's scream pierces the night, a sound of pure agony. In seconds, it's over. Iron Man is dead. Russell stands frozen, his mind struggling to process the horrific scene before him. His heart pounds as he stares at Tony's lifeless body. "No, this can't be real," Russell whispers, the words catching in his throat. And then, the realization hits him like a tidal wave. This isn't Earth. This is the Marvel Universe. More specifically, he is in the middle of Iron Man 3. But instead of witnessing the heroic survival of Tony Stark, he has somehow ended up in a timeline where the iconic hero's story ends prematurely. What the hell just happened? Russell mutters, dread settling in his gut. He doesn't have time to answer that question. The chaos is far from over. Russell froze as the mechanical voice echoed in his mind, a sound no one else seemed to hear. His heart raced as he tried to comprehend what was happening. Asterisk system? Looting? Mutating? Asterisk. The words made no sense, but they filled him with both dread and hope. He didn't have much time to think, as the TVA soldiers were already dragging him toward the portal. The voice continued, calm and mechanical, utterly indifferent to the chaos around him. Mutation successful. New abilities derived. Congratulations, host, on obtaining the following skills, asterisk, asterisk. Adaptive regeneration, green, accelerates healing by absorbing external energy. Circuit reconfiguration, purple, allows manipulation and enhancement of mechanical systems. Infernal core, blue-purple, converts absorbed energy into high-temperature plasma. Russell's mind reeled. Asterisk what? Is this some kind of cheat system? Asterisk. But there was no time to question it. The portal was just steps away, and the soldiers surrounding him were anything but patient. He glanced at the TVA troops, their weapons glowing faintly with power, and felt the weight of the time collar around his neck. Asterisk think, Russell. Think. You just got a new set of powers. How can you use them now? Asterisk. Suddenly, the infernal core ability caught his attention. High-temperature plasma, a dangerous idea, began to form in his mind. As the TVA guard holding him nudged him forward, Russell stumbled deliberately, falling to his knees. The soldiers barely reacted, assuming he was simply scared. But in that moment, he focused inward, willing the strange infernal core to activate. Energy absorption activated. The collar around his neck began to hum faintly. It wasn't much, but Russell could feel a trickle of power seeping into him, enough to create heat. The metal collar grew warmer against his skin, and he prayed the soldiers wouldn't notice. Move it, one guard barked, pulling him to his feet. The portal loomed closer. His window to act was shrinking. Now or never, he thought grimly. With a desperate burst of focus, Russell triggered the infernal core's output. A pulse of heat erupted from the collar, its energy surging outward in a blinding flash of molten plasma. The explosion wasn't massive, but it was enough. The guards holding him recoiled as the time collar shattered, sending sparks flying. Alarms blared, and the TVA soldiers scrambled, their orderly retreat descending into chaos. Russell wasted no time. He sprinted toward the edge of the bridge, his mind racing. Asterisk no plan, just run. Always run first, think later, asterisk. But the TVA wasn't about to let him go. One of the soldiers raised his baton, ready to hurl it like a spear. Russell's instincts kicked in, and before he could think, his circuit reconfiguration ability activated. The soldier's baton sparked and fizzled, its mechanisms jamming mid-throw. The guard stared at his malfunctioning weapon in disbelief. What the? Russell didn't stick around to hear the rest. He leapt off the edge of the bridge, the wind roaring in his ears as the dark waters below rushed up to meet him. When he surfaced moments later, gasping for air, the TVA soldiers were still on the bridge, scanning for him. The shattered collar must have made him temporarily invisible to their detection systems. He swam toward the shore, his body aching but alive. The abilities granted by the mysterious system had saved him, for now. As he dragged himself onto the muddy bank, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Welcome to the Marvel Universe, he muttered to himself, shivering in the cold night air. Where even the TVA wants me dead. But his relief was short-lived. The mechanical voice returned, as calm and indifferent as ever. Host survival confirmed. New mission detected. Repair the sacred timeline or face permanent erasure. Russell groaned. Great. Not only do I have powers I barely understand, but now I have to fix the timeline too? The sound of distant footsteps snapped him back to reality. The TVA wouldn't stop hunting him. If he wanted to survive, he'd need to learn to control his new abilities, and fast. For now, all he could do was run and hope that somewhere, somehow, he'd find a way to outwit the TVA and navigate the deadly chaos of this new world.
Hey, welcome to another audiobook on Quantum Audiobooks. Sorry to disturb you, but if you enjoy it, please make sure to subscribe. It motivates me to create more audiobooks like this. Also, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts about this novel audiobook in the comments below.
It was only a moment before the mechanical voice sounded again. The mutation was complete. Mechanical furnace, blue-purple, transformed into furnace heart, mutation. Russell had a blank expression on his face, and he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw from the corner of his eyes that the TVA soldiers around him did not react. It seems that the sound of this system can only be heard by himself. He couldn't help but get excited. Awakening system. In the Marvel world, the probability of survival is greatly increased. Even becoming stronger is not a dream? Perhaps this is the reward for not being willing to be ordinary. Russell forced himself to suppress his excitement, kept silent, kept his steps unchanged, and stepped into the portal with his demeanor. What he saw was a huge corridor, which was taller than what he saw in movies and TV shows, and the walls had a retro style of the last century. There were many employees in white shirts and some time guards coming and going. It looked very busy here. Russell pretended to be curious and looked around, but he used his mind to feel the 3 entries he had just plundered. Desperate virus, an entry from Killian. It has a strong self-healing ability, enhanced strength, and no fatal organs. It can also control high temperatures, up to 1800. At the same time, it also abandons its weaknesses, and will not be irritable, manic, crazy, or explode uncontrollably. Russell was delighted. This entry will undoubtedly increase his chances of surviving in the void and have a certain degree of self-protection, and this is only green. The rarity of the entry is white, blue, green, purple, gold, and red. He continued to sense knowledge curse, which is purple. The entry information appeared in his mind in an instant. Knowledge curse, a talent type entry. You have a strong understanding and learning ability for both technological and mysterious knowledge, and you have a certain degree of creativity. Russell was a little surprised. He didn't expect that Iron Man's entry would also work on the mysterious side. Doesn't this mean that he will have a strong magical talent? Although there is no combat power for the time being, in the long run, the gains brought by this entry will be unimaginable. No wonder it can be classified as purple. Russell looked at the last entry at this time. Heart of the Furnace, this is the only mutant entry. Its ability is to transform the heart into an energy core, which can continuously absorb free radiation atoms in the air for reaction and burst out powerful life force, and continue to transform the flesh and blood body imperceptibly to become more powerful, even amplify the power of the desperate virus. And this is not over yet. This mutant entry has another ability, Furnace Overload. When activated, the blood in the body can be used as fuel, converted into the purest energy, and can be used for energy ray attacks, body blessing, and spell casting, assuming you know spells. The ratio is 100 milligrams of blood are converted into 10 units of energy. Taking Doctor Strange's Vishanti sword as an example, each unit can be released 10 times. But once it is activated, it will not stop until 4/10 of the blood in the body is burned. The human body has 4,200 milliliters of blood, 4/10 is nearly 1,700 milliliters, and ordinary people will go into shock directly. Even if he has strong vitality, he will fall into weakness. In short, this is an explosive ability. Russell will not use it unless it is absolutely necessary. It is a trump card. In summary, he feels that this mutation entry is not weaker than the purple knowledge curse, and even better. What an unexpected surprise. After sighing in his heart, Russell loaded 3 entries without hesitation. There is no progress bar, and the power is loaded and completed in an instant. At this moment, he clearly felt the changes in his body, the power was surging in his blood, the world was clearer in his eyes, and his brain reacted faster. The time change situation has a ban on magic, but there is no limit on physical fitness itself. At this time, he only needs to use a little force to overturn the TVA soldiers who are holding him, but Russell did not act rashly, thinking that he was invincible. There are so many powerful time criminals in the Void Land, he does not think that TVA did it by sneak attack. According to comparative analysis, the power shown by TVA in Loki must be only a part of it. Besides, the time caller is very deadly. Unless you can grab the controller directly, there is no solution. Russell remembered the route and various information along the way. After taking the elevator down 25 floors, he came to the door of a closed room. The door is dark and there is no glass, so you can't see what's going on inside. Russell frowned slightly. He remembered that in the American TV series Loki, the process after Loki was caught was not like this. First, he was changed into clothes, read by the examiner, and finally judged by a female judge. But now it is obviously not the same process for him. Is it the time when Loki became a god? But looking at the murals in the corridor, there are still 3 lizardmen, so it should not have happened yet. At this time, a time guard opened the door, pushed Russell in, and then slammed it shut again. "Hello, sir, sit here." A warm voice came, and Russell looked up and saw a very simple table in the depths of the room of 200 or 300 square meters, with only something like a toaster on it. A man in a black suit, a grey tie, and grey hair sat on the left, and at this time made an invitation gesture with his right hand. "Mr. Paradox?" Russell recognized who this person was, but he didn't expect that the other party would join the company at this time. So it seems that Professor X's evil twin sister was not necessarily captured after Rocky 2. Russell deliberately acted cautiously and looked around. Then he carefully sat down opposite. "You are," he said cautiously. Mr. Paradox smiled slightly and said in a calm tone, "Don't worry, sir. Our Time Variance Administration is not an evil organization. We aim to protect the peace of the sacred timeline. In other words, we are actually good people." As he said that, he snapped his fingers, and a hole suddenly appeared in the bread machine on the table, projecting the origin, history, etc. of TVA on the wall. It was no different from what Russell saw in Loki. Until the projection ended, Mr. Paradox smiled and said, "This is TVA, so don't think we are targeting you on purpose. As long as you tell us your origins, we will check that. As long as you don't deliberately interfere with the timeline, we will send you back to your own time point." Sent to the void. Russell sneered in his heart. He knew what kind of stuff this guy was. If he had not awakened the system and gained power before, his choices would have been exile or complete destruction. But now, this is not a good choice. As a fugitive time offender, he obviously has more opportunities to plunder entries. And he is more free. And in TVA, he has to worry about the calculations of the people left behind. So running away and becoming a time offender is the only way out. But the premise is that he has to grab the TVA control tablet and the controller on his neck. Russell made a thoughtful expression, stood up and paced left and right along the edge of the table, and seemed to be unintentionally approaching the other side, as if he was considering it. Seeing this, Mr. Paradox did not urge or stop him. He just picked up the coffee in front of him and sipped it slowly with his head down, his whole face shrouded in shadows, and a meaningful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It was at this moment that Russell pounced at the speed that his body should have without evolution. "Tisk, can't you hold it back?" Paradox said with a smile, and pressed the other finger that had been in his pocket. In an instant, Russell's body flashed and returned to the position 5 seconds ago, sitting on the chair. He was a little confused, but he rushed towards Mr. Paradox again. But the latter just smiled slightly, took out the controller, and pressed it again when Russell's palm was about to touch him. In an instant, Russell flashed and sat on the chair again. But this time he didn't have the opportunity to rush out again, but froze in place, his eyes full of confusion and panic. Mr. Paradox pressed the pause button. Then he stood up, showing an elegant posture, looking down with an imperceptible condescending look and smiling. "Ah, I guessed you wouldn't be too honest. I forgot to tell you, as long as you wear the time collar, your time willy will control it. So, you just think about it here for a while." After saying that, Mr. Paradox put down the coffee in his hand and walked out leisurely. At this time, he could no longer see that the shadow deep in Russell's pupils had changed. From the initial shock, he turned into a deep calm, without even a trace of panic, as if everything was expected. Outside the door. After Mr. Paradox came out, he turned left and entered another room through the corridor. The walls here were filled with hundreds of old-fashioned large-head display screens, and more than a dozen timekeepers wearing special glasses were adjusting the screens at a rapid speed. As soon as he entered the door, he asked, "Taser, do you have any clues?" Tessirat, along with him, Mobius M, and Ouroboros, are all senior executives of the Time Change Bureau, led by the Grand Justice. "Absolutely nothing." Tessirat turned his head, frowned, and continued. "This person is like being born out of thin air, without any past or future, and any related human beings. This is unreasonable and unscientific." Mr. Paradox was also a little surprised to hear this. Although it was precisely because he could not find out the other party's origin that he had just acted as a good guy, he still found it hard to believe when he heard this result. This has never happened in TVA. This made him even more curious about the origin of the young man. After thinking for a while, he suggested, "Perhaps the observer can know. Why not let Mobius ask? If he makes a mistake, the Chief Justice will definitely forgive him. Of course, there are records of the time change by the observer. He is a high-dimensional creature active on the timeline and knows many secrets of the universe." Taser said solemnly, "Don't think about violating TVA regulations. If it really happens, I will report you." Paradox immediately smiled and said that he was just joking, and then said that he might gain something from his side. Acting? He is the best at it. Can't he deceive a young man? After staying for a few more minutes, Mr. Paradox left the room. The moment he left, the smile in his eyes disappeared and turned into contempt. "This stubborn piece of trash, after I get promoted, I will fire him and throw him into the void." Click. The door handle turned, and Mr. Paradox walked into the room with an elegant smile. Looking at the time prisoner who was still in a solidified state in front of him, he nodded slightly. I think this long time is enough for you to figure it out. Since I can completely control your time, I would have done it if I wanted to harm you, such as making you disappear completely, so there would be no harm. Speaking of this, he is still very curious why the order from above must find out the details of this person. Just throw him into the void and let Elrios swallow him, no trace of time will be left, and there will be no accidents at all. But since the Grand Justice has spoken, no one dares to object. After a pause, Mr. Paradox continued. So let's end this boring process quickly. You go home and I'll finish the work. Of course, to show TVA's sincerity. He raised his hand, very pretentiously, and showed the time prisoner's sight. He clicked the controller. The light on the time collar suddenly turned from red to green. In an instant, Russell felt like he was released from amber and finally regained his freedom. He did not rush forward again, but sat on the chair, showing a shocked look, and said in disbelief, "Just now, was that manipulating time? How is this possible?" Mr. Paradox was very satisfied with the expression of the time criminal, which made him feel superior to lower creatures. This is just the simplest time controller. Expanding dimensions, creating spatial entities, traveling through time and space, technological conversion of matter and energy, anchoring time, future, and history, etc. The greatness of TVA is unimaginable to ordinary humans like you. After saying that, he put the controller back in his pocket and sat down across the table again. Perhaps it was the effect of the knowledge curse entry that Russell easily discovered the emotions hidden in the other person's eyes. He laughed inwardly, but the expression on his face became even more shocked. Then he showed a hint of respect and nodded in agreement. I really thought too much. The fact that an ordinary person like me can survive until now is enough to reflect the kindness and integrity of your organization. I should really cooperate. Hearing this, Mr. Paradox's mouth curled up slightly, and he felt a little proud in his heart. It was too easy to deal with an ordinary person. But at this moment, he saw the other party showing embarrassment again. What's wrong? He asked. Russell said somewhat embarrassedly. I was just an ordinary earthling before, studying at the sports university, and I am a freshman this year. I have no idea how the time crime you mentioned happened. I only know that a lightning bolt fell and I hit that terrible fireman. He said anxiously. This was an accident. I didn't mean to kill him. You won't convict me for this, right? Russell didn't know if TVA had a lie detector function. In order to prevent accidents, he chose not to lie. Mr. Paradox was surprised again. It was the first time he encountered a situation where lightning made people travel through time. It sounded like a plot in a novel. However, time is extremely complicated, so this may not be impossible. And this is not the point. He said seriously. What about your detailed identity? And when and where were you struck by lightning? As he said this, his expression became a little serious, and he said with a hint of threat, Don't lie. The interrogation room of TVA is equipped with a lie detector that can judge your heartbeat and subtle breathing rhythm, pupil dilation, and facial details. I can't help you then. No wonder Mobius knew that Loki was lying in the interrogation room in the American TV series. Of course, he might be lying to me, but it doesn't matter. Russell showed his proper appearance with an anxious look. He hurriedly said, I didn't lie. I'm really a college student. I was really an ordinary person before, and I was really struck by lightning. Before hearing the answer, Mr. Paradox was a little annoyed. What before and after? As if you are not an ordinary person now. What a stupid college student. The witness of the time criminal was still talking about useless things, he said impatiently. Okay, no need to repeat what you said before. Tell me your identity. Russell nodded and was about to get to the point. But just as he was about to speak, his expression changed, and he suddenly covered his mouth and nose with his hands and coughed violently. Mr. Paradox immediately showed a look of disgust, thinking that the time criminal in front of him might have some disease. But with TVA's technology, he is not afraid. He forced a fake smile, put his hands on the table, leaned forward slightly, and pretended to be concerned. Are you feeling uncomfortable? It's okay, TVA can easily cure your disease, don't panic. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly saw the time offender across the table suddenly raised his head, and the deep pupils of the eyes he met were slightly golden. There was no panic. There was no pain. He was lying to me? How dare he? This was Mr. Paradox's first reaction. Then he laughed in his heart. Stupid low-level monkey, actually deceived himself and wanted to fight back. How foolish, naive. Although his right hand had left his pocket and was not holding the controller of the time collar all the time. But, within a second of the opponent's pounce, he had enough time to put his right hand back into his pocket and accurately press the pause button. Time supervisor? Not a waste. At this moment, Mr. Paradox's mouth had a slight arc, and he was about to reveal a mocking smile. This time he would interrogate in a different way, the kind that would make him scream. However, just as he stretched out his hand, he saw a playful look in the eyes of the time criminal. Playful? Why? Besides, the opponent did not make a pounce. He was very puzzled. And in the next moment, he saw that the opponent had loosened his palm covering his mouth and nose, and his bulging chest suddenly sank. Puff. The reflection of fire in Mr. Paradox's eyes, a blazing flame meteor instantly streaked across a space of less than 2 meters. Russell watched in horror as Killian spat out magma-like blood, which then melted Tony Stark's flesh as if it were nothing. Blood like molten lava, it could sear through flesh with terrifying ease. Just like now. Russell rose slowly from his chair, walked around the table, and looked down at Mr. Paradox, who lay on the floor. The once mighty superior now had a fist-sized, charred hole melted through the left side of his neck, where dark, brownish flesh pulsed with spurts of scarlet blood in sync with his weakening heartbeat. How? Hee hee. Mr. Paradox choked on his words, the blood pooling in his throat robbing him of speech. His eyes were wide with disbelief and horror. How was it possible? This man was supposed to be a powerless, lowly time offender. How could he suddenly spit out magma-like blood, like Killian? They'd thoroughly scanned him upon capture, but there was no time to think of that now. His mind grew hazy, his body numb, and the world around him darkened. In his final moments, he saw Russell's eyes, mocking him, as if silently laughing at his arrogance and stupidity. Damn, I had other means. With a final, futile sense of regret, the light faded from Mr. Paradox's eyes. Suddenly, alarms blared loudly. Russell wasn't surprised. It made sense that the TVA would monitor the life signs of its senior operatives and trigger alarms if one died. But he remained calm and composed. There was no fear or panic, no thrill from his first kill, either. He knelt down, quickly rifling through Mr. Paradox's pockets, finding a folded tablet and a controller. A prompt from the Plunder system appeared. Plunder complete. Healthy body, white. Description, unlikely to fall ill, with no hidden ailments. Russell looked at the entry with mild disappointment. For all his authority, this TVA manager had no abilities beyond a healthy body. Even with the power of the extremist virus, he wasn't worth bothering about. He dismissed the entry and focused on the controller. With Mr. Paradox's actions fresh in his memory, he quickly found the correct button. Ding! The time collar unlocked and fell away, and Russell felt a surge of relief as freedom returned. Now, onto the time tablet. Thanks to his knowledge curse ability, he was confident he'd figure out how to use it. Just then, footsteps echoed in the hall outside. Without hesitation, Russell opened the time tablet. It looked like an outdated, bulky electronic dictionary from a decade ago. Swish! A flash of red light suddenly burst from the tablet. A creature resembling a clock spirit materialized, rapidly growing larger and lunging at him. Wow. The figure laughed as it swelled, its face twisting into a menacing, animated grin. They warned me you'd cause trouble, and they were right. Russell was taken aback. How had Miss Minutes hidden herself in Mr. Paradox's tablet? And from her tone, it seemed like Kong, the overlord at the end of time, had taken notice of him. This wasn't good. He shook off his surprise, ignoring the towering Miss Minutes. Human, how did you get the power of the extremist virus? Tell me, and I might spare you, she sneered. But as she spoke, Russell continued operating the time tablet, undeterred. He entered coordinates and a time destination, pressing the confirm button to open a time portal. Nothing happened. Miss Minutes laughed, delighted. Sorry, time criminal. My authority over the tablet is higher than the supervisor's. Her face morphed into a cartoonish smirk. You can't escape. Russell stopped his futile efforts and looked at the cartoon clock. He said calmly, you shouldn't have kept this a secret from Mr. Paradox. Miss Minutes giggled, unconcerned. If he dies, he dies. They're replaceable. Russell shook his head. Not about him dying. About letting me remove the time collar. As he spoke, the door burst open, and a squad of TVA guards stormed in, brandishing their baton-like cutting sticks. Miss Minutes floated overhead, amused, not warning the guards about Russell's newfound abilities. She crossed her animated arms, clearly intending to observe Russell's desperate struggle. Russell's eyes glowed with molten gold, and veins like molten metal pulsed beneath his skin, radiating intense heat. He lunged toward the guards, seeming ready for a desperate, violent confrontation. But at the last moment, he pulled back and deliberately collided with one of the guards' cutting sticks. Miss Minutes' smug expression shattered, her cartoon face turning frantic. Don't attack him, she screamed. Stop it. It was too late. The guard at the front tried to retract his weapon, but the golden light at the end of his baton had already connected with Russell's chest. The cutting stick activated. Russell felt his chest start to disintegrate but showed no fear. He waved at Miss Minutes with a calm smile. Goodbye, little cartoon clock. And with that, he disappeared entirely, as if he'd never existed. The time guards exchanged confused glances, while Miss Minutes' face shifted between anger and panic. In the void, Russell got up from the ground, brushing the dust off his clothes. He felt surprisingly lighthearted. Plan A might not have worked, but he had still escaped from the TVA under the watchful eye of Kong himself. And he'd brought along the supervisor's time tablet. With the knowledge curse, he just might break the device's limitations. And even if he couldn't, he still had the Infinity Stone ring to get out. It would be challenging, but not hopeless. Just then, he spotted movement in the distance and turned. On a hill, a man who looked suspiciously like Captain America was sprinting at top speed. Or, was it the Human Torch, at the end of time? The silence in the castle was suffocating. Kong the Conqueror, the lone survivor, sat behind his desk, his face dark with rage. On the desk, Miss Minutes hovered, her orange light dim and flickering. She looked fearful, fully aware that the mission's failure fell squarely on her. Had she enforced the lock on the time tablet, that slippery time criminal would never have escaped. Kong remained silent, his anger simmering beneath his steady gaze. At last, Miss Minutes spoke up, her voice quivering. Survivor, why not use Paradox to contact the time criminals in the void? I knew he was dealing with them in secret. Though Paradox had just died, Time supervisors could be cloned at will, making them as expendable as the Time guards. Kong looked up coldly. Do it. We must capture him, whatever the cost. He seethed with regret. When Grand Justice had first reported on the prisoner, Kong hadn't paid much attention. But when he discovered that his script device couldn't foresee this man's actions, he knew something was wrong. No being in any timeline should be able to evade his monitoring? At first, he was an ordinary human. How had he suddenly gained the extremis virus, escaped to the void, and even worse known that the cut wouldn't kill him? The uncertainty gnawed at Kong. One slip, and the future had become a mystery? I should have pulled him here, to the end of time, from the start, Kong thought, his anger only deepening. Before me, no one can make a move in secret. He turned to Miss Minutes, his voice as cold as his resolve. Tell those time criminals that I want him alive. And if they fail, they'll suffer endless deaths in the abyss of time. Miss Minutes' projection quivered. She nodded and disappeared to relay his orders. In the void, Russell watched as the figure resembling Captain America ran toward him. The sight of this person piqued his curiosity. Maybe I should reach out, he thought. The void is full of threats far worse than what we've seen in Loki or Deadpool 3. It's always better to have allies here. Just as he considered moving, he noticed the figure had already spotted him and was running over at top speed. Although he didn't fly, he sprinted impressively fast. Within seconds, he'd closed the gap. Hey, man. The man, wearing a tattered coat, skidded to a halt, flashing a friendly smile. New here, huh? The time guards just cut you, judging by those fresh clothes. These big-headed goons with nothing in their brains ought to be tossed to Elrios. He chuckled, then added, oh, you probably don't know about Elrios. Nasty beast that devours anything it finds. Here, let me clue you in. Russell didn't get a word in as the stranger who was a spitting image of Captain America but with the attitude of the Human Torch launched into a rambling, curse-laden rundown of the void's dangers. He described the signs of Elrios's approach, other terrifying mutant creatures, and some hazardous areas. After a few minutes, Russell smiled, genuinely thankful for the information. The man clapped him on the back and invited him to their base, where a group of fellow time criminals had banded together for survival. Russell hesitated, watching his animated, fiery companion. Wait, I think I know you, he said with a sudden grin. You're Thunderbolt from the Fantastic Four, right? I remember seeing you on TV. The man laughed heartily. So, I got myself a fan? What are the odds? Well, when we get to the base, I'll open a bottle and whip up something nice for us. Everyone's been craving a decent meal. Russell grinned, shaking the man's hand excitedly. That's fantastic. With you around, Mr. Jonathan, I feel safe already. But as Thunderbolt tried to pull his hand away, his smile faltered. Russell's grip was iron-tight. It's all good, buddy, Thunderbolt said, casting a nervous glance at the sky. But we shouldn't stay out here too long. Standing still attracts that monster. He tried to tug his hand free again, but Russell's hold only tightened. Thunderbolt's expression turned uneasy, though Russell remained oblivious, his grip firm. I'm a fire user too, Mr. Thunderbolt. Look how much lower my temperature is than yours, Russell said, his tone polite. I'd be honored if you'd teach me a few things. As he spoke, his skin turned the glowing red of molten metal, distorting the air around them with an intense heat. What the? Thunderbolt screamed, struggling to pull free as Russell's burning grip scalded his hand, turning his skin a charred, blistered brown. He lashed out with a fierce kick, which Russell dodged easily, releasing him with a calm smile. How's that for heat, Mr. Thunderbolt? The man slowly straightened up, his once friendly face now transformed, filled with a sinister shadow, like a venomous snake poised to strike. Ignoring his injured hands, he looked at Russell with cold, menacing eyes and hissed, how did you figure out I wasn't him? Russell glanced at the man who looked like neither Captain America nor the Human Torch and laughed. Because you're too enthusiastic, he replied. I may not know the Human Torch well, but he's definitely not as friendly as you've been. Russell didn't mention the most telling clue. From Deadpool 3, he knew the Human Torch was a lone wolf, no teammates, no alliances. The stranger's goal was clear, lure him into the so-called base for a feast, where he'd be the main course. The man's expression soured. I didn't want to play Thunderbolt in the first place. I just knew he looked like me. Seems it was a mistake. Russell chuckled, intrigued. And is your foul mouth a natural talent? The man sneered. Swearing makes people lower their guard, especially with time prisoners fresh from a cut, feeling lost and vulnerable. Crafty guy, Russell thought. This void was truly dangerous. After a pause, he smirked. With that face, why not pretend to be Steve Rogers? I might have believed it. At that, the man's expression twisted, his eyes glinting with malice. I am Steve Rogers. Long live Hydra. Before Russell could react, the man pulled a large-caliber revolver from his waist and fired. Bang, bang, bang. In less than a second, 3 bullets tore through Russell's forehead, heart, and lung, each shot clean, fast, and precise. Steve Rogers blew the smoke from the barrel, sneering as Russell's body crumpled to the ground. Friendly reminder, don't get cocky in the void. Even if you can handle heat, only vigilance keeps you alive. Holstering the gun, he tore a strip from his coat and began to bandage his burned hands, not showing an ounce of pain. It was clear his earlier scream had been just another act. But then a voice shattered the silence, taught me a lesson just after arriving. Huh? Well, here's one for you. Never celebrate before you're sure your enemy's dead, Captain Hydra. The voice hit Rogers like a shockwave. His eyes widened as he looked up, stunned, to see Russell sitting up, the bullet wounds on his body oozing molten magma. Whether it was melted bullets or his blood, Rogers couldn't tell. The intense heat had shredded Russell's shirt, exposing his torso, veins pulsing with red-gold energy beneath his skin. His golden eyes glowed as the air around him warped with blistering heat. For a moment, Rogers thought he was staring at a demon from hell. What the hell are you? Rogers stammered, instinctively retreating as he drew his revolver and fired 3 more shots. Bang, bang, bang. The bullets struck Russell but only made him stagger. They couldn't even bring him down. Russell grinned, revealing 2 rows of teeth gleaming with a cold, predatory edge. Now, it's my turn. This time, he wasn't playing nice. He intended to take Rogers alive. Tapping into the power of the extremist virus, Russell crouched low and sprang forward like a coiled viper. Rogers had no time to reload. Years of battle experience told him running would mean certain death. His only chance was a head-on fight. Abandoning his gun, he shouted, "Long live Hydra," and charged. As they closed in, Rogers grabbed Russell's left arm, attempting to pull him into an over-the-shoulder throw. But the plan backfired horribly. His hand felt like it was gripping molten steel. He had severely underestimated the heat Russell could produce. As his skin began to sizzle and burn, Rogers' grip failed. The pain was beyond what even a super soldier could withstand. If he didn't let go, his hand would cook right through. Russell seized the opening. Rogers had inadvertently turned his back while trying to grapple him, making himself vulnerable. Russell tightened his grip, pressed forward, and delivered a powerful punch to the back of Rogers' neck. The Hydra captain dropped unconscious with a single thud. Russell didn't let down his guard. In an instant, his hands glowed brighter, and he used them like knives, swiftly severing both of Rogers' arms. "That should keep you from pulling any more tricks," Russell muttered, staring down at the infamous Captain Hydra, now helpless before him. The intense pain jolted the Hydra captain awake, and he let out an agonizingly realistic scream. "My arm? You devil," he yelled in pain, realizing his predicament almost immediately. Russell nudged the captain over with his foot, pressing his boot firmly against his chest, his grin both smug and terrifying. "Now I ask, you answer," Russell said, his tone menacing. "Answer well, and I might let you live. Lie, and I'll show you what a real devil can do." Steve's face contorted with pain, and he spat out through gritted teeth, "And if I tell you, can I live?" Russell nodded, his expression sincere. "I'm not a villain like you. I keep my word." He leaned in closer. "Besides, do you have a choice? Refuse, and I'll make sure Elios has a snack out of your legs." Steve trembled at the thought. He knew that if the time monster devoured him, even his soul would be obliterated. "Fine," he replied, desperate. "But remember your word." Russell nodded approvingly and began his interrogation. "How big is the void?" Steve shook his head quickly. "No one knows? It's like no planet I've ever seen, endless, with fake sunlight in the sky. Some kind of pocket dimension," Russell mused, making a mental note. After a moment, he pressed on. "And what about the factions here? I'll verify it all, so don't try to deceive me." Steve's face twitched. He'd considered leading Russell into a trap, but he dared not risk it now. He took a deep breath and answered honestly. "There's a group of Deadpools in the forest across the plain. Filthy. No one likes going there. Further ahead, by the lake, there's a gathering of mutants, some ordinary humans too. On the right, there's a black market trading spot in the valley. Farther in that direction is an abandoned city where Loki and his people have set up their base. The idiots even elected a president." He glanced left, his face paling. "And if you go deeper in the plain to the left, there's a bald psycho over there, a real killer. We all avoid that place unless we're suicidal." Russell processed the information, recognizing the bald psycho as Cassandra. Definitely not heading there yet, he thought. He had to prioritize, and the Loki base seemed safer. But he wanted more. His eyes burned with intensity as he leaned closer. "Anything else? You didn't leave anything out, did you?" The Hydra captain flinched at Russell's menacing gaze and stammered, "My base is in a cave under a dry riverbed, about 10 kilometers from here. And I have 3 teammates: Peter Parker, Tony Stark, and the camouflage wizard Mordo." Russell's eyes narrowed at the familiar names, suspecting these were twisted versions of the heroes he knew. They were likely as sinister as this Hydra captain. Spider-Man's agility and spider sense, Iron Man's tech skills, Mordo's magic. It was a tempting combination to acquire. But he knew better than to rush in unprepared. One step at a time, Russell thought. No point risking everything now. He looked down at the Hydra captain, his face now openly malevolent. Realizing what was coming, Steve's eyes widened in horror. "You lied to me," he shouted. "You're no hero, you're just as evil as..." Russell's face darkened as he cut him off, his voice laced with icy disdain. "Hero," he chuckled coldly. "In this twisted Marvel world, I couldn't care less about being a hero." Without another word, he stepped forward, crushing the Hydra captain's neck beneath his boot, silencing him forever. Just then, the system's prompt echoed in Russell's mind. "Entry plunder completed. Advanced elite combat, green. You now possess peak human combat skills, including mastery over most firearms and weapons. Super serum, special, green. A mix of Hydra's super soldier formula and the Allies' super soldier serum, boosting physical strength and endurance. Combined with the extremis virus, your heat limit now increases from 1800 degrees Celsius to 2600 degrees Celsius. Russell grinned, feeling the power surge through him. This is just the beginning. Russell's eyes widened in surprise. The temperature control went from 1800 to 2600 degrees. 2600 degrees, the melting point of tungsten, a temperature capable of melting most alloys. This was a powerful enhancement. But what truly caught Russell's attention was the potential for growth. The increase in temperature wasn't directly due to the super soldier serum, it was because of his improved physical fitness. That meant any future enhancement to his physique could push the limits of the extremis virus even further. A growth-type ability, interesting, Russell muttered, loading both new abilities. Almost immediately, he felt his body transform. His muscles and bones grew denser, his blood thickened, almost like liquid metal, and each beat of his heart surged with amplified life energy. Testing his strength, he clenched his fist, and it hummed with power. Probably 3 times stronger than before, he thought, satisfied. If he faced the Hydra captain again, he could overpower him with raw strength alone. Plus, his new elite combat entry covered his combat weaknesses. With a satisfied nod, Russell began gathering supplies. In the void, resources were scarce, so he took everything he could: an M29 Smith revolver, a Glock 19, over a dozen Magnum rounds, 3 loaded 9mm magazines, 2 high-carbon steel daggers, a fragmentation grenade, a stun grenade, compressed biscuits, an unmarked tube of white powder, a military canteen, and even the captain's combat uniform and trench coat. It wasn't the best fit, but it beat being exposed. Before leaving, Russell sliced his palm, letting his blood ignite on the corpse like white phosphorus, reducing it to charcoal within seconds. He watched the wound close in moments, further proof of his enhanced durability. Be a normal captain in your next life, Steve, he murmured, setting off northward to the black market. After spending a night in a hollow tree, he found himself inside of the valley by noon the following day. The black market location wasn't exactly hidden, several vehicles and groups were traveling the same route. Along the way, he'd witnessed skirmishes that left several dead, though he stayed out of them, recognizing none of the fallen. When he finally saw the mine in the valley carved deep into the earth, he realized his lone status could make him a target. Just then, the rumble of an approaching car caught his attention. A red and gold vehicle sped by, and Russell's eyes narrowed as he caught a glimpse of the driver, Tony Stark. And sitting beside him, a Spider-Man wearing a writhing black suit, likely altered by venom. Inside the Jeep, Peter Parker frowned, glancing at the rock they'd just passed. Tony, someone's watching us from behind that rock. Maliciously. Driving one-handed, Tony Stark took a puff from his cigar, unfazed. Relax, Pete. This whole place is full of malicious eyes. If he's still around when we leave, we'll deal with him then, Stark added with a smirk. His eyes lit up with anticipation as he changed the subject, but for now, the auction's the priority. Chili peppers are no joke, Pete. Today, I brought a microreactor. This time, I'm winning that woman. Peter's face lit up with interest. Back in his timeline, he'd never had the chance to cross paths with Stark's women. The thrill of what lay ahead made him forget the observer behind them. Hidden in the shadows, Russell watched them disappear into the distance. These two are the Hydra captain's teammates. With them gone, only Mordo would be left at their base, a rare opportunity. Although Baron Mordo wasn't a pushover, Russell knew he couldn't just wait for power to fall into his lap. He had to seize it himself. If you fear danger, you're a coward even with a system, he thought. This was Marvel, where titans reigned and above them, even more powerful beings. After his first kill, Russell knew he'd never settle for mediocrity. His expression hardened, his resolve deepening. Let's do this. With newfound determination, his skin glowed as blood vessels pulsed beneath, the heart of the furnace roaring within him. He turned into a shadow and darted back the way he came, ready to claim his next prize. P.S. This is considered a change in the mentality of the strong, and he is no longer an ordinary person. And Mordo is a melee mage, and the protagonist is not impulsive without a brain. In addition, the pace will also speed up later. Russell had no idea when Iron Man and Spider-Man would return. But as long as they were driving and not flying, he knew he had some time. Running at top speed, he covered the distance back in less than 2 hours. Following the intel he'd gathered from the Snake team, he traced a dry riverbed and soon spotted a cave hidden by thick vines. Though it looked ancient, a parking marker nearby indicated this was likely their base. Russell didn't rush in. Observing the vines at the cave's entrance, he noticed something odd. They had a faint magical aura. With his knowledge curse ability, he sensed the magic. It was subtle but unmistakable, like a single star in a dark sky. Alarm magic, he muttered, studying the setup. He considered setting a fire to smoke them out, but if Baron Mordo had a sling ring, he could easily teleport away. Russell would lose any chance of spoils and alert the others. But he had no way to bypass the spell. Should he abandon his plan? No. Magic was too valuable to give up on. Besides, even without overloading the heart of the furnace, this entry absorbed free energy from the air, which would strengthen him physically and store pure energy in his body. If he acquired a spellcasting ability, he could use it instantly. Time passed as he mulled over his options. Finally, as the artificial sunlight shifted and illuminated his face, inspiration struck. He removed the Snake team's combat uniform, leaving only the trench coat on. Zipping it up, he put on an innocent expression, took a deep breath, and approached the cave. Instead of sneaking, he knocked loudly on the vines and called out, "Hello, is anyone there?" He continued, "Captain America sent me? He said I'd find help here." As he shouted, the vines began to shimmer, revealing golden symbols before curling back like a serpent and revealing a hidden door. Feigning awe, Russell exclaimed, "Wow, that's amazing." A warm voice responded from behind the door, "It's just a small warning spell. Nothing special." The door opened, and a tall black man in a brown robe with a red belt emerged, smiling kindly. "Captain America sent you, you say?" he asked. Russell nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, the captain said it's safe here, no dark cloud monsters. He's really a good man. When I was attacked by the Time Guards, I didn't even have clothes. This trench coat is his." Russell was relieved he'd damaged the trench coat's collar when he took down the snake team. The sleeveless look sold the story. Mordo eyed the trench coat, his doubts fading as he listened to Russell's explanation. He nodded, smiling gently. "Captain America is truly kind-hearted," Mordo replied. "This place is rough. And those Time Guards, they're the real villains." Russell nodded in agreement, looking genuinely empathetic. Mordo's smile widened, and then he asked, almost as if suddenly remembering, "But why didn't the captain escort you here himself?" Russell answered smoothly, "Oh, he met up with some teammates who were heading to the black market. He said it'd be safer if I came here alone, so he gave me directions." Glancing at the magic vines, he added, "He even told me about the magic at the entrance." I didn't believe him. "This is incredible." Mordo sneered inwardly, seeing through Steve's motives. Afraid of danger? Hardly. Captain America was just avoiding exposure in the black market, given their less than stellar reputation. Still, Mordo didn't doubt the story. Tony and Peter had, in fact, headed to the black market that morning. With his suspicions put to rest, Mordo's smile grew more welcoming. Laughing heartily, he gestured for Russell to come inside. "I've been rude. Come in, friend. You're safe here. Anything you need, just let me know. Make yourself at home." Russell grasped Mordo's hand warmly, his face flushed with faint gratitude. "Really, sir? You're just as kind as the captain. In that case, I won't hold back." Mordo looked at the man in front of him, whose face was flushed with excitement, and his own smile grew even wider. "Good man?" he thought with a sneer. "Huh? Soon, I'll extract your soul for my training. I'll take your organs one by one and sell them, boil your flesh into oil, and turn your bones into snacks for venom. I wonder if you'll still call me a good man then." Just as Mordo's thoughts drifted into his dark intentions, he heard Russell say, "Then I won't be polite." Mordo dismissed the comment and responded with a welcoming smile. "Of course, you're welcome," he said. "Since the captain sent you here, it means he trusts you. If you need anything, just ask." Mordo felt he had Russell right where he wanted him, likely only looking for food, clothing, maybe some rest. Nothing that couldn't be taken back later. After all, a fresh guest would fetch a good price once, repurposed. Then, he noticed a glimmer in Russell's eyes, as if they were actually shining. Wait, are they really glowing? Before he could process it, a sharp pain shot through his hands. Instinctively, he tried to pull away, but it felt as though his hands were caught in a vice. Realization struck he had been deceived. The helpless guest was, in fact, a wolf in sheep's clothing, mocking his gullibility. And then, something even more alarming, Russell's mouth bulged as if preparing an attack. Mordo's magical intuition warned him that his life was in immediate danger. "Damn you!" Mordo roared, channeling magic instantly. Instead of attacking, he activated his magical defenses, summoning a golden barrier from a ruby necklace. Symbols glowed across it in intricate patterns. But just then, Russell unleashed a burning, magma-like substance onto the shield, which started to hiss and melt. "Damn it!" Mordo's pupils dilated as he hastily muttered an incantation. His eyes turned red, muscles bulging as he invoked a violent magic that boosted his physical power, despite its side effects. With a powerful kick, Mordo launched himself backward, retreating into the cave. Russell released the charred remains of Mordo's hands, grinned wickedly, and charged after him. Inside, the cave's spacious interior, cluttered with workbenches, machinery, and tattered furniture, was laid bare. Russell spotted Mordo fleeing through a passage in the back, now severely weakened without his hands, and clearly unwilling to fight. "Humph," Russell sneered. If he couldn't catch up to a retreating mage, he might as well give up now. Within moments, he closed the gap and aimed a lava-imbued fist at Mordo's back. This punch wouldn't leave a chance for survival. He intended to kill. But as his fist connected, a familiar golden shield reappeared, shattering under the force of his attack. Yet even through the impact, Russell heard an ominous buzzing sound. The cave walls shimmered with golden runes, and suddenly the ground beneath him vanished. In an instant, he was plummeting through open air, thousands of feet above the ground. Looking up, he saw a portal in the sky with Mordo dangling from enchanted vines, grinning smugly. It had been a trap all along, and Russell had walked right into it. "Go to hell." Mordo laughed, believing a fall from this height would be fatal. But then he saw Russell grin back. Just 2 seconds into the fall, Russell was still only 17 meters down. "Times have changed, pal," Russell muttered. He drew his Glock, aimed in 0.5 seconds, and opened fire. Bang, bang, bang. By the 3rd second, Russell was 44 meters down. By the 4th, 78 meters. All 15 bullets in the magazine had been spent. As he fell, he watched Mordo's body hang limp in the vines, his eyes wide in shock and regret. Blood dripped from his chest, cascading down through the portal. Baron Mordo was dead. Russell silently thanked the Hydra captain who'd trained him. With elite marksmanship skills, he had drawn, aimed, and fired in a fraction of a second, hitting his mark despite the precarious circumstances. 4 bullets had struck true. He had won. Just then, a familiar voice from his system rang in his ears. Looting entry completed. After the kill, Russell didn't relax. Instead, his nerves tightened even more. He was 10,000 meters in the air, falling fast. With air resistance, he estimated he had about 3 minutes before hitting the ground if he couldn't find a solution by then. Not even the combined strength of the extremis virus and super serum would save him from becoming a lifeless heap. Now, it was all down to luck. Just then, the system voice echoed in his mind. Looting terms completed. Magic, green. A reserve of magic energy, 36 units, converted to pure energy. Magic knowledge, green and purple. An uncontaminated portion of Baron Mordo's magic knowledge. Mystical spell, Vishanti Holy Sword, purple. Summons a holy sword imbued with positive energy. Its strength depends on the supplied energy. Weakness override. No need for consent from the Vishanti. It can be cast with the user's energy alone. Spell, Seraphim Shield, green and purple. A full defense spell, its durability based on the magic energy supplied. Spell, Rage, green. Boosts strength and agility by 3-fold. Weakness offset. With the Heart of the Furnace, spells under half an hour don't induce post-cast fatigue. Spell, Energy Whip, white and green. Creates a durable energy whip. Spell, Mirror Space, purple and gold. Forms an independent mirror dimension. Its strength depends on the user. Warning, using this in the void could cause entrapment in negative or chaotic dimensions. Use with caution. Close combat, white. Basic combat skills. Witchcraft, sacrifice, purple. Allows sacrifice of flesh to unknown higher entities in exchange for power, knowledge, or secrets, though with a high risk of soul corruption. Human anatomy, white. Detailed understanding of human anatomy. Secret spell, soul extraction. Completely extracts a soul while leaving the body alive. Note, this technique is unique. It cannot be powered solely by pure energy and is marked by demonic influence. Spell, weapon construction, green. Forms cold weapons using magic energy. Spell, teleportation, purple. Opens portals using a sling ring. Note, this spell has upgrade potential. Russell felt a rush of excitement, then frustration as he realized he'd need a sling ring to cast the portal spell. So close? Then, the system continued. Secret spell, Fire of Falden. Summons powerful green flames that can purify negative states and neutralize binding spells. Warning, this summons energy from an extra-dimensional race and cannot be used in the void. Russell sighed. A great spell, but useless here. If only I could use it to fly. The system's voice interrupted again. Magic shock, white. Releases a basic magic shockwave. All looting is complete. Load entries. Ecstatic, Russell commanded, load. With magic shock, he finally had a way out. Without it, he would have had to rely on the Seraphim Shield to survive the impact. Instantly, the entries loaded. Russell pointed his hands downward and released a transparent shockwave. His descent slowed momentarily, but he soon began falling again. It worked. Repeating the action, he created a pattern: fall, recoil, fall. His 10,000-meter drop grew shorter and shorter. After over 10 minutes, with one last intense shockwave, he crashed into a dry riverbed below. Cough, cough. Russell gasped, pain radiating through his body. If I were an ordinary man, that would have killed me. But thanks to his enhanced physique and the extremis virus, his injuries were rapidly healing. Within minutes, he stood up, grinning. He punched the air triumphantly, laughing. If Mordo's hands hadn't been disabled, if I hadn't plundered magic shock at the last second, I'd be dead. But in the end, he had won. High risk, high reward. Baron Mordo's spells had filled gaps in Russell's abilities, giving him a range of magical attacks and defensive skills. And beyond the spells and magic power, he noticed something else. Not far away, a quiet cave entrance. Mordo had likely left a portal open nearby, confident his trap would finish off any intruder. But Russell was alive, and now, he'd claim whatever trophies Mordo left behind. Smiling, he murmured, "What an unexpected prize," and strode toward the cave, already planning a gift for the 2 variants who had yet to return. As soon as he entered the cave, Russell saw Mordo's body hanging from the vines. The portal was still open, and the corpse swayed in the strong wind, blood dripping from his toes. Mordo's eyes were wide open in a lifeless stare. With his newly acquired magical knowledge, Russell quickly spotted a protrusion on the rock wall near the back door. It was the portal switch. Mordo had set a trap? If not for the triple speed granted by Spell Frenzy, Russell would never have caught up in time. Too bad for him, Russell thought with a smirk. Mordo had underestimated him. He thanked the Snake team for their selfless contributions, found an empty bottle, and hit the switch. Instantly, the portal closed, and the wind died down. Now it was time to clean up. Russell searched Mordo's body and found a broken ruby, a disposable defensive charm. Useless, he thought. I can make something better now. His real prize was the sling ring, which he finally found sewn into the lining of Mordo's robe. With the ring and the reality gem, he could leave this place. Russell quickly gathered everything valuable in the cave: steel armor parts, 3 small reactors, a computer, batteries, light bulbs, some canned food, 2 boxes of wine, and other essentials. He wasn't planning on taking everything right now, but he needed them safe from potential damage. He had something special in mind for his two friends. He'd rigged 2 high-energy bombs using the reactors. Thanks to the knowledge curse entry he'd obtained from Iron Man, Russell knew how to arm the reactors to detonate. The necessary parts for remote detonation were all here in the base. After hiding his valuables, he spent 20 minutes making the bombs. He placed one in a cardboard box and hid it under the sofa, then arranged Mordo's body to look like he was sitting, arms hidden within his robe. Finally, he scrawled a note, mocking his enemies for their failed plans. With the trap set, Russell left the cave and took a hidden vantage point nearby. He didn't dare get too close, as Spider-Man's spider sense might detect him. Time passed, and soon the artificial sunlight dimmed. Hours later, the sound of a car engine broke the silence. They were back. Russell didn't look directly, in case Spider-Man's spider sense detected his gaze. Instead, he used the corner of his eye to track the car as it stopped. The moment the engine turned off, he pressed the switch. He'd practiced the timing, knowing exactly how long it would take them to walk into the cave. The detonator countdown began. Bang! Tony Stark slammed the car door shut, cursing. Damn it! Damn Pyro! I'll turn him to dust someday. He'd lost the auction for pepper pots to Pyro, a mutant he didn't dare cross. All right, let's go, Peter Parker muttered irritably. Grab your scrap metal, I want to get to bed. He was annoyed too, having missed his own opportunity with Iron Man's wife. Tony didn't argue. Though he didn't get what he wanted, he'd used the reactor to trade for some armor parts models more advanced than his own. Even if others didn't understand their value, Tony knew he'd gained something. They reached the cave entrance. Just as they were about to enter, Spider-Man halted, sniffed the air, and whispered, "There's a smell of blood." And no breathing sounds in the cave. Something's wrong. Tony's face darkened. His helmet closed around him as he yelled, "My stuff," and dashed into the cave. Spider-Man was about to warn him of a possible trap but followed when nothing happened. The reactor on Tony's chest illuminated the room, revealing an emptied base with barely a scrap left. Only the sofa, a few pieces of junk, and Mordo's dead body remained. Tony seethed with anger, glaring at the note pinned to Mordo. Together, they read the messy scrawl. "Dear Mr. Tony Stark, Mr. Steve Rogers sends his regards. He says they didn't get along, so he left the house to you." Mr. Mordo agreed, "He's sitting here to confirm. Lastly, we thank Mr. Iron Man for his generous donation of the reactor. Rest assured, it'll be put to good use." Spider-Man glanced at the bullet wound on Mordo and sighed, "Glock bullet hole Steve's." Tony clenched his fists. "I can't believe that guy betrayed us. Should have known something was up when he didn't come back last night." He kicked the body, only to see a bomb with a countdown flashing 00:01. Their blood ran cold. Fuck. Boom. Blazing flames lit up the night as the explosion roared, sending a massive fireball rising into the sky. Russell stood on a tree branch, watching as the combined power of 2 reactors unleashed far more devastation than a single one could. The shock wave surged outward, shaking the forest violently. Russell stared, counting the seconds, waiting for the aftermath. 1 second. 2 seconds. As the fireball dimmed, a voice echoed in his mind, as if from the heavens. "Plunder entry complete. Living venom fragment detected. Chaotic will detected. Erasing." The voice continued, "Venom suit. Mutation can extend and deform at will, enhancing the wearer's strength and speed. Immunity to flames and sonic waves." Russell was taken aback. So Venom's weaknesses were tied to its will, not its form. Then came another notification. "Armor Master, Purple Tony Stark's expertise in armor crafting and technology." With all plunders complete, Russell smirked. Loading, he thought. In a flash, new knowledge and power filled him. He jumped from the tree, dark liquid spreading over his body, forming a suit with red and gold patterns. He sprinted toward the river, his mind set on finishing the job. Venom was dead. Iron Man, too. Spider-Man wouldn't last much longer. Cough. Peter Parker crawled from the edge of a smoking pit, gasping for air. He glanced back and saw Iron Man's body lying motionless, encased in glowing red armor that reeked of burnt metal. The suit had protected Tony from the impact, but not the heat he hadn't survived. Peter's heart raced. Only by commanding Venom to shield him in the final moment had he survived, but he wasn't unscathed. His internal organs were bruised, small fractures riddled his bones, and the Venom suit was gone. A chill breeze brushed against his skin, making him shiver. Was he always this sensitive without Venom? He wondered until his spider sense flared. In an instant, he rolled to the side as a massive flaming sword slammed down from above, shaking the ground and sending dirt flying. Peter looked up, furious, and locked eyes with Russell, who stood on the riverbank, dressed in his new black and gold suit. "You killed Mordo, and set the reactor bomb." Peter's face twisted with rage. Russell shook his head. "You're missing the first one, Parker. Steve Rogers was the first to die," he said, flashing a cold grin. Peter's face drained of color. The realization hit him like ice water. Russell had taken out his team, one by one, with precision. And now, he was the final target. Peter growled, "You think I'll just let you win?" Russell's eyes narrowed. "Go ahead and try." Peter's gaze sharpened, waiting for the right moment. He spotted Russell's split-second distraction and seized it, launching himself sideways and firing a web at a nearby boulder. Swinging toward Russell like a cannonball, he aimed to catch him off guard. But Russell was ready. He traced glowing golden lines in the air, forming a shield that Peter's attack slammed into with a loud crack. The boulder shattered, but the shield held firm. Russell sighed, impressed by his own resilience. Peter, however, wasn't giving up. He saw Russell's small grin and grimaced, summoning all his strength. He flexed his muscles, pulling hard on the energy whip Russell had conjured. Russell felt the force and was pulled forward, as if hooked. Perfect, Peter thought, bracing to punch Russell with all his might as the mage closed in. But just as Russell neared, he smirked, reaching out with his other hand to summon a sword engulfed in flames. Peter's spider sense blared in his mind, but it was too late to dodge. Instinctively, he raised his arm to block, even as he tried to pull back. Swish! They crossed paths. In a single stroke, the holy flame sword drew a golden line through the darkness. Russell landed lightly on his feet, taking a step forward and turning with calm precision. Behind him, Spider-Man knelt on the ground, trembling, his right arm severed at the root, lying limp in the mud. Russell felt a wave of satisfaction as he surveyed his newly mastered Vishanti Holy Sword spell. It was the perfect blend of long-range power and devastating close-range precision, almost unstoppable. When he'd swung the sword earlier, it had sliced through the air with barely any resistance. Pity, he thought. If Spider-Man hadn't reacted so quickly, his head would have rolled. But it didn't matter. The fight was as good as over, and victory was within reach. With a twist of his wrist, Russell hurled the holy sword of flame like a javelin. Spider-Man, despite the loss of an arm, instinctively rolled aside, evading the attack. He spun on his feet, raising his wrist, and shot a barrage of sticky spider webs at Russell like a storm. Wow, an upgraded amazing Spider-Man, Russell muttered, rolling his eyes as he raised his arm. He didn't dodge, instead, he summoned golden spell lines to form a shield over his arm. Spell weapon construction. The dozen or so webs splattered harmlessly against his magical shield. But Russell knew this was a distraction. Spider-Man's true strike came from above. In the reflection of his shield, he saw Spider-Man descending from the air, fist drawn back, ready to deliver a powerful blow. Let's see how you cast spells now, Spider-Man roared, his fist homing in on Russell. But as he swung, a chill crept up his spine. Spider sense? At this range? Impossible? His eyes flared with frustration and confusion. There was no way Russell could pose a threat so close he wouldn't have time to counter with a spell. Absolutely impossible? Fueled by rage and desperation, Spider-Man poured every ounce of strength into his punch. But as he swung, he noticed Russell's eyes. They glowed with a molten gold light, and Russell's chest subtly swelled. Suddenly, with a burst of fiery energy, Russell expelled a flaming projectile from his mouth, a flaming meteor launched at point-blank range. Thud! Spider-Man fell hard, clutching his throat, his eyes reflecting a mixture of disbelief, regret, and anger. Russell dismissed his magical shield with a wave and chuckled to himself. That spell hurts the tongue, but it works. He looked down at Spider-Man, who lay on the ground, gasping for air. Smiling with satisfaction, he remarked, "You and Mordo quite the pair. You even have the same defeated look in your eyes." Russell sneered. "If you'd fought me from the beginning, you might have had a chance. But you ran. You're the weakest, most cowardly Spider-Man I've ever faced." Peter's face twisted, blood foaming at his lips as he choked out, "You don't know what Spider-Man's terrain is? Go to hell." With that, his neck wound opened wider, blood pouring out as he slumped to the ground, lifeless. Russell sighed, forgiving Peter's final rude words. At that moment, a pleasant chime echoed in his ears. Plunder entry complete. Spider Totem? Purple gold, the source of all Spider-Man's powers across the multiverse. Russell read through the entry with growing delight. Super strength. A punch can exert 25 tons of force. Agility. Enhanced flexibility and speed for performing incredible feats. Environmental perception. Insight into nearby objects' positions, shapes, and movement, ideal for navigating tricky environments. Climbing. Ability to scale any surface with non-zero friction. Spider sense. Intuition for sensing danger and malice in the environment. A grin crept across his face. Spider-Man's power was rooted in magic? Even better than expected? The totem's perks: strength, agility, spider sense would blend perfectly with his other powers. The system continued. Spider silk, blue physiological rejection, mutation. Magic spider silk, mutation, a magical variant of spider silk, emitted from enchanted wrist marks, with doubled toughness and controllable dissipation. Russell immediately activated the entry. Small, black and purple totem marks appeared on his wrists, instinctively guiding his control over the new power. He aimed his right hand, and with a thought, a dark purple strand of spider silk shot out, sticking firmly to a boulder on the riverbank. Russell tugged, dislodging the massive rock with ease before releasing the web, watching it dissipate without a trace. Perfect. Russell marveled. No weird holes on my body, just magic spider silk, refined and potent. He imagined the possibilities, thinking the webbing might even serve in casting intricate web-based magic arrays in the future. But his daydreams were interrupted by a harsh alert from the system. Warning: the Morlun family across the multiverse is hunting all beings with spider totems. The Morlun family. The multiverse. Hunting. These words together held a grim significance. Russell hadn't expected Spider-Man's abilities to stem from something predatory rather than purely magical. What kind of being was Morlun, and how powerful must his family be to hunt across universes? His knowledge of Marvel lore, pieced together from a mix of popular science videos and fan theories, only went so far. Yet, he wasn't particularly worried. Stuck here in the void, there was little point in panicking. Besides, with his plunder entry system, he had time on his side. Power would follow. Russell smirked to himself. When the day comes, who's to say who will be the hunter and who the prey? Still, the warning did make him ponder something curious, the sacred timeline versus the multiverse. If Loki hasn't ascended to his role beyond time yet, if the sacred timeline hasn't been liberated, how is Morland's family hunting across a multiverse? He thought back to the differences he'd noticed between the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the comic book universe, like mutants existing in one but not the other. Could it be that some of these variants aren't actual branches of time, but different versions of characters bound by the TVA's timelines? The Marvel Universe itself, he mused, seemed to have been tangled up in the Disney Universe, growing more complex with each adaptation. Russell sighed. Forget it. Overthinking doesn't make me stronger. Power will answer all questions. Suddenly, purple lightning flashed across the distant sky. Russell caught a glimpse of a massive shadow, a time monster. Without another thought, he turned and sprinted along the riverbank, moving fast, Spider-Man's agility plus his venom suit, super serum, and extremis virus giving him a speed that rivaled a small car. After a hard run, Russell found an old, run-down house in the woods and dashed inside. He recalled from both the Loki series and Deadpool 3 that as long as one stayed within an anchor of dead objects, the time monster, Alioth, wouldn't detect them. He slammed the door shut, darted into a room, and slid under a bed. Perfect. Thud. Russell froze as someone else entered the room and slipped under the bed. A moment later, he felt the soft, warm presence of another body pressed against him. Who? The girl whispered, eyes flashing open as claws extended from her hands. But before she could attack, Russell wrapped his arm around her tightly, leaning close to her ear. Quiet, he whispered, unless you want Alioth's attention. The girl stopped struggling, her breathing slowing to a faint whisper. Clearly, she'd encountered Alioth before. Russell gathered that she was young, maybe 16, but with a hardened, survivalist edge. Despite her age, she was remarkably well-built. He couldn't help but notice as he kept his hold. They lay silently, waiting. Russell knew Alioth was a formidable creature. While Loki and Sylvie had once managed to control it, he suspected that was more the work of plot armor than actual strength. After a tense few moments, the girl finally whispered, "You've got me. Let go, I won't attack you." Russell didn't quite trust her. She'd nearly lunged at him moments ago, who knew if she'd change her mind once Alioth left. But he kept his voice low. "Relax. I'm not letting go until we're safe." The girl didn't argue. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she realized their proximity. She was no naive fairy tale heroine. She understood the situation, even if it made her uncomfortable. After all, she was only 16 and had been trapped here since she was 13, with no experience in this kind of closeness. As time passed, the heat of their bodies added to the discomfort. The girl shifted slightly, whispering, "It's a bit hot." Russell was feeling it too. Unable to stand the tension any longer, he finally asked, "How long does Alioth usually stay?" The warm breath on her ear made the girl's face redden further, but she whispered back, 2 to 4 hours. It devours anything alive within its range. Russell sighed internally. Looks like we'll be stuck here for quite a while. The night in the void is cold. At first, Laura felt very embarrassed, but as time went by, this feeling became weaker and weaker. After all, the situation was urgent and there was nothing she could do. The other party didn't do it on purpose, and this person hadn't taken the opportunity to kill her before. With the power of the other party locking her, it should be easy to do it. It's rare to meet a good person in the void. After thinking it through, the uncomfortable feeling of being hot together suddenly turned into warmth. In the 3 years in the void, she felt that the night was not so cold for the first time. The warm breath even made her feel sleepy, and it became stronger and stronger. "Don't sleep, Laura. You are in someone else's arms. If the other party has bad thoughts after Elrios leaves, it's over." Laura tried to open her eyes wide and warned herself in her heart. An hour later, Russell suddenly heard something and was speechless. What the hell is going on? The rhythmic, even and subtle breathing sound all explained a fact. The little girl in his arms fell asleep. This is too big. With a sigh in his heart, Russell was relieved. Others are not embarrassed. Why should he be embarrassed? Thinking of this, his brother also chose to return to reason. The room was dark, and in the silent environment, only the even and rhythmic breathing sound came from his ears. So, after a day of high concentration, Russell, who had fought twice in a row, seemed to be infected, and the more he listened, the sleepier he became. Can't sleep. Russell stared at the bed with his eyes wide open, as if he wanted to see flowers. What if this woman wakes up the next day and stabs me? If there is no threat from Elrios, then maybe it's the enemy. Although there are no fatal parts in the body, even if the head is stabbed, it won't kill me, but it still hurts. Absolutely can't sleep. Who? Hugging the girl who was as soft and warm as a big pillow, Russell slept very sweetly that night, and didn't even dream. Until he felt something nudging his arms. Russell suddenly opened his eyes, just looking at each other with sleepy eyelids. It was obvious that they also opened their eyes at the same moment. The sky was already bright. The two of them had been hugging each other face to face without knowing when. He hugged her shoulders, she hugged his waist, and now they were staring at each other. "You're annoying me again." Laura, who had just woken up and was still a little dazed, blurted out instinctively. But she came to her senses immediately, and her face turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Russell originally thought that he didn't mean it. After all, it was like this when he just woke up, but now he was stunned. This little girl's red temperature was comparable to his own desperate virus? No? Russell blinked his eyes and was surprised. Isn't this girl X-23 Laura? I wonder how claws can pop out from the gaps between fingers? At this moment, his arms felt light, and Russell saw Laura suddenly pupate like a puppy and quickly crawl out from under the bed. Then he heard hurried footsteps and the sound of a door being slammed open. Seeing this, Russell shook his head and laughed. How ruthless you run away after sleeping. Scrap girl. With a sigh, he slowly crawled out from under the bed, facing the sunlight coming in through the window and stretched his body. Just now, it was just a joke. He hasn't slept so comfortably for a long time. As for the other party running away, he didn't feel anything. It's not a pity for Wolverine's self-healing gene. He's not a good guy, but he's not a bad guy with pus on his feet. There are still choices for looting entries. Otherwise, he can kill the other party in a second when he opens his eyes and recognizes the other party. Wolverine can't live without a head. Russell also walked out of the house after moving his body. Next, he will build a shelter and use the computer he got from Tony Stark to try to crack the time tablet. As for the power supply, he left one of the 3 reactors, which can generate electricity wirelessly. Recalling the route last night, Russell walked in the direction he came from. But not long after, he suddenly heard the sound of running in the distance. Then he saw the little wolf girl appear in his sight, running wildly. At this time, he saw that the other party also obviously saw him. But after being stunned for a moment, he actually gritted his teeth and ran to the right, disappearing a few seconds later. No, do I look so scary? Russell touched his face, a little confused. You know, he is the school idol in school. If he hadn't kept himself clean, I don't know how many infant death devices he would have used. As a result, this little wolf girl ran away when she saw him, twice. This is a bit of a blow. Just when Russell was doubting his life, he suddenly heard a sound from afar again. This time it was the roar of a motorcycle. Soon, 3 motorcycles with a very wasteland style flashed from a distance, with a total of 5 people sitting on them, screaming and chasing in the direction of the little wolf girl. Looked very excited. Russell immediately understood that the little wolf girl didn't run away when she saw him, but didn't want to implicate him. After figuring it out, he felt much better. And, if you lead me here, I may not help you. Now, hehe, you can be a scumbag, but I can't be a scumbag. Russell laughed. He muttered to himself, his pupils slightly brightened, and he disappeared in the blink of an eye. Note, some Wolverines can survive even after being beheaded. Nick Fury conducted an experiment in the comics where a Wolverine lived when beheaded and placed in a vacuum. But Laura's abilities come from the Wolverine movies, so she isn't quite that indestructible. The engine idled louder and louder, echoing through the valley. 3 motorcycles positioned themselves around a lone figure Laura, encircling her like a trap. The men, rough and unkempt in dirty clothes, leered at her, laughing maliciously. Haha, haven't seen such a pretty girl in ages. Looks young, like she's fresh meat, sneered another. Any idea what kind of variant she is? Never seen one like her, one murmured, scratching his head. Who cares? She ran when she saw us, didn't she? Can't be that tough, grinned another. Just don't scratch her up, all right? She'll fetch more that way, one added casually. The men seemed utterly at ease, underestimating her completely. One man with a scruffy beard stepped off his bike, twirling a short knife as he approached her. As he drew near, he smirked, reaching out to touch her face with a greasy hand. Swish! A flash of steel claws, and in an instant, Laura's claws pierced up through his jaw, puncturing his head. Blood spattered as she yanked her claws free, crouching in an attack stance, her eyes fierce. She'd taken one down, making the fight a bit easier. But when she looked up, she was surprised the remaining 4 men on their bikes looked completely unbothered. Something was wrong. She wasn't new to combat after Wolverine's death. She'd led mutant teenagers in battle and learned to read an enemy's reactions. Yet these men weren't angry, shocked, or even fazed. Instead, they smiled in strange satisfaction. The abilities confirmed. Yep, looks like a Wolverine variant. Self-healing factor, that's annoying. Too bad we can't use an electromagnetic device in the woods, would have made dealing with those adamantium bones a lot simpler, one of them mused casually. The corpse at her feet faded, blood and all, vanishing like a mirage. Laura tensed, bewildered by the bizarre scene. One man on a bike turned to the others. All right, who's next? Not me, hurts too much, one muttered. Another man sighed. All right, I'll go. A freckled man in his 20s jumped off his bike and charged straight toward her. Laura was stunned. Knowing her abilities, why would he willingly engage in close combat? But she didn't hesitate. Dodging and slashing, she struck him down, piercing his neck. Another successful kill. Yet, as his body hit the ground, it vanished instantly. Another illusion. One more man left his bike and charged at her. Are they just trying to wear me down? She wondered, attacking and cutting him down too, yet his body disappeared just as quickly. When a third attacker lunged, Laura instinctively aimed for a weak spot, sinking her claws into him with a satisfying thud. But this time, a burst of yellow smoke exploded from his wound, enveloping her before she could react. As she inhaled, her body went numb, collapsing to the ground. Ha! Finally caught you, one of the men jeered from his bike, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Desperately, Laura tried to stand, but her strength failed. A wave of despair washed over her. The poison blocked her healing factor. She was powerless. As the man sauntered over, pride in his eyes, he sneered, "I've watched you fight enough to figure out your move patterns. Just as I thought, you aimed right for the heart. This poison's tailor-made for self-healers like you. Magician's work, truly effective stuff," he added smugly. The man leaned close, grinning as he introduced himself. "Jimmy Madrox. The name ring a bell? My power is clone duplication." "Jimmy," she asked, recognizing the name faintly. "Are you a mutant? I've read about you in X-Men." Jimmy smirked. "You've got it wrong. I'm Brotherhood. That comic stuff is a joke." As he leaned in, Laura took her chance, driving a clawed foot straight up, puncturing his skull. Jimmy's eyes widened in shock before he collapsed, his body disappearing. Laura exhaled shakily, utterly spent. But just as relief began to set in, she heard more motorcycle engines revving up in the distance. Seconds later, another pair of men arrived at the valley entrance. One of them laughed mockingly. "Oh, finally wore yourself out, huh?" The two men sauntered over, their smug confidence making her heart sink. One of them, an older man with deep-set wrinkles, gave Jimmy an approving look. "Impressive, Madrox. Took down a Wolverine variant with just your clones? That's some talent." "You're too kind," Jimmy replied, suppressing a smirk. Laura's eyes dimmed as her last flicker of strength faded, leaving her helpless. As one man reached out, she thought back to the strong, warm arms that had held her the night before, a rare moment of comfort and safety. Maybe she should have sought his help. But just as quickly, she scolded herself. Her own carelessness had led to this. She sighed, accepting her fate, and shut her eyes. Suddenly, a familiar, teasing voice echoed through the valley. "Move that hand any lower, and I'll rip your soul out. Believe it." Laura's eyes snapped open, confused. Was that him? The voice came again, sharp and taunting. "Sorry, but as her boyfriend, I can't let you take her." The man's greasy hand retreated as he and his accomplices turned to see who had spoken. And there he was, Russell, standing tall, watching her captors with a mischievous smile. Laura's heart surged with relief and worry. She was thrilled he'd come but dreaded that he might suffer because of her. Then Russell glanced her way, flashing a grin. "Hey, did you really think I'd let you off the hook after one night?" She blinked, speechless. In that moment, through the trees, light streamed down, casting a halo around him as he stood. And to her, he seemed like an angel in disguise, come to save her from despair. "Kid." The mutant called Siren sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "Even if you're trying to play the hero, you should pick your battles wisely," he warned. "This girl here is Lady Cassandra's property. Interfere, and you'll pay dearly." In the region, everyone knew Cassandra's terrifying reputation. Siren expected this guy would back down. But Jimmy, his teammate, laughed and patted Siren on the shoulder. "Don't sound so threatening, man, you're making us look like the bad guys. Remember, we're no longer with the Brotherhood." Jimmy then looked over at Russell with a calculated grin. "Hey, buddy," he said with feigned sincerity. "This isn't worth the hassle. In Void territory, there are plenty of women around. Why get attached? Spend a night, then move on. But if you join us, you'll get something way better." He motioned toward Laura. "Once Lady Cassandra's had her fun, you'll get your turn with her intact, claws and all." Hearing this, Laura's heart sank. She felt the betrayal of her hope, a familiar weight that settled cold in her chest. Would he really take the easier path? The forest was silent as Russell stood there, seemingly weighing his options. Then, breaking the tension, he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I could agree to that," he said. "But I'm a sucker for a challenge. A girl like this with her claws still attached? That's real excitement." He raised an eyebrow at Jimmy, a smirk spreading across his face. "Tell you what. Why don't you drop to your knees and beg me? Who knows, maybe I'll show mercy and install you as a knockoff Iron Man in a shiny new suit. Maybe then, firemen will actually respect you." His grin widened. Give him a reason to bow down. Jimmy's expression hardened as the insult sank in. He'd tried to trick Russell, but it was clear now that he'd been the one led on. He stepped back, while Siren stepped forward, eyes burning with hatred. "Fine, kid." Siren snarled, his lips curling back to reveal sharpened teeth. "You'll regret that." His sparse red hair faded to a deathly gray, his skin paling into a ghostly shade. Laura, still on the ground, felt a wave of helplessness. She wanted to call out for Russell to run. Siren's ability looked disturbingly powerful, unlike anything she had encountered before. "Get out of here," she rasped, desperate. "Get out? Not a chance," Siren snapped, his mouth widening. In an instant, waves of distorted sound pulsed out, shattering the air around them. Jimmy watched, a smug grin reappearing on his face, expecting to see Russell stumble or fall. But to his shock, Russell dodged with the ease of a seasoned fighter, leaping out of the blast radius just as Siren unleashed his power. Siren was stunned. How did you know my ability?" Russell, perched on a tree branch, shrugged nonchalantly. "I don't know you, and frankly, I'd remember an ugly face like yours if I'd seen it before." Siren's eyes narrowed, his face twisting with rage. "You're dead meat." He opened his mouth again, releasing another violent blast of sound that shattered trees and splintered branches, but Russell danced through the air, weaving between the sonic blasts like a ghost. Siren roared in frustration, his powers rippling in a futile attempt to land a direct hit. Finally, Siren propelled himself forward, his cloak billowing as he launched himself like a missile toward Russell. "You think you can dodge this one, smart mouth?" Below, Laura's heart twisted as she watched, her voice choking. No. But just then, a soft laugh echoed from above. Ever heard of spider senses? Russell quipped as purple strands of magic-infused spider silk shot out, connecting with a nearby tree. With a flick of his wrist, he swung out of Siren's path at the last possible second. Siren's face contorted with confusion. He jerked his head around, trying to locate Russell, only to be met with a mouthful of spider silk that glued his face in place. What the he spluttered, clawing at the sticky threads. As he ripped the webbing from his face, his teammate yelled out a desperate, "Look out." But it was too late. Siren barely had time to see the boot aimed at his face. Wham! Russell's kick sent Siren spiraling backward. He reeled, only to be met with a relentless barrage of punches and kicks. Each strike forced him back, disorienting him further, until he was nothing more than a punching bag in a flurry of blows. From below, Jimmy watched in horror as Siren's body dangled from a massive, magical spiderweb stretched between the trees, his face bruised and swollen. Siren hung limply in the trap, his head slumped forward, defeated. A sudden shadow darkened the forest floor as Russell's silhouette loomed above, hanging upside down like a predator in his web. His smile was eerily calm, his eyes filled with unsettling delight as he whispered, "All right, Jimmy, your turn." Jimmy wanted to say, "If you're going to hit him, then don't hit me," but he knew that wasn't possible. Watching his teammates suffer, he chose silence instead. Bang! The wrist holding the gun was seized, and the bullet narrowly missed his scalp. Trying to die, Russell looked at Jimmy, who seemed on the edge of suicide. His eyes narrowed as he pieced it together, surprise flashing across his face. "I didn't expect you to be a clone," he muttered, almost amused. "Guess I underestimated you." In Russell's view, this was the most cowardly clone he had ever seen, pathetic enough to survive in the void. But it didn't matter. Even though one couldn't usually plunder entries from a clone, Russell understood that Jimmy's clone wasn't truly himself. Even if he did plunder something, it would likely be an ordinary ability, not special. Still, the clone might serve a purpose. With a friendly smile, Russell leaned in and asked, "Want this to be over quickly?" As he spoke, his palm began to glow with a faint red heat. Sizzle. The scent of charred flesh filled the air, and the clone of Jimmy screamed as the searing pain overtook him. In mere seconds, his right hand was charred to ash. Within 5 seconds, the forearm, too, lay in pieces. 8 seconds later, his elbow was reduced to little more than carbon. In 10 seconds, Russell had gained a friendly consensus from Mr. Jimmy. A few minutes later, Russell finished off the clone casually, then paused, deep in thought. He had managed to extract a wealth of information from Jimmy. Cassandra's organization had a roster of 46 mutants, including Red Tank, Red Devil, Fireman, Sabretooth, Deathwoman, Toad, Wartrace, Scorpion Man, Meatball, Torrent, and many others. It boasted powerful weaponry as well as Cassandra's arsenal of enchanted artifacts and potions. With all that strength, Russell wondered how the small group of Wolverines managed to succeed in Deadpool 3. He'd thought the film exaggerated things. For one, if they'd used an electromagnetic car, X-23 and Wolverine wouldn't even have registered as a threat. Blade and Erica? They were only human, barely a match for heavy weaponry. As for Deadpool, his combat power alone wouldn't be enough. Russell just couldn't see how they won. Besides, Cassandra's mental abilities were staggering far beyond his capacity to handle alone. Even Doctor Strange, equipped with the Infinity Ring, had been captured. With a resigned sigh, Russell thought, the time tablet might be my only way forward. Determined, he raised his weapon, aiming at the unconscious Siren. A second later, a familiar system voice echoed in his mind. Entry successfully plundered. X ability, sound wave, blue-purple. The ability description followed. Sonar, can assess surroundings with various resolutions in complete darkness and gauge the distance of objects. Sonic scream, emits sound waves that cause dizziness and imbalance in targets. Flight, using a special wingsuit, can hover or fly at subsonic speeds. Russell didn't hesitate and loaded the entry immediately. Although he'd need a wingsuit to fly, the Venom suit allowed him to avoid the hassle of switching gear. He could simply shapeshift for flight as needed. Sonic Scream, he thought, would make a solid surprise attack in close combat. Satisfied with the results of his mission, Russell casually snapped his fingers, dispelling a web of magic. If he hadn't wanted to experiment with Spider-Man's abilities combining magic with close-quarters combat, he'd have taken down Siren in 10 seconds. He turned toward the still-stunned young wolf girl and squatted, offering a smile. "Hey, kid. I saved your life. Any thoughts on how you'll repay me?" Laura blinked up at him, half fearing he'd vanish if she took her eyes off him for even a second. "Are you really that dense?" she muttered, dazed. "What kind of drugs are you on?" Russell pinched her cheek and checked her pupils, finding them normal. But just as he began to feel confused, Laura spoke. "My name is Laura." Her voice was slow, deliberate, like she feared he might not catch it. Russell nodded. "I'm Russell." He decided to adopt his name in this world, dropping any trace of his old identity. After she repeated his name, Laura suddenly looked up, her expression serious. "I'm not a scumbag," she declared. Russell chuckled, caught off guard. "I know, I was just messing around." Quickly, he changed the subject. "So, where's your base? I'll take you back." Without hesitation, she replied, "I'll be your girlfriend." Russell nearly choked. "Relax. Comics aren't real life." He scooped her onto his back effortlessly, carrying her through 2 hours of forest paths to her base, a secluded, overgrown structure near a stream. Though it looked abandoned from the outside, it was cozy within, with mismatched sofas and a clean water reservoir. Where are your teammates? He asked. I've been on my own in the void for 3 years, Laura replied. Russell settled her on a sofa and asked, why didn't you join a friendlier mutant organization? Laura shook her head. When I arrived, Cassandra's people found me first. You can't tell who's good or who's hiding something here. Russell nodded, knowing good people were rare in the void. So, how are you feeling? I can't move yet, Laura admitted, her voice weaker. Russell scratched his head. Leaving her vulnerable now would be a waste of effort. Then I'll stay a while longer. He lifted her again. Where's your room? Laura pointed toward a dark cave. Russell navigated through the shadows until he reached a small, carved-out room, barely 10 square meters in size. With his night vision, he could tell it was designed as a hiding spot. Just as he was about to lay her down, Laura's grip tightened, and they both stumbled. Russell's spider sense stayed quiet. She meant no harm. But what was she up to? Didn't you say I was your girlfriend? She whispered. Are you serious? I am, Laura said without missing a beat. Russell could feel her breath on his face, and warmth began to rise. You're too young. I'm 16. That's old enough, she countered. I like you. You can feel it, can't you? Russell couldn't deny it, unsure of what to say. She continued, I can feel your heartbeat. You can't pretend you're annoyed. Taking a deep breath, Russell finally smiled. Letting himself relax, he leaned in. That night, the silence of the darkness was broken although they were both newcomers. The battle was intense that night. Wolverine's regenerative abilities faced off against Spider Totem, Super Serum, and the Extremis virus, a combination with incredible endurance and charging power. Each attack left the other scrambling to recover, their strengths tested to the limit. The opponent was cunning and continued to fight back as they recovered, but ultimately, Russell's combined abilities proved stronger. He emerged as the undisputed victor. The next morning, while his defeated foe lay exhausted and still asleep, Russell was full of energy and already out gathering supplies. Over the course of 3 hours, he brought back an array of equipment, computers, servers, arc reactors, mechanical parts, engines, alcohol, medicines, daily essentials, and more. When Laura woke up and saw the stash, she was stunned. Did you rob someone? She asked, wide-eyed. After living a life of scarcity for 3 years, she had never seen so many valuable items, especially the reactor, a highly coveted power source in this wasteland-like void. While stabilizing the power supply and setting up the computer, Russell replied casually, Captain Hydra tried to trick me, but I took him down, along with his teammates, Spider-Man and Iron Man. Their stash is mine now. Laura's eyes widened in shock. She knew exactly who those villains were: infamous, ruthless, and feared. Yet Russell had defeated them without a trace, leaving her feeling unexpectedly proud. She watched him for a moment and then said, Russell, you're amazing. Russell raised an eyebrow. Didn't you realize that last night? Laura smirked. That was a temporary truce. Let's have a rematch tonight. With renewed energy from her night's rest, she was sure she'd win this time. 2 hours later, after another intense sparring session, Russell emerged drenched in sweat, victorious once again. Laura had put up an impressive fight, stronger than before, but in the end, the power of his crucible heart proved too overwhelming. After a quick rinse, Russell went back to work. He stabilized the power, set up the server, and used magic vines learned from Baron Mordo to cover the house. From the outside, the mountain looked overgrown with vines, concealing any sign of the hidden home within. Satisfied, Russell planned to create a meditation room where he could practice magic, building on his natural aptitude. As night fell, Russell tried not to disturb the resting Laura. He ate a quick meal and began experimenting with the time tablet. Tony Stark's advanced computer and its armor-enhanced computing power offered hope of cracking the tablet's locking program. Russell was confident the TVA's tech could be hacked with patience. While the computer worked, Russell went over magical spells in his mind. Mordo's notes left him with 3 advanced spells to master: Astral Projection, Ixaron's Ice Vine, and Form of Archaon. The last was particularly powerful, enabling one to create numerous clones, a trick Doctor Strange once used against Thanos. Just then, the computer beeped. It had identified the lock program on the time tablet but required more computing power to crack it. Insufficient computing power. Russell muttered, searching through the pile of armor parts until he found a specialized GPU. Installing it increased the reactor's output, but a new message displayed on the screen: cracking would take 3 years. No way, it has to be faster than that. Determined, Russell decided to visit the black market to hunt for more computing hardware. With teleportation magic and the siren's flying ability, he was confident he could escape if any trouble arose. Russell had planned to go to the black market the next day but kept procrastinating. Days passed, and it wasn't until the 5th day that he finally got moving. Why the delay? Simple, his self-discipline wasn't the strongest, and distractions kept piling up. Fortunately, he wouldn't have to walk this time. Driving a Honda Odyssey, he reached the mine in just 3 hours. Last time, he'd only watched from a distance, but this time he drove straight into the market. Fighting might be prohibited in the black market, but Russell still chose not to bring Laura, who was busy training at home, determined to beat him in their next sparring match. Stepping out of the car, he observed his surroundings. 2 dilapidated, 18th-century Western-style cabins stood outside the mine, but they were empty. The actual black market lay inside the mine itself, illuminated by dim, old-fashioned incandescent lamps spaced every 10 meters or so. He walked downward through the tunnel for about 100 meters until he came upon a golden door adorned with cuneiform engravings, a distinctly Egyptian touch that felt out of place here. What really caught his attention, though, were the guards standing by the door, clad in worn TVA combat uniforms. At first, he almost attacked them, but a closer look revealed they were merely time prisoners in disguise, possibly a tactic by the black market's owner to intimidate newcomers. I haven't seen you before, newcomer. You know the rules, one guard asked. Russell nodded. No fighting, and an entrance fee of at least 0.1 ounces of gold, right? The little wolf girl had filled him in on the rules. He understood the no fighting policy, but gold seemed odd. This was a wasteland, after all. Fortunately, Laura had some on hand, otherwise, he'd be out searching for it now. Russell handed over a small piece of gold, but suddenly, a piercing alert went off in his mind. Warning, 0.1 micrograms of spiritual essence will be lost. Then, ding. Soul immunity activated. Warning cancelled. Before he could process it, one of the guards barked, "What's wrong? If you're not going in, the gold won't be returned." Russell managed a smile. "I'm going in. Just remembered I left my car low on gas." He turned to go, but another guard chuckled. "As long as you've got something valuable, you can trade for anything here, even a full tank or a suit of Iron Man's armor." Russell nodded politely and entered, his expression serious. He realized now why they demanded gold. This was a trade of souls. That gold wasn't metal at all but spiritual essence. Over time, these small trades could add up to an astronomical amount of spiritual essence. The black market's owner had to be connected to the Egyptian pantheon, yet Russell was baffled as to why he had immunity from these trades. Was it because he was a time traveler, his soul foreign to this reality? He cleared the thought from his mind. Dimensional demons were a far bigger threat than Egyptian gods, and he needed to remain focused here. After waiting a few moments to be sure he hadn't been detected for evading the spiritual essence trade, he ventured further into the market. A short walk down the corridor opened up to a sprawling underground hall, illuminated by a miniature sun set in the dome above. Russell recognized it as an artificial sun created by magic, likely activating his knowledge talent, the knowledge curse, for magic. Surveying the market, he noticed it was divided into two sections, the inner ring, where valuables were sold, and the outer ring, where time prisoners sat hawking various trinkets. Russell quickly spotted what he was after: parts for steel armor. There were 4 computing components available, but the trade requirements were steep food, alcohol, painkillers, weapons, high-tech gadgets, or magical artifacts. Unfazed, Russell knew he could make a magical item, the red crystal defense necklace from Mordo's notes, as long as he could find a suitable gem. Gems were easy enough to come by, so he strolled around the stalls, trading some canned goods for gasoline and new clothes for Laura. As he prepared to leave, he caught sight of a man who looked just like Captain America, down to his square jaw and athletic build. Russell chuckled and muttered, "Not quite, Cap." The man noticed his glance and snapped, "Back off? Even here, people are ogling? Damn, being handsome is a curse." Russell stifled a laugh. It was definitely Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, known for his fiery temper and bad attitude. Russell shook his head and exited with his newly acquired goods. Outside the mine, he noticed a gathering of people in a few vehicles, a hellfire-painted convertible and 2 heavily modified trucks, parked about 50 meters from the entrance. The group, about 6 or 7 in total, all stared intently at the mine. Johnny Storm, who had exited just before him, shouted angrily, "You idiots! You know the rules, no causing trouble here." But the group laughed, one of them sneering, "Shut it, Johnny. This isn't about you. You're hardly worth it." Johnny looked around in confusion, and Russell stepped up with a calm, almost mocking smile. "Out of my way, please. Got people waiting for me at home." The group's focus shifted, but Russell ignored their stares and continued on his way, holding back a smirk. The moment Thunderbolt heard a voice behind him, he noticed Pyro and Sabretooth in the distance, all staring in the same direction towards someone behind him. Realizing that he was no longer the target, he turned around and found the person emerging from the cave was the same guy who had checked him out before. Thunderbolt couldn't help blurting out, "You've got a girlfriend in the void too? Wait, you're not gay." "None of your business," Russell replied with a calm glance as he passed. This time, Thunderbolt didn't respond with anger. Instead, he chuckled with relief. "So that crazy lady has her eyes on you, pretty boy? Guess I'm safe." With a playful wink, he added, "I heard she's pretty twisted, likes to get real hands-on with people. Think your little frame can handle that, bro?" He shrugged. "But hey, if you're scared, I'll fight for you. Just a box of the cheapest wine." Russell held back a smirk, thinking, "Are you just mad that she's not after you?" Instead, he glanced at Thunderbolt and offered, "You should head back, Flame Baby." "Flame Baby?" Human Torch's face flashed, his voice rising. "Dr. Doom couldn't take me down, the Silver Surfer didn't stand a chance, and Galactus calls me daddy. Who's countering me?" Without waiting for a response, he tossed his kin to the ground and yelled, "Hellfire!" Flames erupted across his body as he shot off toward Pyro and Sabretooth. Very dramatic. Russell rolled his eyes, muttering, "I still liked it better when he yelled, 'Avengers Assemble!'" He dropped what he was holding and followed at a steady pace, already anticipating the mess he'd have to clean up. Sure enough, the moment Russell stepped out of the mine, he saw Human Torch hovering in the air, shooting flames. But Pyro quickly absorbed them, sending him crashing to the ground with a painful thud. Torch groaned, his face contorted in pain. "Bro, save me." Not even your daddy can save you now, cackled Toad as he shot out his tumor-covered tongue, aiming to snag Torch. But a purple strand of spider silk shot past, intercepting Toad's tongue and pulling him face-first into the dirt. With a scowl, Russell pulled the dazed human Torch to his feet. Thanks, man, Torch grinned sheepishly. I owe you a drink. He rubbed his shoulder. I just miscalculated. If I'd used the flame jet, I would have turned that guy into toast. Russell rolled his eyes. Stubborn, he thought. Just then, a slow clap echoed across the mine. Pyro looked at Russell with a smirk. So, Jimmy was right. You're Spider-Man pretty rare around here in the void. Russell wasn't surprised. He'd sensed someone watching him in the trading hall, waiting to strike. And apparently, these mutants didn't mind making a scene at the mine entrance, disregarding the black market's rules entirely. Either they didn't know about the powers behind it, or he'd misjudged those powers himself. Either way, it didn't matter, this fight was inevitable. Who wants him? Pyro asked calmly, as if Russell were no threat at all. Sabretooth leapt down with a heavy thud, cracking his knuckles as he grinned. I'll do it. Tigers eat spiders, it's gonna be easy. The Human Torch swallowed hard, sidling over to Russell and whispering, Dude, these guys don't fight fair. How about we head back? Russell clapped him on the shoulder, grinning. Don't worry. I'm not just any Spider-Man, I'm a Captain America enhanced Spider-Man, watch this. Torch looked doubtful but didn't argue. Despite being drained, he refused to back down. With a ferocious roar, Sabretooth's claws extended as he charged forward. Russell walked toward him slowly, looking almost vulnerable. Just as they were about to collide, Russell sidestepped the attack, catching Sabretooth's wrist and striking with lightning speed, his hand crushing into Sabretooth's neck. Sabretooth stumbled forward, managing only a few steps before collapsing to his knees, his head nearly severed, held only by a thread of skin as blood poured from his neck. The entire scene fell silent. No one had expected this outcome. Then, Russell's voice cut through the quiet as he chuckled. Who's next? Pyro narrowed his eyes. Sabretooth wasn't weak, his healing ability, strength, and fighting skills were formidable. Yet, he had been taken down instantly, and this Spider-Man didn't even have a specific counter to his powers. Something was different about this one. The Human Torch stood in stunned silence. He thought his new friend could win, but not this easily. Russell's speed, strength, and skill had completely overwhelmed Sabretooth. And his casual taunt, who's next? That was so cool. Why couldn't I be the one saying that? Torch thought, storing the line for future use. Then he took a step back as he saw the others, Pyro, Toad, Death, Callisto, and Hedgehog, begin to advance. These villains weren't stupid, they weren't about to go down one by one. Pyro attacked first, raising his hand as the ignition device on his wrist created a small flame that rapidly expanded. In moments, a massive column of fire erupted, engulfing Russell. The air around them rippled with heat. The Human Torch swallowed hard. Not because of the heat, he was used to that, but he hadn't expected Russell, who'd been so cool a moment ago, to be incinerated just like that. Guess Spider-Man is out of his element here, he thought. Time to run. Just then, a lazy voice emerged from within the flames. Can it go any higher? I can still take it. The fire's 900-degree heat was nothing to Russell, who could withstand temperatures up to 2,600 degrees. Torch, who had been ready to bolt, stopped in his tracks. Dude, you're awesome. I knew you'd pull through. Now go get those jerks. Yeah, you were about to run a second ago, Toad thought, sneering. But even he was taken aback that the flames hadn't phased Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Pyro's expression darkened. His intended prey was talking like he was relaxing in a hot spring, complaining about the water temperature. Infuriating. You want to die? Pyro snarled, raising both hands to intensify the fire. Flames twisted into a fiery tornado, the heat growing as he tried to compress the blaze into a high-pressure inferno. But the color barely shifted. Heh, low-level mutant, sneered Human Torch. Nice idea, but that's not gonna cut it. Mocked by the Human Torch, Pyro's face twisted in fury. The flame's heat had increased, but not enough to make a real difference. Hedgehog, he shouted. Hedgehog immediately sprang into action, curling up and launching a spray of dense, barbed spikes toward the flames. Before the spikes could penetrate, a shadow leapt out of the fire. I've been waiting for you, Russell smirked. Toad, ready to pounce, launched his tongue, wrapping it around Russell's body. Meanwhile, Callisto disappeared, using her enhanced speed to close the distance in a fraction of a second, her dagger poised to strike. But before she could attack, a blood-curdling scream erupted as Toad's tongue hissed and sizzled, burning from the heat. Russell had intentionally let himself get tangled just to set a trap. Callisto didn't care. Her teammate's pain was irrelevant. But as she struck, her dagger found only air she'd missed, and the momentum threw her off balance. A mocking voice sounded beside her ear. You're easy to predict. Before she could react, Russell's hand snapped to her neck, breaking it instantly. She crumpled to the ground without a sound. The Human Torch's eyes went wide. He'd seen the whole thing. So that's why Pyro's flames had no effect on him. He could generate heat much higher himself. And Russell had anticipated every move, dodging Callisto's lethal strike and dispatching her without a second thought. He had taken down yet another one with ease. But the fight wasn't over. The next moment, Hedgehog charged in, undeterred. The Human Torch tensed. If this guy's rushing in after seeing all that, he must be something serious, he thought, inching backward. Maybe I should back off. Before he could retreat further, there was a loud bang. Russell kicked Hedgehog with such force that he flew over 10 meters, spinning in the air and vomiting blood before crashing to the ground, dead on impact. Torch straightened up, embarrassed. I can't believe I was actually scared of this fool. Hopefully, Russell hadn't noticed. Russell turned to him with a raised brow. Why'd you step back? Was the ground too hot? The Human Torch kept his cool and, without missing a beat, said, Brother, you're such a joker. My legs are just a little numb from standing so long, you know. I usually fly. Ever heard of the bird without legs? I'm pretty much the same. Admitting he was scared? Not a chance, not in this lifetime. Only by playing it tough could he hold on to a shred of dignity. As he spoke, he noticed something and pointed behind Russell, urgently saying, Hey, Pyro's trying to make a break for it. Russell replied calmly, I know, but I had to make sure you were okay. Without even looking, he extended his arm backward, grabbing something with a swift, downward motion. Torch blinked, momentarily blinded by a sudden light. Wait, it wasn't the sun. A golden meteor was blazing down from the sky. Boom! A fiery, holy sword crashed down, hitting Pyro's convertible dead on, triggering a violent explosion. The force of the blast created a powerful shockwave, knocking Deathstrike, who was charging at Russell, off her feet. Torch's face dropped. He wanted to duck for cover, but it was too late. He was flung back, landing hard, mouth full of sand, head spinning. Puh, he spat out sand, muttering, Isn't that a bit overkill for an explosion? He shook his head, wide-eyed. That wasn't a normal car blast, it had to be the flaming sword. When the dust settled, he looked up to see a massive crater where the car had been, with twisted scraps of metal scattered around. As for Pyro, Torch looked around but couldn't spot anything. It was like he'd been reduced to ashes. Torch suddenly remembered how, when they'd first met, he'd called Russell a pretty boy. Was it too late to apologize? Maybe he should take the hint and stay on this guy's good side. Russell, unaware of Torch's inner turmoil, turned his attention to Deathstrike, who was staggering to her feet. Why didn't you run? He asked. Deathstrike's face was expressionless. She replied coolly, Lady Cassandra ordered me to bring you back. Pyro's good at talking his way out, but if I return without you, I'd face a worse fate than death. Russell grinned, unsympathetic. I hear your healing abilities on par with Wolverine's, maybe even better than Sabertooth's. Think you'd survive if I took your head off? Deathstrike's fingers flexed, sharp adamantium claws extending from her fingertips. She licked her lips. Come find out. Minutes later, Russell stood, holding Deathstrike's head by her spine. Her eyes had faded to a lifeless gray. Guess you're not as tough as Wolverine. The Human Torch, watching, was horrified. Russell, blood-streaked and clutching a head and spine, looked more terrifying than anything in a nightmare. Suddenly, his previous bravado didn't feel so essential. In situations like this, maybe it was best to know when to fold. Then he noticed Russell looking his way and, panicking, forced a shaky smile. Russell frowned slightly, sensing that Torch was probably up to something foolish, but since his spider sense hadn't kicked in, he dismissed it. As Russell's fine wounds began to heal and his suit repaired itself, a system voice echoed in his mind. Entry plunder completed. Acquired ability, Deathstrike's X Factor, purple. Now possessing a self-healing factor nearly on Wolverine's level, Russell was immune to fatal injuries except decapitation and could regenerate any body part rapidly. And with the added body augmentation, he was impressed. Though not quite Wolverine level, the regeneration speed far surpassed the Extremis virus's healing. Plus, the decapitation weakness was offset by the virus. He was now as close to Wolverine's durability as he could be. Russell mentally reviewed all the powers he'd plundered so far. X ability, Sabertooth, blue-purple. Enhanced healing and a lifespan of 300 years. X ability, Hedgehog, green. Ability to launch spikes from his body. X ability, Toad, green. Enhanced jumping and an extremely stretchy, toxin-secreting tongue up to 10 meters. Note, loading this ability adds toad-like skin. X ability, Pyro, blue. Flame control and absorption. Russell wasn't overly impressed with Pyro's power, thinking it was just a nice backup for fire manipulation. But suddenly, the system spoke again. Fusion-compatible entry detected, Extremis virus. Fusion in progress. Fusion complete. Extremis virus, flame blood control, purple. Upgraded temperature to 3,800 degrees. Now able to create and control both flames and fiery blood, and absorb flames at will. Warning, excessive flame blood usage can cause temporary weakness. Russell felt a rush of power. Entries could merge, enhancing their potency. His fire abilities were now far stronger, the temperature and versatility of his attacks magnified. Even Pyro's flames couldn't have matched this. And the flame blood weakness? Not an issue. With Sabertooth's and Deathstrike's self-healing, he could easily compensate. Russell revised his opinion of Pyro's power. It was no longer trivial, it was extraordinary. As for Hedgehog and Toad, he couldn't help but chuckle. Yeah, those two can go. Russell was in a surprisingly good mood. Even though the fused ability was only rated at the purple tier, its boost to his combat effectiveness was undeniable. This experience had shown him something exciting. Future battles against Cassandra's forces might yield even greater rewards. Maybe, just maybe, next time, he'd take the initiative himself. But before he could dwell on his victory for long, a playful yet menacing voice cut through the air. Tisk, tisk. You really don't leave anyone alive, do you? Russell's scalp prickled as his spider sense erupted in full alarm mode. Yet when he looked up, he saw nothing. Torch, however, seemed to have caught on. With a panicked cry, he abandoned all pretense of bravery and bolted toward the black market only to collapse mid-step and dangle upside down in the air like a marionette. Russell's pupils narrowed as realization hit him. He already knew who had arrived. Cassandra. Just his luck. The so-called Queen of Madness had shown up, just when he'd thought she was far away. Or worse, had she been watching the entire time. Russell's body temperature spiked as he instinctively shifted into a defensive stance. He reached out with his spider sense, searching for her. But the attempt was futile. Malice was everywhere, surrounding him like a thick fog. Then her voice echoed again, teasing and probing. Paradox lied to me, didn't he? He said you only had the extremis virus. But now I see powers beyond that, spider abilities and even magic. Was he mistaken? Or... The voice paused, reappearing behind him like a whisper in his ear. Are you hiding secrets from me? Before he could react, Cassandra materialized behind him. Her outstretched hand moved toward his head, ready to dig into his memories. Russell tried to dodge, but an invisible force locked his body in place. He couldn't even twitch a finger. Torch, still dangling nearby, groaned in despair. This was it. Cassandra was too strong. But while Torch gave up, Russell refused to. Cassandra was formidable, but he had a plan. He wasn't relying on his high-temperature body to stop her. That was useless against someone with her mental resilience and regenerative powers. Instead, he activated an ability. Magical Energy Burst, Furnace Overload. This was a high-risk move. It pushed his body to its absolute limit, exhausting even his self-healing factors. But Russell didn't care. If he didn't fight back now, he was as good as dead. As his power surged, something unexpected happened. Boom! A deep bell tolled, and golden sunlight flooded the battlefield. Russell suddenly regained control of his body. Without hesitation, he leapt away from Cassandra's grasp, intending to escape using the sling ring portal. But just as he began to open a gateway, the space around him locked down, extinguishing the portal in a flash of golden sparks. Cassandra's voice rang out, furious. Knunsu, you're interfering outside the black market? Are you really willing to challenge me here? Russell froze. Khonsu, the moon god? He turned his gaze upward. Hovering in the sky was a towering figure, draped in golden bandages with the head of a bird and the body of a man, holding a radiant scepter. Sunlight poured from the scepter, illuminating the battlefield. Russell frowned. This Khonsu looked nothing like the one he remembered. Except for the bird head, this figure resembled a sun god more than a moon deity. A deep, ancient voice echoed from above. Cassandra, you are as reckless as ever. Your spiritual power is strong, but your heart is weak. Without faith, you'll only bring about your own destruction. Cassandra's expression twisted in anger. Save your lectures, Khonsu. Do you really want a fight today? Khonsu descended, planting his scepter on the ground. Golden sunlight radiated outward, forming a glowing sun emblem beneath him. His voice boomed. You've forgotten the rules, Cassandra. This is the void. You cannot act freely here. Cassandra sneered, her fury uncontained. Rules? Don't make me laugh. I've had enough of you. Clapping her hands together, she compressed the air itself into an invisible, crushing force, targeting Khonsu at the center. But as the pressure intensified, the sun emblem flared to life, igniting the very air around them. Breathing became impossible as the environment burned. Cassandra's own body began to catch fire, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her hands, summoning a massive, 100-meter-tall sandstone giant from the ground. The colossal creature rose, destroying the sun emblem beneath it, and swung its enormous fist at Khonsu. Meanwhile, Cassandra used her telekinetic powers to pin Khonsu in place, preventing him from wielding his scepter. Russell, watching from the distance, didn't hesitate. He conjured a massive flaming sword through a magic circle and hurled it at the giant. The blade struck true, slicing through the construct's chest and toppling its upper half. Cassandra laughed mockingly. Fool, it's just a puppet. You're wasting your strength. Her voice turned venomous as she continued. Let's see how brave you are when it's your turn to face me. She raised her hands, preparing another devastating attack. But before she could finish, a blazing sword appeared directly above her. Russell smirked. Thanks for the tip. The flaming blade descended with relentless fury, shattering Cassandra's puppet completely. She raised an invisible barrier just in time, blocking the strike, but her focus faltered. Russell seized the moment. He formed a gun gesture with his hand, channeling his burning blood ability. A superheated blood arrow, glowing like molten lava, shot from his fingertip at supersonic speed. The arrow pierced Cassandra's skull with deadly precision, dropping her to the ground in an instant. Russell stood still, watching her motionless body with suspicion. Had he won? It felt too easy. Seconds passed. No feedback came from his ability Plundering System. Then, Khonsu's deep voice broke the silence. Don't waste your time. She's not dead. Her mental power has already escaped. Cassandra's escape via spiritual power, abandoning her physical body, didn't surprise Russell much. After all, someone like Professor X could do the same. However, Russell's focus wasn't on Cassandra anymore. His gaze shifted to Khonsu, the enigmatic god who had just intervened in the battle. Russell couldn't shake the feeling that Khonsu's abilities were far more powerful than what had been displayed. And more importantly, he wasn't sure whether he was truly safe. Khonsu's intentions weren't clear. Did he step in because of some unbreakable black market rules? Or was there another reason? Russell outwardly maintained his composure, but internally, his guard was up. His spider sense was on overdrive, ready to react at the slightest hint of danger. If needed, he could activate his venom suit and use the siren's power to escape. But deep down, Russell knew such an escape would likely be futile. The power gap between him and Khonsu was just too vast. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. It was frustrating, no, infuriating to have his fate in someone else's hands. This entire ordeal had been a wake-up call. Killing the Snake team and Mordo had been easy. Overpowering the siren and the fireman felt effortless. It had all made him arrogant, too confident in his newfound strength. But this? Facing someone like Cassandra or worse, Khonsu was a stark reminder of his limits. He needed to be more prepared. The time tablet had to be repaired as soon as possible. The Void, while a relatively safe base for now, wasn't a place where he could grow stronger indefinitely. If he truly wanted to unlock his potential, he'd have to leave and seek opportunities in the timeline. Russell's thoughts were interrupted by the scorching sensation of Khonsu's gaze falling on him. Then the ancient, weathered voice spoke again. "Relax, human. Your debt has already been paid." Russell froze. Debt? He had no idea what Khonsu meant but managed a polite smile. "Thank you, Mr. Khonsu, for your help." Khonsu's empty, bandaged eyes seemed to glimmer with amusement. "There's no need to thank me. I value fairness above all else." And Cassandra needed to be reminded of the rules. She's grown far too bold. Russell wisely refrained from asking why Khonsu didn't just finish Cassandra off. He didn't want to know what layers of divine politics or cosmic rules were at play. The sunlight brightened for a moment as Khonsu's form began to dissolve into light. "No need to linger," Khonsu said, his voice echoing with finality. "This matter is settled." And with that, Khonsu vanished, leaving no trace behind. Russell exhaled in relief, finally allowing himself to relax. He'd been worried that the god might turn back around and involve him in some grand, cosmic scheme. That was a trope he'd read about in countless third-rate novels, ordinary people getting dragged into the machinations of powerful beings, usually with disastrous results. "Glad I'm off his radar," Russell muttered. The crisis, it seemed, was truly over. Russell turned to where Torch was sprawled on the ground, still dazed from the battle. Picking up Cassandra's lifeless body, he strode toward the flamboyant mutant and gave his face a few firm pats. "Hey, Flame Boy," Russell said. "Still in there, or did your brain take a vacation?" Torch flinched, snapping out of his trance. "Damn it, that crazy woman," he blurted. "Did you see that giant? It almost flattened me when it fell. What the hell does she usually use that thing for, huh?" Russell smirked. "Careful what you say. Her mental power still lingering, she might hear you." "What?" Torch's eyes widened in terror, his face draining of color. "She's still here? Oh, this is it. I'm done for. It's over." Russell couldn't help but laugh. Seeing his companion's panic made him feel oddly better. Misery, after all, loves company. Torch quickly realized he'd been duped. "You're messing with me, aren't you?" "Maybe," Russell said, grinning. Torch sighed, shaking his head. "Man, I just came here to trade for some supplies, and I almost got killed. Now I've got Cassandra's attention, too. Great." Russell patted him on the shoulder. "Don't worry. If she comes for you, I'll help you take her down." Torch rolled his eyes. "You? Protect me? You can't even handle yourself?" "If that day ever comes, I'll kneel and call you daddy." Russell laughed. "Deal. But before that," he added, "I need a favor." Torch immediately stepped back, covering his backside with a wary look. "What do you want?" Russell sighed, annoyed. "Relax. I just need you to trade this adamantium alloy for me. Get me a couple of steel armor parts with computing components." Adamantium alloy was valuable. He estimated it could fetch at least 2 armor pieces. Torch's expression softened. "That's it? You had me worried there for a second." Without asking why Russell couldn't go himself, Torch grabbed the alloy and headed for the black market. More than 10 minutes later, Torch returned, handing over 3 steel armor parts. Russell tossed the components into his Honda Odyssey and drove home, finally safe. Now, all that remained was repairing the time tablet. Once that was done, his next journey would begin. Night. The little wolf girl was curled up in Russell's arms, fast asleep. Russell, however, lay wide awake, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. The computing components had been assembled and connected, significantly shortening the time required to crack the time tablet. What would have taken 3 years now required just a month. That was good news. It meant he wouldn't need to risk another trip to the black market. But once the time tablet was unlocked, there was a new problem. He couldn't take Laura with him across the timeline. It wasn't just unpredictable, it was inconvenient and dangerous. Leaving her here wasn't ideal either. The Void was far from safe. While Cassandra had fled in apparent defeat, reduced to nothing but her mental essence, Russell understood the reality of her power. Minds like hers could easily find and occupy a new body, fully regenerating without the need for rest or recovery. Next time, there might not be a Khonsu around to intervene. Relying on luck alone was a fool's game. He had to make a move, and soon. Russell's thoughts drifted to a ruined city far from Cassandra's territory. It was a perfect hideout, remote, isolated, and on the opposite side of the Void from her organization. More importantly, it was home to a group of eccentric Lokis. Their Asgardian phantom magic was exactly what he needed to enhance his timeline travels. Step 1. Move to the ruined city. Step 2. Secure the magic. After that, he could decide where to go in the timeline. Suddenly, a boom shook the ground. The house trembled, loose dirt falling from the ceiling. An earthquake? Here in the void, Russell muttered, confused but alert. He instinctively grabbed the now awake little wolf girl and dashed outside in seconds. Both froze in shock. In the distance, a golden energy pillar pierced the dark sky, illuminating the entire void. The sheer destructive force radiating from it was palpable, even from miles away. That's the direction of the black market, Laura whispered, her voice trembling. Russell's face darkened. Revenge? No, Cassandra alone couldn't wield such power. That left only one possibility, the TVA. They were the only ones capable of controlling the timeline and unleashing attacks of such magnitude. A booming voice echoed across the void, malicious and triumphant. Foolish survivors. Did you think my appearance was a coincidence? You've been played. The voice laughed, chilling and full of scorn. When I was pruned, I discovered this loophole here. I can harvest souls freely without creating time branches. And now, thanks to all your positive and negative energy, I will ascend. Today, I surpass the Father and become a god in this place. A faint green glow appeared, gradually coalescing into a massive pyramid, its structure made entirely of shimmering soul energy. Russell watched as the green glow darkened into gold, the pyramid becoming increasingly solid and terrifying. The energy pillar in the sky thinned and vanished, replaced by a flash of blood-red lightning. From the sky descended Elrios, the monstrous time beast, roaring no longer but diving straight into the pyramid with deadly purpose. Boom! The void shook again as Elrios collided with the pyramid, exploding in a burst of red lightning that cascaded like a waterfall over the structure. The lightning hissed and crackled, corroding the golden pyramid as it spread. Dream on! Khonsu's voice roared across the sky, filled with divine wrath. Power Sun. The dark void turned today as a blazing sun materialized overhead, radiating intense light that burned through the red lightning. The tide seemed to turn, but Russell wasn't convinced. He'd seen too many twists to believe victory was so easily achieved. His suspicions were confirmed when a series of glowing TVA portals opened above the battlefield. From the portals flowed no time guards or mechanical puppets. Instead, a viscous orange-gold liquid poured down in streams, landing first on Khonsu's sun. The sun dimmed immediately, golden cracks spreading across its surface. Russell recognized the pattern. It was the same as the fractures he'd seen in the castle at the end of time. As the sun darkened, the void was plunged back into night. The once blazing sphere turned solid and fell to the ground with a deafening crash. Golden wedge-shaped runes appeared in the air, arranging themselves into a colossal magic circle. Fake stars shimmered above, and pale moonlight streamed down, illuminating the orange-gold liquid. But the moonlight had no purifying effect. Instead, it became corrupted, turning the same orange-gold color before solidifying and shattering into fragments that fell to the ground. Russell observed the shards closely. They were lined with golden patterns designed to seal energy, objects, perhaps even time itself. Khonsu's voice echoed again, no longer arrogant but furious. This is impossible. How can there be so much negative time energy? Is this why you bind all timelines? Despicable time thieves. A spectral scale appeared in the sky, its balance tipping wildly as part of the golden pyramid collapsed onto one side. In response, the entire void tilted unnaturally, and a swirling vortex opened a gate to the afterlife. Khonsu's figure emerged, his tone heavy with finality. To the one who remains, I curse you to perish in time. With that, he dove into the vortex, disappearing as the gate closed behind him. The remnants of the sun on the ground cracked open, leaving behind a core no larger than an eyeball. In the next instant, the core erupted, flooding the void with blinding light. When the light faded, the sky was dark once more. The portals, the liquid, the pyramid fragments, everything was gone, as if nothing had ever happened. Russell stared at the sky, deep in thought. This history didn't appear in Deadpool 3 or Loki. Had it been covered up? Or had something changed? And why did this moon god seem to know so much? He sighed. This was Marvel, a universe of endless uncertainties. Following the plot lines was a surefire way to an early grave. More than ever, Russell felt the urgency to grow stronger. He decided to leave for the ruined city immediately, no more waiting. But just as he turned to move, something strange happened. Tiny green particles appeared in his vision, swirling and gathering toward him like moths to a flame. Russell stared at the strange green motes of light floating before him, feeling a pang of familiarity. Why does this look like the spirit Khonsu summoned earlier? Before he could analyze further, the little wolf girl's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Aren't we leaving, Russell? Huh? Russell turned to her, puzzled. Can't you see it? See what? She tilted her head, confused. Russell's brow furrowed. The green light, the same as the pyramid earlier. It's everywhere. Laura squinted, scanning the area carefully, but her expression remained blank. I don't see anything. Are you sure? Maybe it's an illusion. She grew cautious, her instincts kicking in as she surveyed their surroundings for hidden threats. Russell frowned, unsettled. Is it an illusion? Or is it something only I can see? Testing a theory, he reached out to touch one of the glowing green specks. The moment his fingers brushed the light, it sank into his skin. A sudden wave of sensation surged through Russell, indescribable yet undeniably profound. At the same time, a system notification echoed in his mind. Warning, subject has absorbed a spiritual essence. No impurities detected. Fusion successful. Warning cancelled. Russell blinked. Spiritual essence? He recalled the pyramid and Kansu's transactions earlier. Was this what Kansu had been after? Had he somehow absorbed it instead? Yet, why was he the only one who could see it? Did this have something to do with the failed exchange earlier? Regardless, it didn't seem dangerous, at least, not according to the system. Then Russell noticed something incredible. The glowing green moat stretched across the landscape, as countless as the stars in the sky. His heart raced with anticipation. From his studies of Baron Mordo's knowledge entries, he knew the immense benefits of strengthening the soul. Mental resilience. A stronger soul enhanced the mind, making it more resistant to intrusion. With enough strength, he could even trap intruders within his own psyche. Improved magic control. A fortified soul allowed for better mastery over complex magic and secret arts. Extended astral projection. With a stronger soul, he could remain in the astral plane far longer, greatly enhancing his learning speed. Living as a soul. When powerful enough, the soul could abandon the body altogether, existing as a pure spirit. While magic in this form was exponentially stronger, Russell wasn't keen on abandoning his body unless absolutely necessary. But the most exciting possibility lay beyond these advantages. According to Mordo's notes, a strong soul could act as a vessel for divine power. Russell's pulse quickened at the thought. The gods of Asgard weren't mere aliens, they were actual deities. Their divine power originated from the ancient god Gaia, with ties to the world tree itself. While Russell's system could extract divine power, it couldn't always use it perfectly. Certain entries, like the soul extraction spell, had been unusable even after acquisition. To bridge this gap, he needed to strengthen himself. The system alone wasn't enough, his own capabilities had to complement it. Now, as he gazed at the sea of spiritual motes, his determination solidified. Kansu had planned for years to amass this power, yet here it was, free for the taking. Even though this was only a fragment of the pyramid's energy, it was still a staggering amount. And while there might be risks, the system had already deemed it safe. If he hesitated and someone else discovered it, the loss would be immeasurable. Laura, stay on watch, Russell said firmly, sitting down cross-legged. What? What are you? No time to explain, he cut her off, his focus unyielding. Laura hesitated but nodded, keeping her guard up as Russell began meditating. The moment he initiated the process, the spiritual motes reacted as though drawn to a magnet. Like a celestial phenomenon, the green light coalesced, swirling toward Russell in streams. If anyone were observing from the astral plane, they would have witnessed an awe-inspiring sight, a vast galaxy of spiritual energy descending upon him, forming a massive, rotating vortex that lit up the void. Hours passed. As dawn broke, Russell opened his eyes, a brilliant light flashing within them. He felt immense, as if his soul had expanded to a colossal scale, brimming with raw power. With a single thought, he felt capable of monumental feats. But he knew better. This overwhelming sensation was a temporary effect of the soul's rapid growth. Soon, his soul and body would harmonize, and the feeling would subside. Then, the system chimed again. Ability awakening detected. Transforming entries. Transformation complete. Spirit Hall, purple gold. Your spiritual world becomes a fortified sanctuary. While defending against intrusion, you can trap invaders within the Spirit Hall. Inside, your spiritual power is amplified while intruders are weakened. Weakness erasure. When engaging in mental battles, your physical body will act instinctively, avoiding paralysis or stiffness. Soul carrying, gold. Your soul can now carry immense power, including divine power, dimensional energy, or the spirit of vengeance. Weakness erasure. Neutralizes all hostile will within the power. Russell's excitement reached a fever pitch. The benefits exceeded even his wildest expectations. Not only had his soul strengthened, but it now offered unparalleled advantages for both combat and survival. Even more importantly, he could now act as a vessel for divine power, one step closer to his ultimate goal. Looking at the faint spiritual motes that still lingered in the air, Russell smiled. Kansu, he murmured to himself, looks like I owe you for this free gift. When Russell saw the gold-tier soul-carrying entry, he knew he had made the right call. If he had hesitated out of fear and chosen not to absorb the spiritual essence, allowing his soul to undergo a qualitative transformation, he would have regretted it forever. Without this transformation, even if he acquired powerful abilities like the power of Thor or the power of death in the future, he would be able to use them, but certainly not at their full potential. For entries as extreme as Phoenix fragments, the consequences could have been catastrophic. The system might have even warned him that attempting to wield such power would result in the collapse of both his spirit and body. What surprised Russell the most, however, was the weakness erasure feature included with the entry. This meant that if he acquired dimensional energy, he wouldn't have to worry about contamination or manipulation by a dimensional lord. It's like having a premium version of the Ancient One's mastery over dimensional energies. Even more exciting was the prospect of obtaining the spirit of vengeance. With weakness erasure, he could completely erase the spirit's will, gaining its immense powers without being influenced by its destructive instincts. To Russell, this feature alone was as valuable as a gold-tier entry in its own right. As for the Spirit Hall entry, it was a timely addition. While it couldn't directly counter Cassandra's telekinetic abilities, it would at least block her from invading his mind. In fact, if he played his cards right, he might even lure her into his Spirit Hall, where her power would weaken, and his would amplify. Still, Russell decided to remain cautious. Cassandra was no ordinary opponent. She had already killed Professor X, the most powerful telepath in existence. Underestimating her would be foolish. For now, Spirit Hall was an uncertain trump card, a defensive insurance policy rather than a guaranteed win. At the very least, it would prevent him from being completely helpless if he ever faced Cassandra. By the time the sun rose, Russell had finished absorbing the spiritual essence. Grateful for the little wolf girl's vigilance throughout the night, he let her rest while he prepared for the next leg of his journey. As night fell again, after sparring for a few hours to refine his control, Russell set out alone. The location was concealed by magical vines and difficult to find, but taking the little wolf girl along would only endanger her. After 3 or 4 days of travel guided by the snake team's directions, Russell finally reached the ruined city. Most of the buildings had crumbled, but the dilapidated Stark Tower stood out like a ghostly monument. Occasionally, the sky shimmered with clipping distortions, and debris would tumble down from above. At the city's edge stretched the moss plains, bare, desolate, and dotted with the remnants of fallen garbage. No trees, no signs of life above ground. But Russell knew better. Beneath the surface, Loki variants thrived in a warren of tunnels and hideouts. How to find these hidden rats? Russell smirked. Simple. Bring out the cat, and the rats will scurry out of their holes. Equipping his sling ring, he conjured a series of portals. One after another, he opened and closed them in rapid succession. Minutes later, thunder rumbled across the horizon. Looking up, Russell saw the sky darken as storm clouds rolled in. Scarlet lightning arced through the heavens, and a familiar beast roared in the distance. It's Elrios. Russell recalled this monstrous storm entity previously controlled by the Legacy Kong that had self-destruct. Or so he had thought. Now, it seemed either Elrios had survived or another one had been created. Russell leaned toward the former theory. As Elrios approached, the moss plains erupted into chaos. From the ruins of the city, Lokis poured out like ants from a disturbed nest. Dozens of them rushed across the plains in all directions. Some wielded green magic, others drove salvaged vehicles, while the rest simply sprinted for their lives. In under 2 minutes, the plain fell silent again, eerily empty. Elrios's hideous form was now visible, its monstrous head roaring as it closed in on the ground. Time to move. Russell had already marked his target. He opened a portal, stepping through to a concealed cement pipe. Inside, he found an iron sheet, which he slid aside to reveal a dark vertical shaft. With Elrios's roar echoing above, Russell jumped into the shaft, replacing the cover as he descended. Thanks to his Spider-Man-like abilities, he easily climbed down the narrow passage, reaching the bottom after about 100 meters. A tunnel stretched ahead. On one side was a pile of garbage, on the other, a faint light glowed in the distance. Russell crept along the tunnel, and soon, voices reached his ears. Bad luck. That monster came by this morning and ate a few Lokis. Now it's back. All because of a fallen takeout box. Damn thing probably won't leave until tomorrow. Speaking of bad luck, I tried to catch that crocodile with a crown. Not only did it bite me, but some brat ran off with it. Huh? I'm better off. A Viking Loki wants to trade an entire box of brandy for my old rusty axe. Guess who's making out like a bandit tomorrow? You're an idiot. Where's the trade? Maybe we'll show up and take the axe for free. Haha, already planned for that. I told him how to get here. Once he arrives, we'll ambush him. As soon as the last words were spoken, the room went silent. A moment later, a cacophony of curses erupted among the Lokis. In the dim shadows, unnoticed, Russell stood with a hand on his forehead, shaking his head in exasperation. Can these Lokis' entries even be useful? Looking at their sheer stupidity, he couldn't help but worry. What if they infect me instead? Since he had come all this way, Russell had no intention of leaving empty-handed. Standing in the shadows, he suddenly spoke, his voice calm yet commanding. Sorry to interrupt, everyone. Does anyone here know illusion magic? The sudden voice startled the 4 Lokis in the cave, and chaos immediately erupted. Who's there? Someone's here. You idiot! You brought someone right to us. Shut up. I was luring the enemy deeper into our territory. Deeper? Into this dump? You're brainless? I'm not fighting with you tomorrow. Then I'll kill you now. The Lokis turned on each other instantly, bickering and shouting. Russell sighed. While he knew most Lokis were chaotic and self-centered, this level of dysfunction was almost cartoonish. One Loki, wearing a baseball cap, was suddenly kicked aside by another variant. He scrambled back to his feet, ready to retaliate, but paused when his eyes caught movement. Pointing at the shadowed figure, he exclaimed, "Look. An intruder? Haha, just one guy." Russell glanced at himself in the shadows, unimpressed. I thought I hid well. Guess not. The other 3 Lokis stopped their fighting and turned to look. Upon realizing there was indeed just one person in the shadows, they burst out laughing. Are you serious? A lone Loki walking into our den? It's been ages since someone came to us voluntarily. I told you I was baiting them in. See, I'm the smartest one here. Fine, fine. You get the first crack at him. But don't forget to take his organs. I want the liver. Russell raised an eyebrow. Am I supposed to be a stand-in for someone? These guys lie with such confidence it's almost impressive. Then, the Loki in the baseball cap squinted and muttered, wait a second, he doesn't look Viking enough. Are you sure you've got the right guy? The luring Loki examined Russell again and nodded firmly. It's him? See that tattoo on his wrist? Evil spider totem, it's a Viking thing. And those brown eyes, classic Viking. The other Lokis nodded in agreement. Russell chuckled. If they keep this up, even I'll start believing I'm Viking Loki. He stepped out of the shadows, interrupting their discussion. Usually, I'm a patient man, he said, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. But unfortunately for you, patience isn't on the menu today. Raising his right hand, he mimed a gun with his fingers and pointed at the loudest Loki. The luring Loki laughed dismissively. Really? This guy's a lunatic? Thor must have smashed his head in before he got here. The other Lokis joined in, the cave filling with their laughter. Go on, the luring Loki said, tapping his temple mockingly. Take your shot right here? Make it quick and painless. Russell tilted his head thoughtfully. I was planning to aim for your chest so you'd feel some pain, he said. But since you asked so nicely, I'll oblige. The luring Loki laughed even harder and leaned forward, pointing at his forehead again. Right here? Don't hold back. The other Lokis waited eagerly for the show. Russell smirked, his voice calm as he whispered, bang. The laughter stopped instantly. The luring Loki's head vanished in a spray of red and white. His body collapsed to the ground, still smiling, but now lifeless. The remaining Lokis stood frozen, their faces splattered with blood. None of them spoke. Russell lowered his hand, his expression serene as he pointed at another Loki. Why aren't you laughing? Weren't you enjoying yourself? The second Loki's voice trembled as he stammered, I wasn't laughing. I swear. Russell's smile widened. I don't believe you. 2 rapid bangs later, and 2 more Lokis dropped lifeless to the ground. The last Loki, wide-eyed and trembling, fell to his knees. Brother no, great master, I know illusion magic. I swear, I'm more useful than these fools. He recalled Russell's earlier question and clung to it like a lifeline. I can prove it. Just give me a chance. Russell's expression softened, as if he were genuinely considering the plea. The kneeling Loki breathed a sigh of relief, convinced he'd survived. Then, Russell's smile turned cold. Bang. The last Loki looked down, confused, at the charred hole in his chest before collapsing with a bewildered expression. Russell blew on his finger, as though cooling the barrel of a gun. Not bad, he muttered to himself. Didn't waste my time after all. The cave fell silent once again, interrupted only by the system's calm, mechanical prompt in Russell's ears. Looting entry completed. Frost bloodline, low level, green. A low-level frost giant bloodline, offering minor physical enhancements and ice blue skin patterns. Warning, this bloodline weakens the extremis virus. Frost bloodline, low level, green. This bloodline cannot stack. Frost bloodline, low level, white. A faint trace of frost giant ancestry, granting minimal physical improvement and weak cold resistance. Intermediate fighting, white. Decent combat skills, sufficient to defeat up to 5 untrained humans. Submission, green. The ability to grovel and beg convincingly, offering a slim chance of gaining an enemy's mercy. Fraud, low level, white. Weak deception skills through language, easily seen through by most. Russell's cheek twitched as he scanned the entries. What kind of garbage is this? Not only were the entries lacking in positive impact, but some actively weakened his abilities if equipped. This is even worse than Hedgehog Man's junk entries. Typical Loki nonsense. Without hesitation, Russell discarded the entries, not willing to let them waste another second of his time. Fortunately, the system had more to offer. Vanaheim bloodline, general, white. The ordinary physique of a resident from Vanaheim, with slight magical affinity and decent health. Submission, intermediate, blue. Increased chance of persuading an enemy to accept you as a subordinate when surrendering. Advanced magic, phantom magic, low level, green. Basic illusion magic, capable of simple transformations, creating magical fireworks, and average power magic orb attacks. Note, this ability can be practiced and upgraded independently. Russell exhaled deeply, feeling a wave of relief. Finally, something useful. 4 Lokis and 9 entries. It felt like panning for gold in a sewer. Though the phantom magic was rudimentary, it was what he had come here to acquire, and the ability to improve it on his own made it worthwhile. He equipped the entry and immediately gained the basics of illusion magic. Then his expression froze. This idiot Loki doesn't even remember how to practice this magic properly? It wasn't that Frigga hadn't taught him, nor that he hadn't learned it, he'd simply forgotten most of it, leaving only a vague impression behind. Russell pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, I really hate Lokis. Raising his hand, he summoned flames from his extremis enhanced bloodline and incinerated the 4 bodies, ensuring no trace remained. He didn't leave immediately, though. The ridiculousness of the luring Loki's plan could still work to his advantage, saving him some trouble. Let's just hope the next Lokis are slightly less insufferable. The next moment, Russell's body shimmered with a faint green light, and his appearance shifted into something entirely different. Elsewhere in the ruined plains, I hereby declare, Article 267 is now in effect. Driving without honking is strictly prohibited in Loki City. In a cavern sprawling 400 to 500 square meters, a Loki in a tattered green suit and a golden antler crown proudly announced his decree. Before him stood a gathering of 8 or 9 wildly diverse Lokis. But, Mr. President, said a Loki wearing handlebars on his head like a crown, we don't have any cars. Silence. President Loki barked, pointing dramatically. This is the Constitution. It has nothing to do with whether we have cars or not, you idiot. A Loki in a leather hat adorned with several horns interrupted. All right, but isn't it my turn to be king today? President Loki nodded, seemingly thoughtful. The title of king and president don't conflict. You can be king, and I'll remain president. The group murmured in confusion. Does the presidency rotate? Because I'd like a turn. A Loki asked a critical question, prompting President Loki to flip through a worn copy of The Postman Always Rings Twice. After a moment, he looked up and declared, "Sorry, but no such clause exists in the bill. Rejected." Eager to shift the conversation, he clapped his hands and addressed the group. "That's enough politics for today. Now, Viking Loki, you said you've discovered a base." A burly Loki with tattoos on his arms grinned and replied, "Yes. That fool tried to trick me into a trap. But I'm smarter. I played along, got the location, and found out there are 4 Lokis there with food, wine, and loot." President Loki smiled. "Excellent. No one will take your axe, I promise. That's your trophy." He turned to the group. "Let's move before they realize we're coming. We'll seize it all." The group cheered, momentarily united by greed. 30 minutes later, President Loki and his army arrived at the base, descending into the depths of the cavern Viking Loki had described. At the end of the tunnel, they found a lone Loki lounging casually on a recliner. Confusion spread through the group. "This isn't what Viking Loki said," one muttered. President Loki stepped forward, forcing a warm smile. "Dear Loki, if you agree to vote for me in the next presidential election, I'll allow you to join our ranks and live." The Lokis behind him exchanged puzzled looks. Next election? When was the first? Sensing the rising tension, President Loki's tone turned cold. "Of course, if you refuse, you will be considered an enemy of Loki City, and we have every right to execute you. So, what will it be?" The lounging Loki sighed and stood, his voice carrying a note of exasperation. "For Loki's sake, I'll make this simple." He waved a hand dismissively. "If you can use phantom magic, stay. If not, get lost." The scene fell silent for a moment. The Lokis exchanged glances and then burst into laughter 2 seconds later. President Loki shook his head with a smug grin. How ridiculous. They were all Lokis, after all. Who could fool another Loki with such a transparent act? "You really think you can scare us with this tired performance?" President Loki sneered. "Which one of us hasn't played this kind of cheap, spooky trick? Pathetic." The other Lokis howled with laughter, doubling over in mockery. In the ruined city, one of their greatest joys was watching another Loki embarrass themselves. It gave them a fleeting sense of superiority, as if they were still lords of Asgard. President Loki straightened up, puffing out his chest. "Unfortunately for you, you've made the wrong choice." He turned to the burly Viking Loki. "Go, take care of this fool." Though he didn't particularly care for the pompous president, Viking Loki grinned at the chance to show off. He stepped forward, dragging a battered fire axe from his back. The axe's chipped edge gleamed in the dim light as he eyed the lounging Loki with a cruel smirk. "Still pretending to be calm, are you?" Viking Loki taunted. "Bet you're shaking inside." He stepped closer, flexing his muscular arms as he raised the axe high. "Beg me. If you grovel, I might make it quick. Otherwise, I'll split your head so cleanly you'll have time to watch yourself die." The Lokis snickered, eager to see this show of dominance. But then, the Loki on the recliner finally sat up, his eyes glinting with an unnatural glow. The laughter faded as curiosity took over. "What's with the glowing eyes?" Viking Loki stormed forward, his expression turning savage. "I've had enough of your La Matrix," he roared. "Real men fight with strength." His muscles swelled, veins bulging as he swung the axe down with crushing force, aiming straight for the lounging Loki's forehead. Bang! The impact echoed through the cave, making every Loki's eyelids twitch. Yet, instead of the sound of shattering bone, they saw something entirely unexpected. A pale hand slender, uncalloused gripping the rusty axe blade. The Lokis stared, stunned. "How?" Viking Loki's eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible? How can someone as weak as you stop me?" He tried to yank the axe free, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the blade had fused to the other's hand. No matter how hard he pulled, it refused to move. Sweat trickled down Viking Loki's face as panic set in. The other Lokis began shifting uncomfortably. Something was very wrong. President Loki's smug grin disappeared, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Then, the cold voice returned. "Unfortunately for you, you made the wrong choice." Before anyone could react, the axe began to glow red. A moment later, it melted into molten iron, dripping harmlessly to the ground. Viking Loki collapsed, staring blankly at the charred stick left in his hand. President Loki's breath caught in his throat. His instincts screamed danger as he barked, "Attack! Everyone, attack him now! If we don't stop him together, we're all dead." The other Lokis exchanged looks then turned and fled in the opposite direction. "Cowards!" President Loki shrieked. He had hoped to use the others as a distraction while he escaped, but they bolted faster than he could think. Now he was alone. Well, not quite alone. Viking Loki, still on the ground, was frozen in shock. President Loki's desperate mind latched on to hope. Maybe he'll buy me time to escape. That hope was shattered when flames erupted around Viking Loki, engulfing him completely. His scream echoed briefly before his body crumbled into ashes. This guy's fire skills are terrifying. President Loki's heart pounded as he remembered the scorch marks on the cave floor when they first entered. Those weren't accidents. He fell to his knees, his survival instincts kicking in. Submission ability activated. Trembling, President Loki bowed low. "Great King Loki," he stammered, "I, Loki Laufeyson, humbly submit to your power. Allow me to serve you. I can be of great use in this void." The other Loki barely glanced at him. "Do you know phantom magic?" he asked coldly. President Loki hesitated, sweat dripping down his temple. I can learn." The other Loki lost interest and raised his hand. Extremis virus, flame control activated. A crimson flame ignited in his palm, splitting into 8 brilliant lines of fire. President Loki flinched as the fiery strands shot past him, illuminating the dark tunnel. Screams echoed briefly, then faded into eerie silence. When he dared to look back, he saw only faint piles of ash scattered in the distance. The other Lokis were gone, reduced to nothing in moments. President Loki's stomach churned as realization dawned. Those ashes on the cave floor, they'd belonged to others who had made the same mistake. He swallowed hard, the sound unnaturally loud in the now silent cave. Trembling, he knelt even lower, head pressed against the ground. Odin's beard, what kind of nightmare Loki is this? Russell ignored President Loki as the system's notification prompts continued ringing in his ears. Entry looting complete. Frost bloodline, low level. Frost blood. Frost. Viking bloodline, white. A mutant bloodline of Earth humans tainted by Odin's power. Possesses a strong body, roughly 3 times the strength of a normal human, and a violent temperament. Frost. Trickery, low level, white. Moderate success in schemes and conspiracies, though often riddled with loopholes. Electronic music, white. Proficient in the use of various electronic instruments. Submission. 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 Hammer expertise, white. Skilled in using hammers as weapons. Feigning death, blue. Mastery in convincingly playing dead to deceive others. Feigning. Basic combat skills. Deception. President Loki knelt trembling on the ground, each second stretching endlessly like an eternity in hell. His fear mounted with every passing moment of silence. He couldn't take it anymore. Summoning his courage, he sneaked a glance upward only to meet Russell's cold, oppressive gaze. A wave of terror surged through him, and he immediately lowered his head again, praying feverishly to Odin for mercy. Russell broke the silence with a scornful mutter, his voice dripping with disdain. I hate frost giants. He clenched his fists, frustration boiling within him. The system had once again served up nothing but garbage, weak abilities with no real value. Worse, none of these Lokis had the illusion magic he sought. Trash. All of them. Just then, a timid voice broke through his thoughts. Why yes, I hate frost giants too. Russell turned his gaze downward to see President Loki groveling, his face contorted into a pathetic, sycophantic smile. Russell debated whether the man's submissive demeanor was worth indulging. After a pause, he decided to give him a chance. Can you find me a Loki who knows illusion magic? Russell asked flatly, his tone carrying a dangerous edge. President Loki blinked in surprise, then nodded so fervently he nearly hurt his neck. Yes, I can, he exclaimed. As he spoke, a sudden realization struck him when he first met this terrifying figure. The man had mentioned sparing those who didn't know illusion magic. I could have run away back then. Now, regret gnawed at his insides. But before he could wallow further, he felt Russell's gaze pierce into him. Those molten gold eyes seemed to burn directly into his soul, filling him with an overwhelming sense of dread. For a moment, he swore he saw Odin himself in a vision. The sheer weight of the suppression made him tremble uncontrollably. I wouldn't dare lie to you. President Loki stammered. I can't find a Loki directly, but I know this plane and city like the back of my hand. I can search for one effectively. Russell's molten gold gaze darkened slightly as he pressed further. In that case, your team should be larger. Why are there so few of you? President Loki hesitated, looking sheepish. Well, not all Lokis agreed to join me, he admitted. And we don't always win. At our peak, I had over 20 Lokis under me, but many were lost in fights. This team was only formed recently. He shifted uncomfortably before adding, I usually evaluate targets carefully. For example, Viking Loki thought we were up against a fool this time, so we came. Of course, my evaluations aren't perfect. If I sense real danger, I usually run. He grimaced, embarrassed. Normally, I'd have fled already, but you were too overwhelming. The others noticed the danger and betrayed me immediately. They ran faster than I could. He sighed, then muttered under his breath, guess it was a blessing in disguise. Those who ran fast are probably ashes now. Russell's molten gaze faded, though his oppressive aura remained. You have one day, he said coldly. If you fail to deliver. He leaned closer, his voice like ice. Turning to ash will be the least of your worries. President Loki bobbed his head rapidly, his fear palpable. Night fell. Russell reclined once more, deciding against searching tonight. As he lay back, he asked casually. You resemble Loki from the sacred timeline. You should have grown up in Asgard. Why don't you know illusion magic? Didn't Frigga teach you? President Loki shifted awkwardly. In my timeline, Asgard didn't have that spell, he said. Besides, I was always too playful as a child. When I grew up, I had no interest in magic. When it became clear I wasn't going to sit on the throne of the Allfather, I left for Earth and ran for president. He scowled bitterly. I even became the mayor of New York. But then the TVA came. He clenched his fists, his voice rising with anger. Those bastards didn't even let me explain before cutting my timeline. I was doing good. I'm a good person. Russell snorted quietly, his expression unreadable. A good person? Sure. Shaking his head, Russell closed his eyes to meditate. Tomorrow, President Loki would have his chance. Whether it worked or not remained to be seen. The cave was silent. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. President Loki glanced back at the passage he had come from, blinking a few times as he calculated the distance in his mind. Surrender? Never, not in this lifetime. Loki was born to rule, not grovel. Once this guy entered a deep meditative state, he would find his chance to slip away. With this plan forming in his mind, he stole a glance at Russell, who was lying on the recliner. To his dismay, Russell was watching him with a knowing smile. "Do you think I don't understand Lokis?" Russell asked, his tone laced with amusement. President Loki plastered on a flattering grin, scrambling to explain. But before he could utter a word, Russell raised his hand. The next thing President Loki knew, he was dangling upside down in the air, his wrists bound tightly and his mouth sealed with spider silk. Russell nodded in satisfaction, finally settling into meditation for real this time. Hanging helplessly, President Loki dared not make a sound. His eyes widened in shock as his mind raced. What kind of Loki variant is this? Not only did this man command scorching flames, but now he was wielding spider silk? Spider-Man Loki? What kind of monster did the TVA create? The next morning, Russell had an impeccable sense of time. He awoke at dawn, dispelling the magical spider silk with a mere thought. President Loki hit the ground with a loud thud and grimaced in pain. Yet he dared not complain. Scrambling to his feet, he put on his most servile smile. "Great master," he began, "shall I take you to the suspicious locations in the caves or directly to the ruined city?" Russell's silence was enough to send the Loki into a flurry of explanation. "The caves have marks that might lead to something useful. As for the ruined city, it's a hot spot for dropped loot and tends to attract more Lokis." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I suggest we wait in the city during the day and explore the caves at night. What do you think?" Russell regarded him thoughtfully. No wonder this guy survived under Thanos' thumb. His groveling skills are truly unparalleled. "Fine. We'll do it your way," he said at last. President Loki beamed, looking as though he had been bestowed a great honor. The ruined city. Once above ground, Russell surveyed the moss-covered plains. The sky was perpetually overcast, the desolation stretching endlessly. There wasn't a soul in sight, but Russell knew better. Lokis were always lurking in the shadows. They reached the ruined city, a chaotic sprawl of crumbling buildings and debris. The air was thick with tension. As they walked, Russell's spider sense flared. He halted abruptly. President Loki turned, confused. "What's wrong?" Bang! 5 Lokis leapt from the shadows, landing theatrically in front of them. Well, what do we have here?" One of them sneered. "It's been ages since I saw Loki so boldly stroll into the ruins," said another, eyeing Russell's suit. "I like that outfit." President Loki's face twisted with a strange mix of pity and amusement. "This feels familiar. Just yesterday, another group had tried this and they hadn't fared well." But ever the sycophant, he stepped forward before Russell could speak. "Which of you knows illusion magic?" he asked bluntly. A green-coated Loki with a smug grin stepped forward. "Ah, you've heard of me," he said, puffing his chest. "That's right, I'm a master of illusion magic. Now, beg for mercy." President Loki took a step back, a silent prayer in his heart. "Laugh while you can, idiot." Turning to Russell, he bowed low. "Master, I have fulfilled my duty. I present one who knows phantom magic." The 5 newcomers blinked in confusion before bursting into laughter. One, dressed in a gaudy green sweater and a cartoonish gold crown, mocked him. "Still playing lapdog, huh? First Thanos, now this guy," he sneered. "Pathetic. Let me put your master out of his misery." With that, he drew twin daggers and leapt into the air, aiming for Russell. The others hung back, confident in their leader's prowess. "He's an assassin," they thought. "Steady, precise, deadly." Crack! Russell swatted him midair like a fly. The would-be assassin hit the ground, his head twisted at an unnatural angle. Russell wiped the blood from his hand onto President Loki's coat, his expression unimpressed. "What kind of assassin does a frontal jump attack on me?" he muttered. The remaining 4 Lokis froze, their bravado evaporating. When Russell's icy gaze turned their way, they snapped out of it. "Run. Retreat. Revenge can wait." The 4 scattered, fleeing as fast as their legs could carry them. Russell shook his head, familiar with the cowardice of Lokis. He raised his hand and mimed a pistol, locking onto each fleeing figure. The system chimed in his mind. Frost bloodline, low level, green. A slight boost to physical abilities, with ice blue skin patterns. Russell sighed. More junk abilities followed, cluttering his loot list. Finally, the system delivered a sliver of hope. Advanced magic, illusion magic, low level, green. Allows basic illusions and manipulation of magical constructs. The system notified him that his proficiency had increased, but Russell wasn't pleased. "Proficiency increases are worthless. I need advanced entries or complete mastery." In the following days, with President Loki's help, Russell encountered 5 more illusion-wielding Lokis. Yet all of them only added minor improvements to his proficiency. His sole gain was the ability to conjure a dagger with illusion magic, a mere novelty for someone of his caliber. Russell began to suspect that in this void, only old Loki possessed truly advanced illusion magic. Enough killing. Time to change tactics. Russell devised a bounty system. Spread the word: any Loki who finds a variant with advanced illusion magic will be rewarded with a set of Iron Man armor. The promise of such a reward sent ripples through the Loki community. In a dark underground cave, several Lokis gathered. Among them were Black Loki, Young Loki, Old Loki, and a crocodile sipping red wine from a can. Black Loki broke the silence. "Have you heard about the bounty?" Young Loki sneered. "It's probably fake. Even if it's real, I'll cut him down myself. I killed Thor, after all." The crocodile growled, earning a dramatic eye roll from young Loki. Fine, you killed Thor, he muttered. Old Loki chuckled softly. Why bother? If it's trouble, we can just move farther away. Crowds have never been kind to us. The group agreed, planning to stock up on supplies before leaving the area. But later that night, as they slept, Black Loki quietly slipped away. The manhole cover creaked open, revealing him sneaking out only to be caught in a flash of green light. Old Loki and young Loki stood there, crocodile in hand. I didn't think you'd betray us after all these years, young Loki spat. Old Loki sighed. Loki is Loki. Betrayal is in our blood. But Black Loki laughed darkly. Who said I was betraying you? He said, his tone mocking. And, isn't your teleportation on cooldown? You can't cast it again for 5 minutes. Old Loki's face turned grim. There wasn't actually a universal limit on teleportation, but for him, there might as well have been. He was too old now, too diminished. Unlike the Aesir, who grew stronger with age, frost giants weakened over time. His dwindling strength no longer allowed him to sustain the mental energy needed to seek out new spatial coordinates after a teleportation. Realization dawned on him. You deliberately made it look like you were going to betray us during dinner. Old Loki snapped, his voice trembling with both anger and disbelief. Why? The Black Loki's face contorted into a twisted snarl. Why? He echoed, his tone dripping with venom. You dare to ask me why? He jabbed a finger at the others, his voice rising with fury. Because you have powerful phantom magic? Because that brat has the sword of Vulcan? Because even that miserable crocodile has more fighting ability than me? His words came out in a bitter rush. And now you want to leave this area, heading to places even more dangerous? You didn't even consider me? I'd be the first to die. Old Loki stared at him, aghast. You ungrateful wretch, the young Loki spat, stepping forward, the sword of Vulcan gleaming ominously in his hands. If we hadn't taken you in when you first arrived, you'd be long dead. And for your information, the decision to leave was made tonight. You betrayed us before we even decided. But Black Loki wasn't listening. His expression twisted into a maniacal grin. Now, it's your turn to die, he howled, before shouting to the heavens, Mr. Red Devil, my mission is complete. The name echoed through the cave. Old Loki and young Loki exchanged confused glances. Red Devil, the young one muttered. Wasn't the bounty issued by Loki? They didn't have time to process the thought. A soft pop broke the tense silence. A figure materialized slender and sinister, dressed in a burgundy suit. His skin was an unnerving shade of crimson, his face sharp and devilish. Behind him flicked a long, prehensile tail, curling like a serpent ready to strike. Young Loki raised the sword of Vulcan instinctively, and old Loki's hands glowed green as magic gathered around them. Both felt a deep unease. This wasn't a Loki variant. The devilish figure smirked. Well done, Black Loki, he said, his voice smooth and dripping with mockery. You've served me well. Black Loki puffed out his chest, unbothered by the demeaning tone. Mr. Red Devil, I've completed my mission. So now, I can join Lady Cassandra's organization, right? The Red Devil's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Oh, of course. Before Black Loki could savor his triumph, the devil's tail lashed out like a whip. The sharp tip pierced through his skull with a sickening crunch. No. Black Loki gasped, his eyes wide with shock as he crumpled to the ground. The Red Devil tilted his head, mockingly addressing the lifeless body. You're a Loki. What organization would be foolish enough to take you in? His gaze flicked to the other two Lokis. Don't you agree? Old Loki and young Loki tensed. The air grew thick with danger. You're an outsider, Old Loki said cautiously, his green magic crackling in his palms. We have no quarrel with you. The Red Devil shrugged, his tail flicking lazily. True, but your bad luck is none of my concern. He gestured toward Old Loki. And your illusions? Quite realistic, I'll admit. Too bad they're useless. With a swift flick of his tail, the figures of Old Loki and young Loki shimmered and vanished into thin air. Several meters away, the real Old Loki and young Loki, clutching the crocodile, were sprinting into the night. They stopped abruptly, green sparks suddenly erupting behind them. Ruined City Stark Tower. Russell stood on the edge of the rooftop, gazing into the gloom of the distant plain. The days of waiting had tested his patience. The bounty had stirred no useful responses, and his frustration grew. He sighed. A few more days, and that's it. Then I move north. No point waiting here forever. The plan to establish a base was already scrapped. Lokis were unreliable, too self-serving to trust with any long-term endeavor. Suddenly, a flash of dazzling green light pierced the darkness, flaring briefly before vanishing. Russell straightened, his senses sharp. That's not an illusion. That scale of phantom magic. Old Loki. There was no hesitation. His venom suit unfurled, wrapping him in its sleek, black armor. With a burst of sound waves, he launched into the air, disappearing into the night. Back in the underground cave, Russell's arrival was swift. He scanned the area. The signs were subtle but telling. Supplies were still neatly stacked in the corner, untouched, not looted. On the ground lay a body, its lifeless eyes frozen in shock. Russell recognized him immediately. Black Loki, he muttered. So, he found them. But where were the others? And why had Old Loki been forced to use his phantom magic so suddenly? There were no signs of a struggle. Something's not right, he mused, his mind racing. Fire erupted from his body, scorching everything in sight. The heat melted stone into molten pools, flames carving through the earth like a force of nature. Then, amidst the chaos, a sound broke through a faint crack. Russell turned, his gaze piercing the darkness. Something was coming. On the dark, desolate plain, the skeletal remains of a massive ant-man loomed like an ancient beast, its hollow frame evoking a sense of primal dread. Within the cavernous skull, old Loki and young Loki dangled in midair, bound by thick, glowing chains. A woman was suspended alongside them. Cassandra, a tall figure radiating malice, traced the woman's skin with her sharp fingertips. Blood, glowing like molten lava, oozed from the wound. Cassandra dipped her finger into the viscous liquid, bringing it to her lips with an expression of mingled pain and ecstasy. Breaking the silence, Cassandra's voice, sharp and cutting, filled the space. Are you sure it's him? The Red Devil, standing rigidly nearby, bent into a deferential bow. I cannot be entirely certain, he replied. But the Loki spies I recruited claimed he wields blood arrow magic, produces magical spider silk with extraordinary power, and though unverified possesses fire-related abilities. Cassandra's eyes gleamed. A new ability, perhaps. That makes it more likely. The Red Devil nodded. He may wear Loki's face, but I suspect it's an illusion. A low-tier mimicry seeking higher-tier power users. He gestured toward old Loki. That's where he comes in. The faintest smirk curled Cassandra's lips. Fake will always remain fake, she said dismissively. This green-clad fool thinks himself clever. Let him amuse us. Old Loki hung his head, offering no resistance. But young Loki, brimming with defiance, shouted, You vile human? You know nothing of the true power of illusion magic. Cassandra raised an eyebrow. With a casual wave of her hand, young Loki was yanked forward, his head clasped in her iron grip. Her fingers pressed into his skull, and for a chilling moment, her power rummaged through his memories. Pitiful, she muttered after a pause, her lips curling in contempt. You're all garbage. With a flick of her wrist, she discarded him like a broken toy, turning her attention back to the Red Devil. Proceed with tomorrow's plan. The Red Devil bowed. As you command. The rooftop of Stark Tower loomed against the night sky. Russell landed with practiced ease, the sound of his arrival drawing President Loki from his slumber. Seeing Russell, President Loki instinctively shrank back, a conditioned response born of days spent in the man's intimidating presence. Strange, he thought to himself. Why do I feel so familiar with this fear? Morning gave way to midday, and President Loki lingered on the ground floor of the tower, watching for potential leads. His indifference to finding high-tier illusion Loki had grown. After all, the perks of food, drink, and deference from others were hard to beat. But the sound of a distant vehicle broke his lethargy. Moments later, a group of Lokis arrived, dragging old Loki in chains. Here for the bounty, one of them called out. President Loki frowned, puffing up his chest. Is this legit? He demanded. Don't forget the mighty Mr. Loki doesn't take kindly to fraud. The group exchanged uneasy glances before one of them nodded. He's the real deal. He even demonstrated illusion magic for us. Intrigued but skeptical, President Loki gestured. Fine. Follow me. The climb to the rooftop was grueling for the less pure-blooded Lokis in the group, but they dared not complain. When they finally arrived, they presented old Loki before Russell. Russell's gaze lingered on the figure before him. The bedraggled green-clad man seemed a perfect match for the old Loki from his memories. Yet, something felt off. His instincts whispered caution. With measured calm, Russell said, Give them the armor. No need to test him. President Loki hesitated, but obediently handed over the reward. The group of Lokis departed quickly, their steps hurried, as if fearful of overstaying their welcome. Russell's eyes narrowed. Their departure confirmed his suspicion they lacked the strength to capture someone like old Loki. Someone else was pulling the strings. Old Loki, still bound, raised his head and sighed. You've gone through a lot of trouble to catch me. Do what you must, but make it quick. Don't torment an old man unnecessarily. Russell stepped forward, raising his hand. A thin line of fire appeared, slicing through the chains with precision. Kill you? Steal your magic? Russell chuckled softly. I have no interest in such things. I only want to learn illusion magic, nothing more. Surprise flickered across old Loki's face, quickly replaced by a guarded expression. You're different, he muttered. But how did you know I could use advanced illusion magic? Weren't you afraid this was a trap? Russell smiled. Someone once told me there's a Loki with the most powerful illusions, a Loki with a glorious purpose. Old Loki's gaze softened, and for a moment, a flicker of pride warmed his weary features. But before Russell could probe further, old Loki's expression twisted unnaturally. His voice, strained and broken, whispered, Run, Loki. Before Russell could react, old Loki's laughter turned maniacal. Too late, he rasped. Your fire reeks of extremis, its scent is unforgettable. Golden sparks erupted as a portal materialized. From within stepped Cassandra, her presence suffocating. Russell tensed, his instincts screaming danger. But as he prepared to teleport away, he felt an invisible force clamp down on him. Old Loki, his trembling hand raised, had cast the restraint. Finally, Cassandra said, her tone dripping with triumph. Caught you, Russell. Despite the situation, Russell's voice remained steady. You split your spirit to control him. Clever, but desperate. Cassandra shrugged, a smug grin spreading across her face. Desperate? No, thorough. Her fingers reached for Russell's head, and as her nails pierced his temple, the world shifted. Cassandra found herself in an unfamiliar realm, a grand cathedral, its marble floors gleaming under ethereal light. Pillars stretched into the heavens, framing a massive, white throne. Seated upon it, Russell gazed down with a calm intensity. His voice echoed powerfully through the chamber. I've been expecting you, Cassandra. Thunder rumbled ominously as the battle for dominion over the mind began. Thunder in the spiritual world? Cassandra looked up at the dome of the ethereal temple, as if trying to pierce through its veil and glimpse the scene beyond. However, her vision was blocked, an unusual sensation for someone accustomed to overwhelming and dominating the spiritual realms of others. She lowered her gaze to Russell, standing before her with a calm and resolute expression, starkly contrasting the panic she'd expected. You were waiting for me. Cassandra arched an eyebrow, her lips curling into a curious smirk. Interesting. So, you let me in on purpose. Russell's demeanor was unshaken, his tone steady as he replied, you misunderstand something important. Cassandra laughed, spreading her arms to gesture at the towering marble columns and the shimmering white throne at the center of this surreal temple. A mistake? Here? Sure, I can feel my power being dampened slightly, but you're too confident. Russell shook his head. While this place is indeed your graveyard, that's not the mistake I'm referring to. Cassandra tilted her head, genuinely intrigued. I think my plan went off without a hitch. The only unexpected factor was that old Loki managed to resist me momentarily. But that's irrelevant now. When we met, your fate was sealed. Isn't that right? She grinned wickedly, recalling how she had manipulated the events leading to this confrontation. The night before, amid the chaos of fire, a hidden opportunity presented itself. Beneath the scorched ground lay more than Loki's schemes. It held a secret, one Cassandra had overlooked but Russell had anticipated, Frog Thor. The cursed, diminutive version of Thor trapped in a glass jar, as seen in Loki's series, was more than it appeared. Though sealed away by a Loki's curse, it held latent divine power waiting to be unleashed. In the fire's searing heat, the jar shattered, and the cursed frog began to change. Charred flesh peeled away, and the crimson glow of divine power surged outward. Thor's form began to regenerate. Through the crackling flames, a guttural roar echoed. Loki, I will slaughter your entire clan. Jotunheim will fall into eternal darkness, and all 9 realms shall kneel before me. But before Thor's vengeance could take shape, a flaming blade pierced his heart. Sorry, Russell murmured, standing in the inferno, holding the holy sword imbued with the power of Vishanti. I released you from your curse, but not to let you rampage. Thor's furious roar was silenced instantly. He perished before even comprehending who had struck him down. Though the risk had been enormous, Russell's gamble paid off. Thor's long suppression and incomplete transformation worked to his advantage. The rewards of high risk. The system's voice rang in Russell's mind. Entry plundered successfully. Aesir bloodline, royal line, advanced, gold. Increases physical abilities. Grants favor from the world tree and the potential to awaken divine power. Enhances the limits of the extremis virus and flame blood abilities. Maximum temperature increased to 6,000 degrees Celsius. Thor's divine power, gold. Grants control over thunder and the potential for further growth. Warning. The Aesir bloodline attracts the attention of the shadow ancient gods. Proceed with caution. Thor's divine power is imprinted in the soul. Insufficient soul strength may result in destruction by thunder. Russell narrowed his eyes. Shadow ancient gods? These malevolent entities were the architects of Ragnarok. Could their influence have extended even to Thor's frog-cursed timeline? His thoughts flashed to Odin's seemingly deliberate actions leading to Asgard's destruction in the sacred timeline. Had Odin been preparing for something even greater? Russell smirked grimly, dismissing the warnings. Power is the only truth. Let them come. Back to the spiritual world. Boom! The thunder rumbled through the temple, and Cassandra's smirk faltered. What is this? She muttered, looking around as the temple transformed before her eyes. The white marble floor began to glow with golden runes, and the air crackled with energy. Thunder roared, and lightning streaked across the vast dome. Russell's calm demeanor shifted. His voice echoed through the now stormy temple. You thought you were invading my mind. You were wrong. This is my world now. Cassandra's eyes widened as arcs of electricity surged toward her. The temple was no longer an abstract reflection of his spirit but a thunder god's temple. How is this possible? She shouted, panic creeping into her voice. Russell raised his hand, and a bolt of pure lightning crackled into existence, illuminating the space. His voice carried the weight of divine authority. Your overconfidence is your downfall, Cassandra. With a deafening crash, he unleashed the storm. At this moment, countless bolts of thunder erupted. Lightning crackled in every direction, transforming the ground beneath them into a shimmering, golden surface. The once ordinary stone pillars grew taller, adorned with glowing, intricate runes. Above, the dome burst to life with vivid depictions of thunder and lightning, as arcs of purple electricity coiled and surged like serpentine dragons, occasionally exploding in brilliant flashes. Russell rose from the throne. Lightning leaped and converged around him, weaving together into segments of radiant silver armor. The pieces fused and solidified, forming a majestic, godlike suit. As he took a step forward, the lightning extended behind him, creating a crackling, flowing cloak that hissed and roared with power. This is impossible. Cassandra's composure finally shattered. Her voice trembled with disbelief as she yelled, how can there be a god of thunder in the void? You're deceiving me. Her cries were answered by a deafening boom of thunder. Boom! The entire spiritual world trembled, and a voice rang out, carrying the weight of divine authority. I am Thor Russell. I will annihilate the forces of evil. His words were not mere declarations, they heralded immediate action. A massive bolt of purple lightning, thick as a tree trunk, shot down from the dome and struck Cassandra with violent force. Crack! The golden ground beneath her shattered, leaving a molten crater. But before the lightning could completely consume her, Cassandra's figure reappeared a dozen meters away, her expression grim and furious. The spiritual world was no illusion. The power manifested here was real. And now, it was clear Russell truly wielded the power of Thor. If she hadn't dodged in time, that attack would have done more than injure her, it could have obliterated her entirely. Realizing the danger, Cassandra made a split-second decision. She would flee the spiritual world. Fighting a godlike being here was suicidal. But as she tried to escape, she was violently repelled. Thunder erupted from every surface, the walls, the dome, and even the ground, forcing her back into the center of the temple. She groaned, staggering as she tried again, only to fail once more. No, this can't be. Cassandra's face twisted in disbelief. Russell sneered. Did you think you could come and go as you pleased? You fell for my trap, Cassandra. I've waited too long for this moment to let you leave now. The power of the Soul Hall entry activated at full intensity, amplifying Russell's spiritual energy while suppressing Cassandra's. Cassandra felt herself weakening, her spiritual power diminishing rapidly. Desperation flashed in her eyes as she lunged at Russell, her telekinetic power erupting in an attempt to crush his spiritual core. Boom! An explosion of thunder erupted from Russell's armor, repelling the attack effortlessly. Not even a scratch marred the divine armor of Thor. Russell's voice was cold, sharp as a blade. If this had been yesterday, you might have had a chance. But now, it's too late. Thunder cascaded from the dome like a relentless storm. Cassandra raised her hands, summoning a translucent barrier around herself. The spiritual shield held, but each strike of lightning drained her energy, leaving her paler and weaker. Cracks began forming on her body, spreading like spider webs. Her spiritual form, already damaged before entering, was breaking apart under the assault. Finally, a deafening scream tore from her lips as the barrier shattered. The storm consumed Cassandra, her fragmented spiritual body disintegrating under the onslaught of divine power. Russell exhaled deeply, lowering his hand as the thunderstorm subsided. To think the once formidable Cassandra, who had nearly broken him before, could now be defeated so decisively. A flicker of disbelief passed through him. It almost feels unreal, he muttered. And then, a cold, chilling voice whispered behind him, indeed, doesn't it? Russell's pupils constricted, and his body tensed. Without hesitation, he unleashed a wave of lightning behind him. Crack! The shockwave blasted him forward, slamming him into a massive stone pillar. He groaned, shaking his head as he stood, unharmed but disoriented. When he turned, his eyes widened. Perched mockingly on his throne was a grotesque creature, a baby-like figure with pinkish-purple skin, a bulbous head, and an unnervingly small body. Charred marks from the lightning were visible on its twisted form, but it didn't seem bothered. The creature tilted its head, a malicious grin spreading across its face. I truly despise pain, it crooned. It brings back memories. Memories of my time in the womb, when my cruel twin strangled me without hesitation. The creature let out a bone-chilling wail, shaking the entire spiritual realm. Russell's heart sank. He could feel the power of the Soul Hall weakening, its grip on the spiritual world loosening. He gritted his teeth. If he didn't act fast, this twisted entity would completely unravel his advantage. Thunder. Russell summoned a massive bolt of lightning. It tore through the air, but the creature vanished before it could connect. Reappearing 5 meters away, the baby shrieked, "You want to kill me too? You all want to kill me." With a roar, it unleashed a telekinetic wave, repelling the flames Russell had conjured. Before it could retaliate further, another bolt of thunder struck, this time landing squarely on the creature. A horrible screech echoed as its body broke apart, splintering into 2, then 4, then dozens, then hundreds. From the shards emerged countless grotesque replicas, all resembling the baby but twisted in horrifying ways. They swarmed forward like a tide of nightmares. Russell's breath caught in his throat. What in hell is this power? For the first time, he cursed aloud, then bellowed, "Enough." A shockwave of pure sound erupted from him, freezing the abominations mid-charge. His eyes flared with power as the flames in his pupils turned to roaring thunder. The dome above split open, revealing a vortex of churning black clouds, alive with lightning. This was his trump card, his final weapon to end Cassandra's threat. Now, boom! A colossal lightning column, wider than the temple itself, crashed down from the vortex, obliterating everything in its path. When the light faded, the spiritual world was silent. At this moment, countless bolts of thunder erupted. Lightning crackled in every direction, transforming the ground beneath them into a shimmering, golden surface. The once ordinary stone pillars grew taller, adorned with glowing, intricate runes. Above, the dome burst to life with vivid depictions of thunder and lightning, as arcs of purple electricity coiled and surged like serpentine dragons, occasionally exploding in brilliant flashes. Russell rose from the throne. Lightning leaped and converged around him, weaving together into segments of radiant silver armor. The pieces fused and solidified, forming a majestic, godlike suit. As he took a step forward, the lightning extended behind him, creating a crackling, flowing cloak that hissed and roared with power. This is impossible. Cassandra's composure finally shattered. Her voice trembled with disbelief as she yelled, "How can there be a god of thunder in the void? You're deceiving me." Her cries were answered by a deafening boom of thunder. Boom! The entire spiritual world trembled, and a voice rang out, carrying the weight of divine authority. I am Thor Russell. I will annihilate the forces of evil. His words were not mere declarations, they heralded immediate action. A massive bolt of purple lightning, thick as a tree trunk, shot down from the dome and struck Cassandra with violent force. Crack! The golden ground beneath her shattered, leaving a molten crater. But before the lightning could completely consume her, Cassandra's figure reappeared a dozen meters away, her expression grim and furious. The spiritual world was no illusion. The power manifested here was real. And now, it was clear Russell truly wielded the power of Thor. If she hadn't dodged in time, that attack would have done more than injure her, it could have obliterated her entirely. The trap tightens. Realizing the danger, Cassandra made a split-second decision. She would flee the spiritual world. Fighting a godlike being here was suicidal. But as she tried to escape, she was violently repelled. Thunder erupted from every surface, the walls, the dome, and even the ground, forcing her back into the center of the temple. She groaned, staggering as she tried again, only to fail once more. No, this can't be. Cassandra's face twisted in disbelief. Russell sneered. Did you think you could come and go as you pleased? You fell for my trap, Cassandra. I've waited too long for this moment to let you leave now. The power of the Soul Hall entry activated at full intensity, amplifying Russell's spiritual energy while suppressing Cassandra's. Cassandra felt herself weakening, her spiritual power diminishing rapidly. Desperation flashed in her eyes as she lunged at Russell, her telekinetic power erupting in an attempt to crush his spiritual core. Boom! An explosion of thunder erupted from Russell's armor, repelling the attack effortlessly. Not even a scratch marred the divine armor of Thor. Russell's voice was cold, sharp as a blade. If this had been yesterday, you might have had a chance. But now, it's too late. Thunder cascaded from the dome like a relentless storm. Cassandra raised her hands, summoning a translucent barrier around herself. The spiritual shield held, but each strike of lightning drained her energy, leaving her paler and weaker. Cracks began forming on her body, spreading like spider webs. Her spiritual form, already damaged before entering, was breaking apart under the assault. Finally, a deafening scream tore from her lips as the barrier shattered. The storm consumed Cassandra, her fragmented spiritual body disintegrating under the onslaught of divine power. A new threat. Russell exhaled deeply, lowering his hand as the thunderstorm subsided. To think the once formidable Cassandra, who had nearly broken him before, could now be defeated so decisively. A flicker of disbelief passed through him. It almost feels unreal, he muttered. And then, a cold, chilling voice whispered behind him, indeed, doesn't it? Russell's pupils constricted, and his body tensed. Without hesitation, he unleashed a wave of lightning behind him. Crack! The shockwave blasted him forward, slamming him into a massive stone pillar. He groaned, shaking his head as he stood, unharmed but disoriented. When he turned, his eyes widened. Perched mockingly on his throne was a grotesque creature, a baby-like figure with pinkish-purple skin, a bulbous head, and an unnervingly small body. Charred marks from the lightning were visible on its twisted form, but it didn't seem bothered. The creature tilted its head, a malicious grin spreading across its face. I truly despise pain, it crooned. It brings back memories. Memories of my time in the womb, when my cruel twin strangled me without hesitation. The creature let out a bone-chilling wail, shaking the entire spiritual realm. Russell's heart sank. He could feel the power of the Soul Hall weakening, its grip on the spiritual world loosening. He gritted his teeth. If he didn't act fast, this twisted entity would completely unravel his advantage. The final gambit. Thunder. Russell summoned a massive bolt of lightning. It tore through the air, but the creature vanished before it could connect. Reappearing 5 meters away, the baby shrieked, "You want to kill me too? You all want to kill me." With a roar, it unleashed a telekinetic wave, repelling the flames Russell had conjured. Before it could retaliate further, another bolt of thunder struck, this time landing squarely on the creature. A horrible screech echoed as its body broke apart, splintering into 2, then 4, then dozens, then hundreds. From the shards emerged countless grotesque replicas, all resembling the baby but twisted in horrifying ways. They swarmed forward like a tide of nightmares. Russell's breath caught in his throat. What in hell is this power? For the first time, he cursed aloud, then bellowed, "Enough." A shockwave of pure sound erupted from him, freezing the abominations mid-charge. His eyes flared with power as the flames in his pupils turned to roaring thunder. The dome above split open, revealing a vortex of churning black clouds, alive with lightning. This was his trump card, his final weapon to end Cassandra's threat. Now, boom! A colossal lightning column, wider than the temple itself, crashed down from the vortex, obliterating everything in its path. When the light faded, the spiritual world was silent. On the rooftop, President Loki screamed after seeing the degree of distortion of the air, and turned his head to find shelter. Old Loki's scalp was also numb. Without hesitation, he held up a green magic barrier with both hands to block the flames. Both of them had good eyesight and knew that being burned by the flames would kill them. The surface temperature of the sun is 5,500, which is enough to vaporize the flesh and blood of humans. And the flame controlled by Russell's flame blood is higher than this. The temperature is 7,000. At this moment, it is no different from the appearance of the sun. But the next second, the sun did not expand, but collapsed inward. Russell used the power of the fireman to compress the flame, but the same ability is completely different in the hands of different people. The fireman can only barely increase a few hundred degrees. But under Russell's control, the temperature of 7,000 degrees rose straight to nearly 10,000 degrees, and the color of the flame turned blue and white. At this temperature, even steel will be vaporized instantly. 1 second later, the sun went out. There was nothing left except the suspended reality gem. Russell had been jumping and moving, and at this time the magic spider silk shot out, pulling his body back to the rooftop. President Loki immediately ran over with a flattering face. But before he opened his mouth, a dagger appeared in Russell's hand and pierced his heart directly. Faced with this very Loki behavior, the latter showed a look of astonishment, but his palm stabbed towards Russell like a knife. However, Russell just continued to slash the dagger to the right, and suddenly President Loki's left shoulder and arm were cut off. "You are that crazy woman." Old Loki immediately realized that he was possessed. The flames killed the woman's body, but her spirit escaped and possessed President Loki. At this time, President Loki no longer pretended, and a vicious smile appeared on his face. "Haha, you can't kill me, Russell." "Really?" Russell grinned sincerely and asked back. "You are waiting for Elrios, so why not guess what I am waiting for?" Cassandra blinked, not quite understanding. Seeing this, Russell grinned. "It seems that you are not as smart as you think. The so-called 3 seconds to kill you is actually a lie. I just let you deliberately delay time and not escape, otherwise I really can't do anything to you." Cassandra suddenly thought of something and screamed. "Impossible, I'm not dead yet." Russell grinned grimly. "No, half of you is dead. You chose it, idle." Entry loading completed. X ability, mind power, incomplete, purple gold. Powerful mental power, can be controlled at will, with the power of telekinesis. Can mentally leave the body, possess, split, and repair cells. Erase weakness, strip Cassandra of her madness. Instantly, the power of the mind burst out and swept away, tightly wrapping the brain of Loki. Russell's method is very simple. As long as Cassandra's mental power is blocked from leaving the brain, the other party will die with the body. This is the weakness shown by Cassandra in Deadpool 3, and it is also the only way to kill the other party at present. Loki's eyes finally panicked. She wanted to get out of this body, but her brain was completely blocked by the power of the mind. And what's more desperate is, originally, the half of her mental power she lost could fight against herself. Now with Russell's own mental power, there is no need to think about it. At this time, no matter how it hits, it will not move at all. She has no way to escape. Any last words? Russell looked into Loki's eyes, as if he could see the twisted face deep in his pupils. Cassandra did not beg for mercy. After vomiting blood, she showed a crazy smile. "Death is just an eternal sleep for me. And you, my successor. I curse you to never have peace. I will hover in your mind every midnight. I will make you the next me. Ha ha ha." She laughed hysterically, without any fear of death. Russell showed a mocking look at this, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. "It's a pity to disappoint you. Don't you feel that there is no madness in my spiritual power?" Cassandra was stunned, and then felt it. The next second, the smile on her face disappeared, and turned into impotent rage. "No, no, how can you give up that madness? You don't know how cruel and boring this world is. There is only madness." Puff. The voice stopped abruptly. Russell crushed Loki's neck directly, and said with disgust, "Noisy, let you talk endlessly." After the voice fell, he turned his head and looked forward. Old Loki had stood on the edge of the building without knowing when, facing the incoming Elrios and laughing. "I won't run away this time. Let's go, Thor. Staying here is my glorious mission." After the voice fell, a dazzling green light burst out from the palm of his hand, and then soared into the sky. Boom! The golden palace in my memory rose from the ground, and this moment was perfectly reproduced, without a single millimeter difference. Thunderbolts were mixed in, as if summoned by Thor. Russell sighed as he watched this scene. Although he had seen it on the screen before, it was far less shocking than seeing it with his own eyes. Old Loki wandered around all his life, but he always remembered what his home looked like. At this moment, it was as if I was completely in Asgard. But Russell looked at the furious Elrios who failed to devour the Asgard building and said lightly, "I don't like tragic things." As soon as the voice fell, a portal opened out of thin air under his feet. Russell fell into it, and at the same time, 2 purple magic spider silks shot out from it. Old Loki let out a very Loki-like ah and was dragged into it with the reality stone. The next second, the moment Elrios devoured it, the portal closed. Only the furious roar echoed in the ruins of the city. Elrios' weakness was glaringly obvious. As long as one hid deep underground, the monstrous time beast couldn't locate its prey. Deep within a cave, old Loki sat on the ground, his expression a mixture of confusion and disappointment. He had prepared himself for death, for glory, and had shouted his defiance into the heavens. Yet, after all that, nothing happened. The awkward silence lingered before old Loki turned to Russell and asked, "Thor, if I had died just now, would I have made it to Valhalla?" Russell, still examining the reality stone in his hand, didn't bother to look up as he replied, "The void is outside the real dimensions. You wouldn't end up in Valhalla. More likely, you'd land in some chaotic corner of existence or be swallowed by Elrios, leaving nothing behind." Old Loki blinked, visibly shaken, his dreams of a noble death shattered. A system update. Meanwhile, Russell's mind buzzed with system notifications. Entry looting complete. Spell, portal, purple already acquired. Merging. Merged successfully. Portal creation speed, significantly increased. Note, this entry can be further upgraded. X ability, mind power, incomplete, purple gold detected. Merging. Fusion complete. X ability, mind power, gold unlocked. The new description flashed before his eyes. Mind power, gold far surpasses Professor X's telepathy. Enhanced spirit body resilience. Advanced telekinesis. Ability to invade others' mental realms by touch. Mental projection, possession, cellular splitting, and full regeneration from a single cell. Weakness erasure, can strip madness or other psychological conditions. Russell smirked. The upgraded ability wasn't just powerful, it was a game changer. The secret of Cassandra's immortality. As Russell studied the entry, he began to piece together Cassandra's strategy. Her seemingly endless resurrections weren't just spiritual. She had perfected a fallback mechanism. As long as a single cell of her body remained hidden, she could regenerate completely, her spirit returning to a reborn body. If she hadn't underestimated him, waiting arrogantly for Elrios to arrive, Russell might never have found a way to end her. Still, this power wasn't invincible. Against a mage or psychic with enough strength, even Cassandra's spirit could be attacked and destroyed. Russell wasn't greedy. No ability was perfect, and this one was already extraordinary. The system wasn't done yet. New entry acquired, magic talent, advanced, purple. Cassandra excelled in secret magic, spells, and witchcraft, with exceptional natural talent. Note, this entry stacks with the knowledge curse ability. Once loaded, your mystical aptitude will improve further. Russell chuckled, unable to hide his satisfaction. Cassandra's demise had yielded far more than he anticipated. This entry alone could open doors, perhaps even to Camartage itself. He mentally thanked his luck. If Cassandra had mastered teleportation spells beyond the basics of Doctor Strange, even with his abilities, defeating her would have been far more challenging. After loading the entries, Russell turned his attention back to the reality stone in his hand. Its power was immense but came at a cost. Modifying reality required a proportional sacrifice. Thanos had circumvented this limitation using the Space Stone for energy and the Infinity Gauntlet as a conduit. Without these, the stone was far less practical. For now, Russell decided it was best to keep the reality stone as a collectible, saving it for when he truly needed it. Old Loki's contribution. Russell shifted his gaze to Old Loki, who squirmed uncomfortably under the scrutiny. Despite his unease, Old Loki handed over his knowledge of illusion magic. He shared the complete structure of the spells, detailed their difficulties, and offered insights from his lifetime of practice. Russell, with his enhanced mental abilities, memorized everything effortlessly. After over 10 hours of discussion, Russell couldn't help but marvel. Illusion magic has been wasted in Loki's hands, he thought. Beyond mere deception, advanced illusion magic could control shadows. Enable teleportation. Create mental illusions. Disguise oneself flawlessly. At its peak, this magic could even transform illusions into reality, summoning constructs as powerful as the world serpent Hormungandr. Properly wielded, it rivaled Asgard's greatest magical feats. Old Loki sighed as he concluded his explanation. Thor, I don't know why you want to learn this spell, but let me warn you, it's incredibly difficult. Most Loki can't even master the basics, and those who can rarely pursue it further because of its complexity. Even I have spent my entire life to reach my current level. My advice? Stick to your hammer. The implication was clear. This Thor, like most, was probably a magic idiot. However, over the following days, Russell shattered Old Loki's expectations. Day 1, Russell mastered phantom invisibility with ease. Day 5, he could control shadows with precision. Day 10, he began creating small, convincing illusions. Day 16, he succeeded in phantom teleportation, a feat that had taken Old Loki 70 years. By day 25, Old Loki was in complete disbelief, muttering, "Impossible. Absolutely impossible." His pride as a lifelong practitioner of illusion magic had been thoroughly dismantled. 25 days? Just 25 days? In that short time, Russell's mastery of illusion magic had skyrocketed from basic entry-level spells to advanced techniques like controlling shadows, instant phantom teleportation, and even creating large-scale illusions far more intricate and realistic than Old Loki's. At this moment, Old Loki sat frozen in disbelief, his mind refusing to accept what he was seeing. This has to be Cassandra's trick. I must still be under her control, he thought. But no matter how much he tried to convince himself otherwise, the harsh truth stared him in the face. It's fake? It has to be fake. Ha 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 ha. Old Loki's laugh was strained, bordering on hysteria. It's real, Loki. You have to face reality, Russell said, placing a comforting hand on Old Loki's shoulder. His voice carried an infuriating sincerity as he added, I just have a better talent for magic. The words hit like a hammer. Old Loki felt his chest tighten, and for a moment, he thought he might pass out from sheer frustration. Better talent? If you're just better, then what am I? A 2,600-year-old fool who's been wasting his life. The thought was almost too much to bear. Russell, noticing Loki's state, blinked innocently and refrained from further teasing. He decided not to provoke the old man any further. In truth, Russell's progress could have been even faster if he hadn't prioritized perfecting his skills. With his stacked magic talents, he felt his ability was approaching that of a baseline Doctor Strange. But even with his talents, Russell hit a wall. If the difficulty of creating convincing illusions was a 10, the difficulty of making those illusions real was a 1000. The gap was astronomical. Lacking sufficient magical knowledge and deeper insights into the mystical arts only made the challenge harder. Continuing to practice blindly was pointless. Russell began to think deeply about his next move. With the time tablet now cracked, Russell had a potential plan. Perhaps Camartage was the next logical stop. But he quickly dismissed the idea. While Camartage was important, there were more pressing priorities. In the days that followed, Russell relocated with the Wolf Girl to the Moss Plains, a safer area where the local Loki was relatively harmless. Survival supplies weren't an issue, Russell simply brought them back from alternate timelines. One disappointment lingered. When he tracked down Cassandra's base the day after her death, it was already abandoned. Even Ant-Man's shell suit was gone. Luck must favor the Red Devil, Russell muttered. Otherwise, he'd have been next on Russell's hit list, for teleportation alone was an invaluable ability. The first time walk. After ensuring everything was in place, Russell embarked on his first journey through time. Time coordinates. September 26, 2017. Location, Asgard. In a quiet corner of Asgard, an orange portal shimmered into existence, and Russell stepped through. A faint green light enveloped him, transforming his appearance into that of a nondescript Asgardian. After ensuring his disguise was perfect, Russell waited. 10 minutes later, he checked the time tablet. The timeline remained stable, with no deviations or branching. The Doomsday Line is such a convenient playground, he muttered before activating invisibility. Though he couldn't recall the exact timeline of events, old Loki had mentioned that Asgard would be destroyed by the fire giant within 5 hours. Russell had no intention of confronting either Hela or Surtur head-on. Hela was effectively immortal in Asgard, and Surtur, in his Doomsday Messenger form, was capable of obliterating the realm with a single blow. No, stealth was the key. He planned to quietly pick up the spoils after the chaos unfolded. Russell theorized that if he actively participated in a character's death, his system might trigger a loot event. It had worked before, with Iron Man. So, Russell resisted the urge to raid Asgard's treasury, fearing it might disrupt the timeline and prevent Ragnarok. Instead, he waited at a high vantage point for the show to begin. Soon, Russell witnessed the dramatic events unfold. Thor, Valkyrie, and Dr. Banner returned to Asgard aboard a spaceship. Thor faced Hela and lost an eye during the battle. Banner transformed into Hulk, and Loki made a heroic save. Surtur rose from the eternal flame, transforming into a towering, 1,000-meter-high harbinger of destruction. As the fire giant raised his colossal sword to deliver the final blow, Russell made his move. Hands raised like pistols, Russell fired 2 micro-blood arrows. One arrow struck the fire giant's thigh, leaving nothing but a faint black mark. Surtur didn't even notice. The second arrow flew toward Hela's head. But just as it was about to strike, she tilted her head, avoiding it with uncanny precision. Her gaze snapped toward Russell's hidden position. "Damn little bug," she hissed. But with Surtur's sword already descending, she had no time to retaliate. Russell didn't wait for repercussions. He teleported directly to a room aboard the leader spaceship, blending seamlessly with the fleeing crowd. By the porthole, Loki noticed the refugee and frowned. His royal status made it clear that commoners should know their place. Still, he forced a polite smile and stepped aside, expecting gratitude. Instead, Russell ignored him entirely, leaving Loki bristling with indignation. Moments later, Asgard exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its final moments immortalized in cosmic glory. Thor stood solemnly by the window, murmuring, "Asgard is gone." Loki, prepared to offer some comforting words, paused when he heard a muttered complaint from Russell. "Something feels off. Why isn't there any feedback? Did it not explode completely? Fire giant, did you miss the mark?" Both Thor and Loki turned, stunned by the audacity of the remark. Thor frowned but chose to remain silent. Loki, however, was livid. "What's your name?" Loki demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. "What's your intention in saying this now?" Russell, irritated and already on edge, turned to face him. "I gave you face, didn't I?" he snapped. Unlucky. Loki had expected the man to show fear and apologize profusely. Instead, he was met with the opposite reaction. The stranger furrowed his brow in confusion, turned to Thor, and asked, "Did I hear him wrong?" Thor crossed his arms and shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. He had initially thought the stranger would apologize, at which point he'd stop Loki from taking things too far. But now, Thor saw an opportunity to assert authority in front of the refugees. Loki immediately caught on to his brother's intention and smirked. Turning back to the stranger, he plastered a forced smile on his face. "Hehe. I must have misheard you earlier. Care to repeat what you said?" As Loki spoke, a faint green glow began to flicker behind his back, magic pooling in his palm. He was ready to strike the moment the stranger dared insult him again. But Russell tilted his head, his expression thoughtful, and said, "Actually, maybe I'm saving you." Loki froze, momentarily thrown off. "Saving me?" The words made no sense. Loki's brow furrowed in confusion, and before he could respond, Russell laughed. "Don't get it?" Russell asked, his tone amused. "It's fine. You'll understand now." With that, Russell abruptly swung his arm and smacked Loki's face, slamming him against the reinforced glass of the porthole. Loki let out a yelp, sliding down the glass with a dull thud. "Ah, that familiar sensation," Russell thought with satisfaction. Thor's eyes widened in shock. While Loki wasn't the mightiest of Asgardians, he was no pushover, and yet he hadn't even been able to react before being struck. Thor's tone turned serious. Who are you? He stepped forward protectively, shielding the refugees behind him. Heimdall and Valkyrie drew their weapons, their postures tense. Russell, unfazed, smirked and said cryptically, friendly reminder, never trust the eyes given to you by a raccoon. See you next time. Before anyone could react, an orange portal appeared behind him. Russell stepped back into it just as Hulk lunged forward, missing by inches. The cabin fell silent, the bizarre scene leaving everyone stunned. Several seconds later, Thor broke the silence. I hate raccoons, he muttered. Why would I take their eyes? Ridiculous. His tone carried the conviction of someone convinced he was full of wisdom. Heimdall sighed quietly, certain that Thor didn't even know what a raccoon was. Meanwhile, Loki peeled himself off the porthole, wincing as he touched his swollen face. Where is he? The man had vanished completely, as if he had never been there. Loki's face contorted with a mix of rage and humiliation. Did I get beaten? For nothing, he muttered, his voice cracking. Voidland. Russell stepped out of the portal into the void. The spaceship incident had been a test away to see whether the people meant to die in Ragnarok would somehow end up in the void or continue along their timeline. Russell leaned against a nearby surface, replaying the events in his mind. The operation had failed. Asgard had exploded. Both Hela and Surtur were dead, and Russell had participated in the event. Yet he hadn't received any system entries. His previous assumption that simply participating in someone's death could trigger a reward was clearly wrong. Russell thought back to the first time he'd crossed over. He had killed Killian, and Killian had indirectly caused Tony Stark's death before he died. He had gained an entry from Tony Stark. The connection seemed clear. Killian was his direct kill, so the entry was guaranteed. Tony Stark's death, however, was caused by Russell's actions playing a key role. Russell muttered to himself, so it's not just about participation. I need to play a critical role in their fate. Without me, the outcome wouldn't have happened. This explained why Ragnarok hadn't worked. Even without Russell, both Hela and Surtur were destined to die. His presence hadn't made a difference. Russell smirked. I guess that rules out farming major battles like Infinity War or Endgame. Otherwise, I just have to toss in a skill and collect entries for Strange, Spider-Man, Thanos, and the Black Order. Too easy, right? The idea of repeatedly exploiting such events amused him briefly before he dismissed it. Of course, no bugs allowed, he sighed. Still, the realization wasn't entirely disappointing. It simply meant he had to rethink his strategy. Instead of waiting for the final moments of Ragnarok, he'd have to intervene earlier, altering events in a way that made his role decisive. But that came with its own risks. Leaving the doomsday point in the timeline could trigger a time branch. An epiphany. The mention of time branches sparked a thought in Russell's mind. When he first crossed over, the TVA hadn't come after him immediately. They only arrived after Tony Stark's death. So, it's not just about being a time traveler. The TVA responds only when someone's fate is significantly altered. Russell narrowed his eyes. That would explain why Kang couldn't locate him. The machine Kang used at the end of Loki was supposed to foresee everything, yet it hadn't detected Russell's movements. If Kang couldn't track him and the TVA only responded to specific changes, then Russell might be a unique anomaly in the timeline. Guess I'll just have to test it, he muttered, opening another portal and stepping through. The leader spaceship. Back on the ship, Loki returned to his cabin. Looking into the mirror, he winced as he touched the swollen side of his face. He had disguised himself earlier to avoid embarrassment, but now, seeing the damage only fueled his anger. Damn you, he muttered through gritted teeth. If I ever meet you again. A voice interrupted him from the shadows. Oh, and what will you do? Loki froze, his blood running cold. The sudden voice made Loki freeze in place. He slowly turned his gaze and caught sight of an unfamiliar man through the mirror, seated casually on a single sofa, a peculiar smile playing on his lips. Who are you? Loki demanded, spinning around, summoning 2 daggers to his hands in an instant. The stranger, Russell, responded with a bemused smile. You forgot me so soon, he teased, waving his left hand. Loki instinctively shielded his right cheek with a hand, his expression twisting in anger. You're the one who hit me before. How dare you show your face here again? Russell chuckled. Relax, Loki. I've had time to think about it and felt a little bad for what happened. Seeing Russell's relaxed demeanor, Loki's confidence surged. An apology? Huh? Too late for that, he sneered before charging forward with his daggers, ready to strike. Russell didn't flinch. He sighed as Loki lunged at him. Do all you Lokis only know how to fight like assassins? He asked. Why would a mage act like this? With a single, precise slap to Loki's left cheek, almost as if Loki had moved into the strike on purpose, the god of mischief was sent spinning in the air in an almost comical 720-degree twist before landing face first on the floor with a loud smack. Russell looked satisfied. He rubbed his palm, then smirked. How do you feel now? A little more balanced. Loki, both cheeks now equally swollen, shakily raised his head. He pointed a trembling finger at Russell, his voice quivering with rage. You didn't come here to apologize at all. Huh. Russell tilted his head, feigning innocence. When did I say that? Your right cheek was swollen, it just felt unfair to your left. Now they're even. Got a problem with that? Loki nearly passed out from sheer frustration. He clenched his fists, taking several deep breaths before roaring. I'll fight you again. He charged once more. Russell sighed and shook his head. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Still no originality. With a flick of his wrist, Russell shot a strand of purple energy, which struck an invisible figure. The green shimmer faded, revealing Loki terrified and visibly sweating. The illusion magic Loki had used to hide was effortlessly dispelled. Your phantom magic is embarrassingly weak, Russell commented, his voice tinged with pity. Several more strands of purple silk shot out, binding Loki and sealing his mouth. Suspended in midair, the god of mischief dangled helplessly. Russell leaned back, glancing at a strange, tablet-like device he carried. Nothing seemed to change on the screen, and he frowned thoughtfully. After a few quiet moments, he dissipated the silk gag with a thought and approached Loki, now pale and visibly panicked. Please, Loki stammered, desperation clear in his voice. My cheeks are symmetrical now, just as you wanted. Let me go. I'll do whatever you want. Russell patted Loki's cheek gently, his tone almost soothing. Don't worry so much. I told you I'm here to save you, and I meant it. Save me? Is slapping my face part of your so-called salvation? Even Hulk doesn't hit this hard? Loki forced a strained smile, afraid to anger Russell further. You're right, of course, he said nervously. Satisfied, Russell dropped his playful demeanor and spoke seriously. Loki, you're going to die soon. Do you believe me? The gravity of the statement sent a shiver down Loki's spine, though he reflexively scoffed. Hela is dead. I have no enemies, he retorted. Are you sure about that? Russell raised an eyebrow. Temple 2, does that ring a bell? The color drained from Loki's face. You mean Thanos? Russell gave a curt nod. Odin is gone. Earth's supreme sorcerer is gone. No one stands in his way now. Within a few hours, his ship will block this one, and he'll slaughter everyone on board. You'll be strangled to death, your lifeless eyes staring into the void. The calm delivery sent chills through Loki. The scenario sounded too plausible to dismiss. Seeing Loki's growing fear, Russell opened a portal with a flick of his ring, tossing Loki through it. On the other side was the rooftop of Stark Tower. Loki stared at him in shock, but Russell didn't linger. The portal snapped shut behind him. Still, the tablet in Russell's hand showed no changes. He frowned, muttering to himself. Not enough? Does it have to wait until his death is supposed to occur? Is that when the timeline branch appears? Hours passed in silence. Eventually, the hatch opened, and Loki emerged, wearing his usual green attire. Thor turned to greet him with a teasing smile. You're here, brother. Still feeling sore? Loki snorted, his pride bruised but intact. He only runs fast, nothing more. If he stayed a second longer, I'd have shown him why I'm the greatest sorcerer in the 9 realms. Thor chuckled but refrained from pointing out the obvious. Honestly, I thought you'd run. But since you're here. He paused, smirking. Perhaps the throne of Asgard. Before he could finish, Loki's expression turned serious, and he pointed behind Thor. I don't think now is the time for this discussion. Thor turned abruptly, his eyes widening at the sight of a massive spaceship eclipsing the light of a nearby star. Darkness fell. The spaceship in front of Thor was a colossal monstrosity. The Sanctuary 2 dwarfed even the grandest Asgardian ships. The Statesman, though massive by any standard, was insignificant before this star-dwarfing warship, a true behemoth in the void of space. This was not just a ship, it was a weapon of war incarnate. Suddenly, a shrill alarm blared throughout the Statesman. Warning, the spaceship has been locked by high-energy weapons. Immediate jump recommended. Warning, jump space is obstructed. Escape from the starfield is impossible. Warning, position is locked. Escape pods are non-operational. The robotic voice repeated the dire warnings as panic rippled through the ship. Thor's expression grew darker with every passing second. He clenched his fists and muttered through gritted teeth. Thanos. Though he didn't know why Sanctuary 2 was targeting them, Thor knew one thing, Thanos was not here to offer aid. Loki, go organize the evacuation, Thor began, but his voice faltered. His gaze locked onto Loki, who was ignoring him entirely. Instead, Loki stood by the porthole, one hand raised toward the massive enemy ship. Loki, what are you? Before Thor could finish, the starry expanse outside the window ignited in an intense burst of light. Thor's pupils contracted as he witnessed a sight that defied belief. A flaming sword, hundreds of meters long, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, descending like a meteor from the heavens. Its fiery edge crashed into Sanctuary 2 with apocalyptic force. The impact was immense. Even through the porthole, the sheer energy of the collision made Thor's heart race. A hexagonal shield flared to life around Sanctuary 2, absorbing most of the sword's devastating power. Dazzling sparks erupted from the clash, and the enormous warship tilted slightly from the strike. Then, a column of purple energy burst from Sanctuary 2, colliding with the flaming sword. The fiery weapon exploded into fragments, scattering into the void. Loki, or so Thor thought, lowered his hand, looked at it briefly, and vanished into thin air. Thor stood frozen, disbelief etched into his face. Such magic? Loki, are you truly the greatest sorcerer in the 9 realms? But his awe quickly turned to anger. Loki had fled again. Coward? Thor seethed. He always runs when the odds are against him. Shaking off his frustration, Thor slammed a button on the control panel and shouted into the ship's communication system. Asgardians, prepare for battle. Minutes later, chaos reigned. The Statesman was a burning wreck. Bloodied bodies littered the corridors, and fires raged unchecked. Thor, battered and bloodied, knelt amidst the carnage. Around him were the corpses of his people his failure laid bare. Ebony Maw strode forward, kneeling before a towering figure clad in golden armor. Master, Maw reported grimly, the space stone is not here. The signal source has also vanished. Thanos turned slowly, his eyes settling on Thor. Without prompting, Ebony Maw used his telekinesis to force Thor onto his knees. Twisted metal wrapped around the god of thunder, restraining him. Where is the space stone? Thanos demanded, Heimdall's golden sword poised ominously near Thor's chest. Thor gritted his teeth. The truth hit him like a blow. Loki must have taken the space stone from the Asgardian vault. But now, it was too late to change anything. You'll fail, Thor spat, glaring at the Mad Titan. He's already gone. You'll never find him. And we haven't lost yet. As if on cue, a roar echoed through the ruined ship. The Hulk lunged into view, a green whirlwind of rage. But hope quickly faded. Hulk attacked. Hulk defended. Hulk was beaten. The Mad Titan's calculated brutality left Hulk a crumpled, broken shadow of his former self. Despair took root in Thor's heart as he watched his last hope crumble. Nearby, Heimdall prepared to use the Bifrost to save Hulk. Thanos removed his helmet, tossing it aside as he surveyed the aftermath. The space stone isn't here, he mused, his voice calm and cold. Kill them all. Turning to Ebony Maw, he added, issue a bounty for Loki across the galaxy. He can't escape. The order left no room for doubt. Loki's trickery was as predictable to Thanos as the sunrise. But then, something unexpected happened. A voice rang out from the shadows. Ah, so the time branch only triggers when we reach the death node. Interesting. Thanos turned sharply toward the sound. Even Ebony Maw, master of telekinesis, was caught off guard. His psychic senses detected nothing, just empty air. A figure emerged from the shadows, clad in a green windbreaker. Loki. Thor's initial relief turned to dread. It's over. Loki can't possibly protect the space stone. But Thanos frowned, his sharp gaze narrowing. Who are you? The figure smirked. You think you know Loki well, don't you? But this time, you've misjudged? The man shook his head. I'm on a tight schedule, so let's skip the explanations. The air shimmered green as his disguise dissipated. It wasn't Loki at all. It was Russell. He pointed a hand lazily at Ebony Maw. You're too ugly. Let's fix that first. Ebony Maw sneered. Arrogant human? Master, allow me. Crack. Before he could finish, his neck snapped violently. His lifeless body crumpled to the floor. Thor's jaw dropped. Ebony Maw's psychic powers were formidable, yet he had been dispatched in an instant. Obsidian roared in fury, leaping toward Russell with his massive hammer raised high. Thor winced. Even he couldn't withstand such a blow. But Russell simply clenched his fist. In an instant, the 3-meter-tall warrior was crushed. His hammer folded into a perfect metal sphere, and blood splattered onto the deck. Thor's scalp prickled. This thing was no ordinary being. Russell's voice broke the tense silence. Thanos, he said, his tone almost bored, you've got 48 seconds left to struggle. Thanos put his helmet back on, ignoring the fallen bodies of Ebony Maw and Obsidian. At that moment, his eyes burned not with fear, but with a searing, unstoppable fire. A low voice echoed through the cabin. How naive. You, young Aesir, are cursed with knowledge just like me. Then you must understand how strong I've become after 1,000 years of life. With those words, Thanos crushed the alloy ground beneath his feet and charged toward Russell like a cannonball. Russell's mind surged, and his telekinesis exploded into action. Thor suddenly felt as though he were encased in invisible amber, his body completely frozen, unable to move. But in his field of vision, he saw Thanos roar as a purple gem on his gauntlet flared to life. Purple energy surged outward, spreading through his body. Thanos ignored any resistance and leapt toward Russell, closing the distance in just a few strides. Die! Thanos roared, unleashing a punch that created a sonic boom as it cut through the air. Russell knew that telekinesis alone wouldn't tear apart a Titan's body, so he used it to create resistance. But what Thanos did next took him by surprise. The Mad Titan had used the power gem to enhance his strength, channeling it directly into his body for a devastating attack. It was clear, Thanos wasn't as confident as he seemed. The ease with which Russell had dispatched Ebony Maw and Obsidian had shaken the Dark Titan. But Russell didn't underestimate the punch powered by the gem. Despite his own enhanced strength and Aesir blood, he knew a direct hit from the power gem was something to respect. He quickly formed a plan. He crossed his hands in front of him, flipped them, and pushed forward. Golden lines flickered into existence, forming a shimmering shield. Seraphim shield. Boom! The magic shield collapsed instantly, shattered by Thanos' punch before it even had time to hold. But that brief moment was enough. Using his telekinesis, Russell shifted his body to the side, dodging the attack. Blood poured from his hand and coalesced into a blade of molten lava, which he swung toward Thanos' neck. Thor watched in horror. If the strike were aimed at him, he knew he wouldn't be able to dodge it and would have to rely on his body to block it. But in the next moment, he saw Thanos twist his body with unnatural speed, dodging the blow and kicking Russell aside. Bang! The kick shattered the alloy wall, revealing the circuits inside, sparks flying everywhere. Russell, however, ignored gravity and crouched midair, effortlessly dodging the attacks with his spider sense. He looked down at Thanos, grinning. 36 seconds left. As his words rang out, a green light flared in his eyes. The shadow beneath Thanos' feet seemed to come alive, splitting into more than a dozen dark, writhing tentacles that wrapped around the Mad Titan's legs. Thor's eyes widened in disbelief. He recognized this magic. Phantom magic? How could this person wield it with such mastery? This was beyond even Loki's capabilities. Thanos scoffed, glancing down at the tendrils. It's just weak magic, he declared. With a grunt of effort, he twisted his legs, shattering the shadowy tentacles as they returned to their original forms. But Russell smiled, unfazed. He extended his hands, summoning 2 flaming swords, and leaped down to strike. Thanos, grimacing, met the attack head-on. A mage dares to fight me in close combat, he sneered. He didn't retreat but instead powered up his gauntlet, purple energy flooding the air as he blasted upward with all his might. But then, Thanos' expression froze. The fist meant to destroy a spaceship penetrated through his opponent's body like a phantom, turning into a green light that dissipated into the air. At the same time, a voice sounded from behind him, cold and taunting. You're right. Why should I, a mage, fight you in close combat? The shadow magic was just a distraction. Thanos' eyes widened in shock as he turned to retaliate. But before he could react, his arm froze in midair, paralyzed by an unseen force. A chilling hand plunged into his skull, sinking deep. Cassandra, if she were here, would never have been able to perform such an act. The destructive energy of the power gem would have corroded her palm before she could even touch him. But Russell, thanks to his Aesir bloodline, was immune to that energy. Without hesitation, he pulled Thanos' consciousness into the spiritual realm. Thor watched, his scalp prickling at the sight. He couldn't even fathom what it would feel like to have a hand thrust into his brain. Then, the unimaginable happened. In less than a second, Thanos' eyes snapped shut, and his body crumpled to the floor. Thor felt like he had witnessed a childhood story come to life, one of the dark wizards his mother used to warn him about. Russell stood over the fallen titan, staring at his now lifeless body. He had killed Thanos' consciousness in the spiritual world. What he didn't expect was the immense strength that lay within the titan, which had required significant effort to overcome. Minutes had passed in the spiritual realm, though in reality, only a fraction of a second had passed. 15 seconds left. Thanos, you lose. With those words, Russell summoned the Sword of Vishanti, plunging it into the titan's skull. He then shot a thread of magic silk to claim the Infinity Gauntlet, wrapping it around his hand. At that moment, something caught his attention. He pulled out the time tablet and activated it. The timeline was branching rapidly, and a red warning flashed before his eyes. Russell frowned. Was the anomaly caused by Thanos' death, or by taking the time gem itself? No time to worry about it now. 3 seconds later, he heard the successful plunder notification. Without hesitation, he opened a portal to the time and space gate. Before he left, he glanced at Thor. For the Aesir's sake, my advice is to leave immediately. As for whether you listen to it, that's up to you. With a flick of his wrist, he opened a portal to Kamartaj and stepped through. The gate closed behind him. Thor stood, bewildered, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. Then, the portal, still shimmering with golden sparks, suddenly turned blue. A woman stepped through, looking at the scene before her. Well, what a bright bald head, Thor muttered without thinking. The newcomer glanced at Thanos' body, her expression turning grim. What a mess. Meanwhile, in the void, Russell stared at the closed time and space gate, feeling a twinge of confusion. He could have sworn he saw the portal flicker blue just as he left, and he thought he saw a bald head. It looked like the Ancient One. But wasn't she dead by now? His intention had been to stir up trouble for the TVA, but now something felt off. Russell didn't care, though. In fact, he welcomed the chaos. The TVA and Kong the Conqueror were about to face a massive headache. He casually dropped the Infinity Gauntlet and began reviewing the spoils of his actions. Russell checked with his mind, and the first entry was Ebony Maw's. Telekinesis, blue-purple. Different from telekinesis, it is a simple manipulation of objects with thoughts. It can also create telekinetic spikes to torture the mind. Note, this ability can be combined with telekinesis. Bewitching, blue. Cleverly use the power of language to break through the psychological defense line, persuade, seduce and control others, with a certain probability of failure. Knowledge reserve, purple. Possess a lot of mechanical knowledge, cosmic common sense, and galactic geographical information. Russell showed a look of surprise. He knew about telekinesis, but he didn't expect the other party to explode other gold coins. Bewitching is a good ability. Knowledge reserve is a complete surprise. He lacks this, which can make up for the lack of walking on the timeline. However, the next entry of Black Dwarf is a bit ordinary. Strong, blue. With 15 tons of strength, the skin can defend against most physical damage. This entry seems good, but strength is not a direct addition. Instead, it increases the density of flesh, blood, and bones. Otherwise, if you repeatedly brush this entry, the strength will be 100 million tons, and the body will be invincible. With Russell's current physical fitness, it is only a slight enhancement. It is better than nothing. Warhammer expertise, white. Proficient in using various Warhammer weapons. Well, this is basically useless. At this time, Russell looked at the most anticipated harvest this time, Titan blood, gold. The blood gene from the Eternals? Possessing super strength, endurance, recovery ability, resistance to blows, toughness, and agility. It has a considerable degree of resistance to cold, heat, electricity, radiation, poison, aging, disease, and magic. It is immune to mental interference, bewitching, and mind control to a certain extent. It can survive in space without eating anything. Weakness erasure. After loading, there will be no alien manifestations, such as purple skin, swollen body, buttocks, and chins. Russell couldn't help smacking his lips, and sighed in his heart what kind of buff monster this is. No wonder this guy can resist the energy corrosion of the power gem. At the same time, I also understand why it is so difficult to kill even if it is pulled into the spiritual world. This is simply an invincible hexagonal warrior? If it weren't for the trick on the opponent, it would really be impossible to kill the opponent in 48 seconds. And this is not over yet. The system shows that after loading the entry, the temperature of the desperate virus has increased again, reaching 9,000. Russell looked at this only growth term at present and thought that he might become a human-shaped sun one day in the future. 15 million degrees might not be a dream. At this time, the void had already reached night. Russell did not continue the plan. He was not an iron. People need to rest when they need to. Then I went to the timeline to have a big meal and brought back the iced cola that the little wolf girl liked. After the meal, it was time to have enough energy. It has been 24 hours since we last had a sparring match. It is time to exercise. The situation is the same as before. The little wolf girl was very powerful at first, and her moves were fatal, attacking the weak points fiercely. A set of combos seemed to have made Russell unable to fight back. But as time went on, he began to lose strength. First, he was unable to do it, then he was unable to get off the tiger, and finally he was defeated and surrendered. Then it was the second battle of X-Men, the third battle of X-Men, the fourth battle of X-Men. The X-Men were defeated miserably. After more than 10 minutes, the little wolf girl recovered some of her strength and spirit. At this time, she saw that Russell was still full of energy, and she felt a little sorry. She could clearly feel that Russell's strength was getting stronger, and she could no longer compete in the whole battle and could not help him. 1v1 was completely useless. And when she thought that if there was no Russell, she would not have the comfortable life now, the life without having to face crises every day, or even the life of enjoyment, she felt even more guilty. Maybe she should find a teammate. Well, at least the kind that is worthy of him. Early morning in the void, Russell bought some breakfast and returned to the timeline. It was still the Asgard Doomsday timeline. Given the situation when he got the power gem before, he wanted to test the influence of the Infinity Gem on the time branch. He came to the Asgard treasury invisibly all the way, and he soon found the cosmic cube. There was no defense, just picked up the gem very simply and roughly. The next second, the time tablet vibrated. Russell opened it and found that the time branch had indeed appeared, and it was growing very fast. It seems that the Infinity Stones are very important to the timeline. Any changes will trigger the time branch. With a sigh, Russell put away the Rubik's Cube without hesitation. Anyway, it has been triggered, it would be a waste not to take it, and there is also the Infinity Gauntlet. And it is not that it cannot be used, just count it as a trump card. Thinking of this, Russell sighed again. If he hadn't seen how the people left behind dealt with Kong so that day, he might have already started to design TVA. It's just that the negative time energy is too terrifying. At present, he has no means to fight against it. He can only continue to increase his strength and not fight against TVA. After thinking about it, Russell still plans to start with Hela in the next entry. One is that the divine power itself is a very powerful force. Another thing is that he remembered the royal bloodline of the Aesir entry, and there is a chance to awaken divine power. If the second entry is added, perhaps this probability will increase. Confirm the idea afterwards. Russell adjusted the time and space coordinates on the time tablet 3 days forward along the time point of Ragnarok. He didn't know the coast where Hela escaped from the seal and the specific time point, but he would definitely not go wrong if he followed the plot. And he could also get the preconditional entry of the Fire Giant's non-Doomsday Messenger form. So, next he had to suffer his old friend, Asgard. Timeline 2017-09-23. Deep in Asgard. Here there was melodious music floating, a breeze with fragrance blowing, and the simulated sunshine was warm and the temperature was just right. The king of all gods, who looked old but very energetic, squinted his eyes and lay comfortably on his side on the couch. He opened his mouth from time to time, waiting for the fairy next to him to feed him the grapes tribute from Vanaheim, and listened to the performance of the Asgard band. Until a man with a totem tattooed on his head ran up in panic. He suddenly stopped and knelt on one knee, saying in panic, "God, God King." Odin opened his eyes, and a trace of displeasure at being disturbed flashed in his eyes, but he still slowly sat up from the couch, trying to look serious, and said in a majestic voice, "Skulk, didn't I ask you to guard the Rainbow Bridge? You left your post without permission, do you know your crime?" Skulk was sweating and said nervously, "Yes, there is an urgent report." Odin stood up suddenly. "Is Thor back?" After saying that, he knew something was wrong. Facing the gazes around him, he coughed dryly and reorganized his words. "My reckless eldest son is back." Skulk shook his head quickly. Odin felt much more relaxed, sat back and said with a smile, "In that case, you can go back if you have nothing else." In his opinion, there was nothing urgent besides this. Seeing him like this, Skulker was so anxious that he quickly said, "It's not Thor, it's Loki." Odin stood up again and said in shock, "What the hell?" Hearing this, the guards, nobles, and performers looked over again. Odin didn't care about other people's expressions this time, and asked again hurriedly, "You're not mistaken, Loki Odinson is back." The people around him were confused. What do you mean? Loki has other sons besides Odinson. And isn't he dead? The opera arranged for him has been performed hundreds of times. Skulk smiled bitterly. It was indeed the second prince. He suddenly appeared in the Rainbow Bridge and is coming this way now. I ran here through another road. He knew the secret of Odin in front of him, and that was why he got the position of guardian, to read the exciting novels, go to Falu Novel Network. So, he was also very shocked by Loki's appearance. Odin. Loki frowned, not understanding why. He had thought that Thor would come back, or even Odin would come back. But he never thought that Loki would come back. He was here, and the one who came was definitely fake. I just don't know why the other party pretended to be me. After thinking about it, he decided to command the Asgard guards to capture the other party. But it would definitely not work to capture him directly. After all, except for Skulker, none of the people present knew that the other party was fake. If one of them is not handled well, he might be exposed. The next second, Odin sat back down, looked at Skulker and smiled. It seems that our god of Trickster is very lucky to have survived the disaster. Thor just made a mistake before. It just so happens that I miss this second son very much. You go and lead him, and tell him that I, Beef, want to meet him in the temple. Skulker was a little confused, but he still ran down hurriedly as ordered. Odin then looked at the people around him and smiled. I will not accompany you from now on. Order the God King's guards, civilians, and nobles to gather. I will meet Loki in the temple. Everyone saluted and left. Odin nodded and left quickly with his guards. A few minutes later, in the Golden Temple, hundreds of God King's guards in golden armor stood on both sides, with civilians slightly away from the throne and nobles close to it. Odin sat on the throne, and everyone waited for Loki to come. On the Rainbow Bridge, Skulk was sweating again. Before, he was worried that Loki, who suddenly appeared, would see Odin before him, but when he walked back, he found that the other party was standing in the middle of the Rainbow Bridge. And he looked up at the direction of the waterfall on the edge of Asgard in the distance, motionless, as if he saw something. It is still like this until now. Your Highness, the second prince, is the God King summoning you. He couldn't help but urge again. Loki was naturally Russell in disguise. He has become Loki so well that Odin might find it difficult to tell. The reason why he didn't leave was because he really saw something. The World Tree? That was not a normal tree body, but a dreamlike huge branch of colorful energy that almost occupied the entire field of vision. Very spectacular, and this is only part of it. But, Russell glanced at the useless guardian beside him. This guy was sweating and anxious, and obviously couldn't see this scene. Am I the only one who can see it? Why is this? At this time, Russell suddenly saw a branch of the World Tree hanging down like water, spreading towards him. He instinctively raised his hand to block it, but found that the ladder was straight and then sank into his body. At the same time, the system's voice suddenly sounded. Warning, alien energy invasion detected. This energy is a gift from the World Tree. Warning cancelled? Russell blinked his eyes. What is the gift from the World Tree? And he didn't feel any changes in his body. At this time, he suddenly found that the World Tree in his eyes gradually dimmed and then disappeared completely. It seemed to have left the current reality dimension. No, or it should be that the other party returned to the dimension where he was. Russell still didn't understand why this happened, and why he didn't come here at the Doomsday time point last time. After thinking about it, he gave up thinking. Maybe he would have a chance to ask Odin later. Skulk was almost going crazy, and finally saw Loki turn around. What did you just say? Russell asked. He had just focused on the World Tree and didn't notice what the other person said. Skulk quickly replied. Your Highness, the second prince, the God King is waiting for you in the temple. Russell raised his eyebrows. Then what are you waiting for? Let's go. Yes. Skulk forced a smile, not daring to say anything more, and quickly led the way. A few minutes later, Russell strode into the temple, and didn't stop until he reached the bottom of the throne. Almost everyone in the temple looked over, with curiosity in their eyes. After all, before this, Odin had said that Loki had died to save him. On the high platform, Odin stood up with a loving smile on his face and said, Loki Odinson, my second son. You don't know how much I missed you in the past 3 years. After all, Thor told me that you were dead. He was not in a hurry and planned to expose this fake step by step. When the time comes, he will not have to do it himself. However, the next second, he saw Loki pointing at him angrily and shouting, Shut up, you fake. Odin was stunned. What the hell is this? You, a fake, call me a fake? Before he could react, Russell shouted to the people of Asgard under the altar. People of the King of Gods, you have been deceived. He is not Odin at all. He is a fake. In the crowd, both nobles and civilians were in an uproar. The King of Gods guards raised their spears, but aimed at Russell. They were loyal to Odin and would not doubt him because of a word. Loki, who was disguised as Odin, also reacted at this time, and immediately stood up and shouted, Guards, take down this lunatic, he is definitely not Loki. After receiving the order, hundreds of guards came out together. Move. Russell was not panicked at all. He just raised his head and grinned at Odin. Seeing this smile, Loki's heart trembled for no reason and he had a bad feeling. He could only drink a few more times to boost his courage and let the guards catch him quickly. However, just when the guards of the God King wanted to catch the imposter, a green light suddenly flashed and the other party's body disappeared strangely. Seeing this scene, Loki's scalp suddenly numbed. He knew what this was too well. Illusion magic? This is an illusion, the other party is not there at all. Just then, a smiling voice suddenly sounded behind him. Tisk tisk, you can't even see through your own magic. Loki almost screamed in fear, and then he felt something on his neck. This time he didn't need to look at him to know what it was. Dagger? My own dagger? Illusion magic, invisibility, dagger. For a moment, Loki felt that he was a fake. The Asgardians under the throne were in a panic. No one expected that this fake Loki who suddenly appeared would dare to kidnap Odin. But why did the opponent's spell look so familiar? Just then, an even more shocking scene appeared. That Loki wiped Odin's face, and suddenly with a burst of green light, the Supreme God King turned into a person he had never seen before. At this moment, no matter how stupid the Asgardians were, they knew that the previous Odin was fake. The real Odin could not be kidnapped. This man didn't even dare to resist a dagger? The crowd was in an uproar. Looking at the expressions of the people below, Loki touched his face in panic, and his face turned pale and he almost fainted. He quickly shouted, "No, I'm not fake. No, I'm not Odin, I'm Loki. You have to believe me." Russell slapped him skillfully. "Your name is Loki, then who am I? You despicable fake." The 3-year period had finally come. The exiled prince of the gods returned, a master of magic. He defeated the evil, false god king like a god descending from the heavens, exposed the villain's conspiracy, and made an immense contribution to the safety of Asgard. Well, this was the most popular version of the tale spreading across the gods' domain today. In the underground cell, Russell had generously arranged a private room for the villain of this story. Yet, the occupant sat huddled in a corner, pale and trembling, clearly unappreciative of the gesture. Russell approached with a smile. "Don't be so frightened," he said lightly. "Believe me, all of this is for your salvation." Loki, nursing his swollen left cheek, found Russell's words far from convincing. "What are you planning?" he asked warily. Russell didn't answer directly. He crouched before Loki, his smile both kind and unnerving. "Come now," Russell said, "do you want to tell me where Odin is hiding, or should I find out for myself?" He raised a hand, fingers flexing menacingly. Loki flinched, blurting out, "Don't hit me, I'll tell you. He's at the Green Park nursing home in New York," Loki confessed hastily. "I don't know the exact address, but it's in Brooklyn." Russell nodded, then sighed, patting Loki's shoulder. "Since you're so cooperative, I'll share something with you," Russell said, his tone almost tender. "Odin still thinks of you as his son." With that, Russell left, leaving Loki in stunned silence. The Rainbow Bridge. Russell turned to Skulk, who was gripping the golden sword with trembling hands. "Have you located Thor yet?" Skulk, sweating profusely, stammered, "Almost there. Just give me a moment. The land of fire is full of fire, and visibility is terrible." After several tense minutes, Skulk's face lit up. "I found him," he exclaimed. "He's in a cave, facing some kind of monster. It has sparks all over it." Russell remained unbothered. "Oh, that's Surtur," he said calmly, "the harbinger of Ragnarok in Asgardian legend." "What?" Skulk nearly dropped the sword, his face a mask of terror. "Prince Loki," Skulk stammered, "is the legend true?" Russell smacked Skulk's head lightly. "Relax," he said dryly. "You won't die this time. Now, open the bridge." Though visibly shaken, Skulk obeyed, activating the Rainbow Bridge. Muspelheim, the land of fire. Muspelheim was a hellish realm, alive with flames, magma, and terrifying fire beasts. Here, fire demons roamed alongside burning undead skeletons, sleeping fire dragons, and other horrors. Amid this fiery chaos stood Surtur, the flame giant, his voice a guttural rumble. "I am the king of fire, the eternal doom of Asgard." Thor, imprisoned in a fiery cage, groaned as the floor opened beneath him. Suspended by chains, he twisted awkwardly until he saw his captor. Well, Thor grinned, his bravado undiminished. "Surtur, you magma-forged bastard? Still alive, are you? I thought my father killed you 500,000 years ago." Surtur sneered, his fiery eyes narrowing. "You Asgardians excel at boasting," he growled. "Odin must be long dead, or he would never have sent a brat like you." Thor's grin widened. "Odin won't die, not even if you burn him to ashes," he retorted. Suddenly, the cave shook as a torrent of vibrant energy tore through the dome. The Rainbow Bridge shimmered into view, and out stepped a familiar figure. "Loki!" Thor shouted in disbelief. "You're alive." Russell, holding Loki by the collar, rushed forward and grabbed Thor. "Oh no, Thor," he said with mock sorrow. "Dad is gone." Thor's jaw dropped. "What? Missing?" Russell clarified, his tone flat. "Not dead." Thor blinked, his shock giving way to a faint glimmer of hope. "Missing? Not dead. Did I stutter?" Russell said with exasperation. "Now, let's focus on the matter at hand." The confrontation with Surtur escalated quickly. The flame giant unleashed a fiery attack, but Loki's unexpected mastery of magic turned the tide. Summoning a radiant, flaming sword of golden light, Loki struck down Surtur with precision and power that left Thor dumbfounded. As Surtur crumbled into glowing embers, Thor stared at his brother in awe. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Since when did you become this?" Loki, nonchalant as ever, picked up Surtur's crown and glanced at Thor. "Try not to lose your hair next time," he quipped. Thor touched his scorched scalp, groaning in despair. "My hair? My beard? My eyebrows?" Russell ignored the lamentations. "If you're done mourning your grooming, Odin's waiting." Back on Earth, the two brothers arrived at the site of the Green Park nursing home, only to find it replaced by a kindergarten. Thor, now donning a hat and sunglasses, frowned. Are you sure this is the place? Loki, now the embodiment of calm confidence, studied the ground intently. There's magic here, he murmured. Thor scoffed. Magic? On the ground? All I see is chewing gum. Loki ignored him. Stand here, he instructed. Thor, determined to prove his brother wrong, stepped forward confidently and immediately fell into a hidden portal with a startled yell. Russell, smirking, stepped over the discarded business card and rang the doorbell of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Above, Doctor Strange peered through a magical mirror, startled by his unexpected visitor. Loki, he muttered in disbelief. Downstairs, Russell smiled at the camera. 177A Bleecker Street, he said, voice dripping with irony. I hope I'm not lost, Mr. Strange. Strange's pupils shrank slightly. At this moment, he was very sure that the other party could see him through the peak spell. It was hard to imagine how high the other party's mental power must be and how sensitive he was to spells. Besides, he had never dealt with Loki before. Why did this person know him? Not only that, but the most important thing was that after he found that the Rainbow Bridge had fallen, he had used the Time Stone to peek into the future, allowing him to accurately locate Loki. But now Thor had disappeared, and this person had appeared instead. Why had the future changed? Strange took a deep breath. No matter what, this was the sanctuary of the Holy of Holies. Even if Loki was strange, he was confident he could handle him. In that case, it was better to meet and clear up the doubts. With this thought, Strange manipulated the space using the energy of the sanctuary, folding and replacing spatial positions. Russell raised an eyebrow as the surrounding environment changed instantly. During the movement, he could clearly feel the changes in space. The folding, displacement, and resetting were all real-world operations based on the mirror dimension. It was both extremely difficult and exquisitely precise. Russell felt that his understanding of space had suddenly improved, thanks to his spiritual sensitivity and perception. Instinctively, he snapped his fingers. Within the space window, Strange floated midair, adopting a mystical master gesture, ready to launch a surprise attack on Loki. But then, he saw Loki, who had just been moved to the second floor, suddenly show an expression of realization. Then, the other party raised his hand and snapped his fingers. In an instant, familiar spatial fluctuations occurred. Strange watched as Loki's body vanished and, following a hunch, turned to look below through the window. Sure enough, the other party had returned to his original position. This is outrageous, Strange muttered, touching his nose. Not only had he failed to impress, but the other party had seemingly gained significant insights. The trick of space transfer that had taken him years to master was learned by Loki in one demonstration. This was a complete loss. At that moment, spatial fluctuations occurred again, and Loki appeared right in front of him. Good afternoon, Mr. Strange, Russell greeted politely. Strange sniffed, clearly unhappy, and replied calmly, not Mr. Strange, Dr. Strange. Of course. According to custom, the Asgardians should call me the Sorcerer Supreme, Strange added. Russell smiled and countered, what about the Frost Giants, Dr. Strange? Strange scrutinized him and replied solemnly, that depends on the other party. Russell chuckled. Don't be so serious, Mr. Holmes. You should know why Thor and I are here on Earth. Strange, annoyed at being called 3 different names in such a short span, said nothing. Instead, he manipulated space again, transporting them to a tea room with a wave of his hand. Tea, he offered. Strange shook his head and quipped, no, it might be too hot for you. How about iced cola? Russell smiled, tapped the coffee table, and said, no need to be so formal. I like to help myself. A bottle of Chivas Regal whiskey appeared on the table. That's my 63-year-old limited edition whiskey. Strange muttered, suppressing his anguish. You're welcome, Russell said nonchalantly, pouring a glass for each of them. Strange, feeling the irritation bubbling within him, drank in one gulp. You're welcome, he echoed resentfully. Russell nodded, while Strange took a deep breath, deciding to cut to the chase. As the Sorcerer Supreme, I monitor people and things from other worlds because they may pose a threat to this one, Strange began seriously. Thor and I are here to find Odin. There's no need for suspicion, I bear no ill will towards Earth, Russell interrupted, his tone calm yet firm. Strange hesitated before replying, I met Odin. He's awakened from the spell but chose self-exile. He's resolute and doesn't want to be disturbed. Russell pressed, the God King's body is nearing its limit. He doesn't have many days left. If he's in Midgard, it could lead to a major diplomatic incident. Strange stood abruptly, his tone solemn. Camartage respects personal conflicts within families. We don't interfere. But I'll take you to him. Russell glanced at him approvingly but reminded, let's not forget Thor. Oh, right, Strange said, conjuring a portal. Seconds later, a scream rang out as Thor tumbled through. Ah! With a loud crash, Thor landed hard on the floor. Russell glanced at the shattered tiles and asked dryly, does Asgard compensate for damages? Strange stared at his broken Italian floor tiles, wincing, before shaking his head. Thor dusted himself off and exclaimed, brother, you were right. That spot was magical. Russell smiled faintly. Strange, now eager to conclude this meeting, used a spell to locate Odin on a Norwegian beach and opened another portal. Without saying goodbye, he sent Thor and Loki through.